Chapter 1 began with Kyusuke sitting slumped on a seat, his expression worn after being kicked out of the house. Rue realized that he was homeless, and Kyusuke confirmed it. His mother had told him to leave because he did not have a job, and he supposed that was what happened when someone reached 30 without work. Even so, he could not really blame her. With a sigh, he admitted that he did not have the money to live on his own and did not know what to do. Rue then asked him to marry her. The sudden proposal left Kyusuke in shock, and he leaned forward, slamming his hands against the table as he struggled to understand what she meant by proposing to someone like him. Rue calmly continued smoking and explained that the proposal was made with divorce in mind. Confused, Kyusuke questioned what that even meant, admitting that she had almost made his heart flutter. Rue explained that she was not really a fan of marriage. Despite that, her parents were rich and prideful, and they had been pressuring her to get married ever since she turned 30. By getting married, she could silence them and get them off her back. Although her parents would be disappointed, they would eventually leave her alone. Kyusuke was stunned by the arrangement and saw it as a power play. Sitting across from her, he could not understand why she would do something so intimate with someone like him, especially when she intended to divorce immediately afterward. Marriage, in his eyes, was something meant for soulmates, and he believed she should wait for the person who would truly make her happy. Rue noted that Kyusuke still had not given up on the idea of soulmates, and he readily admitted that he wanted to marry his own. She regarded that belief as the reason he still did not have a girlfriend at his age, drawing a quiet protest from him. Rue then explained that she did not want to become a burden in someone else's life, which was why she had no desire to be truly married. All she wanted was the title of being married so her parents would stop bothering her. She also pointed out that the arrangement was not a bad deal for him. Since he no longer had a home, he could live with her while looking for a job or a place of his own. Kyusuke admitted that she was right and asked how long the marriage would last. Rue answered that it would continue for 100 days. The short duration surprised him, but she explained that living with him any longer than that would probably make her lose her mind. Kyusuke then wondered why she had chosen him. Thinking it over, he realized the arrangement benefited both of them because, even if either of them eventually found someone they truly loved, they could simply get divorced without any risk. Rue told him that he was the only person she could ask and asked whether he would marry her with divorce in mind. Kyusuke agreed. He had first met Rue during their first year of high school. They had started talking because they happened to sit beside each other, and she eventually became his only friend. Although they attended different universities, they continued making time to meet, and even after graduating, they still went out drinking together. Their friendship had lasted for many years. Kyusuke had always considered Rue someone precious to him, though calling those feelings romantic did not seem right. Even if they were, he believed it would be presumptuous to think that Rue would ever date someone like him. Despite all that, they were now married. Kyusuke remained flustered, unable to believe they had actually gone through with the marriage, and wondered whether this was truly for the best. He remembered that Rue had said he was the only person she could ask, and for a brief moment, he even wondered whether she liked him. The thought was interrupted when Rue checked with the photographer to confirm that the picture had been taken before immediately leading him home. Still surprised, Kyusuke watched as Rue looked over the photograph with satisfaction, convinced that it would be enough to silence her parents. He noticed that his eyes were closed in the picture, but Rue ignored the issue, urged him to get changed, and hurried him out. Although he was still surprised that there was no wedding ceremony, Rue considered the photograph sufficient and took him home. Not long afterward, they arrived home. Kyusuke looked at the wedding photo on his phone, unable to believe that he was now married to Rue. He also thought that she had looked beautiful in her dress. Rue reminded him that it was not official yet and handed him a marriage application to fill out. Kyusuke stared at the document in shock as he realized what it was. Rue explained that she would submit it sometime the following day. The timing surprised him, and he became flustered at the thought that, once it was filed, they would share the same surname. Rue then slid another document across the table and told him to fill that one out as well. Looking it over, Kyusuke realized it was a divorce application. Rue considered it only natural to prepare both documents at the same time, and Kyusuke quietly agreed. He found it hard to believe that he was completing marriage and divorce paperwork simultaneously. Rue then asked what he planned to do from that point on. Kyusuke explained that he intended to find a part-time job first, save money, secure a full-time job, and then move into a place of his own. Until then, however, Rue would have to put up with him staying there. Rue dismissed his concern, reminding him that they were husband and wife now. The remark left Kyusuke flustered once again. A moment later, Rue noticed the time and asked whether he was hungry. Kyusuke admitted that he was, and his heart began pounding. He wondered if Rue was about to prepare a home-cooked meal for him. Since they were now husband and wife, he wanted to make sure there was nothing strange about that. He realized he had been so focused on the future divorce that he had forgotten Rue was now his wife and he was her husband. Growing excited, he eagerly anticipated whatever she was preparing in the kitchen. His heart beat faster as he wondered what Rue would make and whether she was a good cook. In the next moment, Rue placed a tray on the table with a loud sound. It held soup, pills, and bar-shaped food items. Kyusuk stared in disbelief at the meal, realizing it consisted entirely of supplements. Rue explained that it provided the necessary calorie intake. Unable to understand it, Kyusuk wondered why she did not simply cook or buy ordinary food. Rue explained that eating itself already felt like a chore, so spending time cooking was a waste. The food also had a long shelf life and could be eaten quickly. Kyusuk could only remark on how little importance she placed on meals. Rue added that she could always buy more food from a convenience store if it was not enough. Since she had to wake up early the next morning, she finished eating and headed to bed. Kyusuk was surprised that she was already done. Before leaving, Rue explained that she did not have a spare futon, so he could extend the sofa and sleep there. After wishing each other good night, Kyusuk quietly reflected on what marriage was like. The following morning, Rue woke Kyusuk and told him that breakfast was ready. He got up, apologized for oversleeping, and thanked her for preparing breakfast. Rue noted that he had always been a late riser before telling him to eat. She presented him with another tray containing the same bar-shaped food items and supplements. Kyusuk wondered if he would have to eat like that for the rest of his life. Rue remarked that she had heard it was better to eat a larger breakfast than dinner, so she supposed it was encouraging. Moments later, she checked her phone, realized she would be late, and prepared to leave. Kyusuk stopped her and asked whether there was anything he could help with, such as cleaning, shopping, or other household chores. Since Rue was allowing him to stay there, he felt it was the least he could do. Rue told him there was no need, explaining that she had already bought food and that Tamago handled the cleaning. Kyusuk was surprised by the mention of Tamago. After seeing Rue off, he quietly found himself thinking once again about what marriage was like. Later that day, Rue returned home. Kyusuk welcomed her back and was surprised when she handed him cash for dinner. On another occasion, when he saw her carrying unwashed clothes, he offered to take them to the cleaners and asked if she could at least do the laundry herself. Rue declined, explaining that she would simply pay to have them cleaned. Kyusuk remarked that he hoped he could one day say the same. After Rue finished showering, she reminded him that if he was going to use the shower, he should turn on the drying vent afterward to prevent mold from growing. She then left for work. Left alone, Kyusuk grew frustrated. He felt that this was not what marriage was supposed to be and that they were more like a couple already on the verge of divorce. He questioned whether the arrangement was really for the best, believing he was nothing more than a gigolo and that even the robot vacuum cleaner was more useful than he was. Since he could not do anything around the house without Rue's permission, he felt that he only took from her without giving anything in return. The thought frustrated him further, making him believe he was nothing but a burden. If all Rue wanted was the title of being married, there seemed to be no reason for her to let him stay there, as he was the only one benefiting from the arrangement. His gaze eventually fell upon the marriage application still resting on the table. Since Rue had not submitted it yet, he wondered whether she was having second thoughts. The next day, Kyusuk woke up early to cook. Satisfied with the result, he finished preparing a bento that he had made without asking Rue first, hoping she would not mind. He also had an interview for a part-time job later that day, but he believed he still had enough time to do some cleaning. Wanting to help however he could, he considered waking Rue but decided against barging into her room. Even so, he carefully peeked inside while calling her name. The sight that greeted him left him frozen in shock. Rue had collapsed on the floor. Panicking, Kyusuk called out to her, desperately wondering what had happened. Fearing the worst, he gently nudged her while calling her name again. Rue breathed heavily before slowly stirring. Noticing her condition, he suspected she had a fever. Rue told him to quiet down before suddenly getting to her feet, insisting that she was fine and asking him to move aside. Kyusuk asked whether she still intended to go to work. Rue explained that she had already called in sick earlier and instead planned to go buy food. Before she could leave, Kyusuk grabbed her arm and refused to let her go. He insisted that she had a fever and needed to rest. Rue questioned what he meant, wondering if he expected her to skip a meal and go straight back to bed. Kyusuk quickly explained that he had already prepared breakfast. Rue was visibly surprised. Although she initially insisted she could have handled it herself, Kyusuk pleaded with her to let him take care of her. After hesitating for a moment, Rue finally agreed. Back in Rue's room, Kyusuk placed a cool towel on her forehead and told her to drink some water. After checking her temperature, he found that it was 38.9 degrees and remarked that it was very high. He could not believe she had still intended to go out and buy food on her own. Rue explained that she would not recover if she did not eat. Kyusuk told her not to worry and to leave everything to him. This time, he wanted to be the one helping. Rue commented that she had never known he had this side to him. Kyusuk admitted that he could not help it because he was finally able to be of use. He reminded her that she needed to eat first and mentioned the bento he had prepared earlier. Rue was surprised that he had made one. Kyusuk apologized for preparing it without asking for permission, but Rue said she did not mind. She thanked him, and Kyusuk decided to remake it into something easier to digest instead. When Rue wondered if he was throwing it away, he assured her that he was not and would simply rearrange the ingredients. Telling her to relax and wait, he left the room, only to return a moment later to remind her once more to get some rest. Rue quietly acknowledged him. After he left, Rue remained silent. She reflected that her condition was the result of neglecting her own health, while her father's job still weighed on her mind. As she shifted in bed, she thought that having someone else in the house felt strange. With her head feeling as though it might burst, she quietly endured the pain. Shortly afterward, Kyusuk called Rue's name, and she responded softly. Approaching her bedside, he apologized for waking her and explained that he had brought some food, asking whether she thought she could eat. Rue quietly indicated that she could. Kyusuk explained that the bento he had prepared earlier included cherry tomatoes, so he had added them to the porridge. He asked if she still liked cherry tomatoes, and Rue confirmed that she did. Relieved, Kyusuk was glad he had included them. Rue looked at the bowl before taking a spoonful of the warm porridge. Kyusuk watched quietly and asked if it tasted good. Rue admitted that it was delicious and tasted amazing, much to his relief. She remarked that he had always been a good cook. Kyusuk explained that he had cooked every day at home, so he had naturally learned over time. He added that he was capable of many other household chores as well. He could clean places that even the vacuum cleaner could not reach, such as the bathtub and toilet, was good at folding laundry, and could prepare all of their meals. More than anything, he wanted to help if Rue would allow it. Having always been the one receiving help, he hated being unable to do anything for her. He did not want to hear her tell him that he did not need to do anything anymore because he genuinely wanted to support her. Even so, he apologized and admitted that she could refuse if it was asking too much. Rue shared that she had always lived alone in the house. She had believed that if she ever ruined her health like this, it would simply be something she would have to deal with by herself. However, she had never imagined that having someone else there to rely on could feel so reassuring. She then asked Kyusuk if she could depend on him to help around the house. Hearing that, Kyusuk became excited. Rue thanked him, calling him a lifesaver. He reflected that he had always been the one receiving help instead. Remembering the rest of the meal, Kyusuk mentioned that he had also made miso soup and asked whether she wanted some. Rue was surprised that he had managed to prepare miso soup without using a pot, and Kyusuk explained that he had used a frying pan instead. After finishing the meal, Rue thanked him for the food. Kyusuk told her to get some more rest while he washed the dishes. Rue called out to him once more to thank him, adding that she was already looking forward to having the porridge again. Kyusuk became flustered and promised that he would definitely make it for her again. As he looked at her, he found her very cute. Rue then reminded him about his schedule. Startled, Kyusuk remembered that he had work that day. After glancing at the clock, he realized he had completely lost track of time. He hurriedly said that he would leave as soon as he finished washing the dishes. Dashing out, he reminded Rue to stay in bed. Rue acknowledged him, and after Kyusuk told her he would see her later, he closed the door behind him while Rue rested back against the bed. The next morning, Rue wiped her face with a towel and found that her fever had gone down. She reflected that being sick had been such a nuisance. In the kitchen, Kyusuk greeted her good morning and expressed his relief that she was feeling better. He told her that breakfast was ready. Moments later, he was startled to see Rue standing there unclothed after having just come out of the shower. He immediately told her to get dressed, and Rue acknowledged him before quickly putting on her clothes. After she sat down at the table, Kyusuk remarked that he was glad she had recovered from her fever so quickly. Rue credited him for her recovery and thanked him, and Kyusuk simply accepted her gratitude, saying it was no problem. Rue remarked that married life did not seem half bad as she lit a cigarette. Kyusuk immediately told her to stop, pointing out that she had only just recovered from a fever and should not already be smoking again. Rue insisted that was exactly why she was smoking, but Kyusuk continued urging her to stop. Rue eventually took back her earlier remark and concluded that married life sounded like a pain instead. Kyusuk disagreed. Remembering something he had seen on television, Kyusuk brought up the marriage application and asked whether Rue still had not submitted it. Rue confirmed that she had not. Confused, Kyusuk asked why. Rue explained that she had delayed submitting it for his sake. She had wanted to give him the chance to back out if he realized that living with her was something he hated. She believed Kyusuk was the kind of person who would accept any unreasonable request she made without complaint, and that he was the only one who would agree to a marriage with divorce in mind. Kyusuk replied that Rue was also the only person who could come up with an arrangement like this. Rue admitted that he was right. Because of that, she had held back, feeling that she was the only one truly benefiting from the arrangement. She wanted to know whether he was still comfortable living with her. Kyusuk assured her that he was more than fine with it and believed he was the one benefiting the most. He felt he should be asking whether she was truly comfortable with the arrangement instead. Wondering if his presence was a burden, he asked whether having him around the house was troublesome. Rue denied it, explaining that Kyusuk was someone who always listened to her. Although living alone was certainly easier, living with him did not seem bad. She also pointed out that maintaining the appearance of a married couple would be much easier whenever her parents came to visit. The comment caught Kyusuk off guard and his face turned red. Rue then asked how his interview had gone, remarking that she had a feeling it had not gone well. Kyusuk froze before admitting that the manager had been furious because he arrived late. Rue teased him by reminding him that there was still plenty of time before their divorce. She then told him that there were enough household chores to keep him occupied, so he should not push himself too hard. Kyusuk thanked her, quietly thinking how kind she was. Kyusuk reflected that Rue was someone capable of doing almost anything. He wondered whether he was only getting in her way by living there. At the same time, realizing how Rue truly viewed him made him happy. His attention then shifted to the robot vacuum moving across the floor. Claiming that he was much better at household chores than the machine, he jokingly asked whether he was at least more useful than it. Rue replied that he probably was and wondered why he had suddenly brought it up. Kyusuk mentioned that she had given it such a cute name and asked why she had called it Tamago. Rue explained that eggs were a quick source of protein. The robot had helped her a great deal while she lived alone, so she thought the name suited it. Besides, its round shape reminded her of an egg. Realizing how important the robot was to her, Kyusuk playfully hissed at Tamago, prompting Rue to tell him not to pick a fight with it. Rue then invited him to eat and suggested that they submit the marriage application that day. Kyusuk simply agreed. At first, Kyusuk had not understood what it meant to enter a marriage with divorce already in mind for a period of 100 days. Even so, he could not shake the feeling that those 100 days would become something even deeper than the friendship they had shared for more than a decade. After they finished eating, Rue remarked that the meal had been delicious and urged him to get going. From the following day until their divorce, it would be just the two of them. Kyusuk still could not believe how his life had turned out, and once again, they found themselves discussing their divorce plans as they submitted their marriage application. Chapter 2 began with Rue having her meal at work. As she looked at the bento, she noted that Kyusuk's bentos were becoming more elaborate. She wondered why the hot dogs were shaped like octopuses, thinking that it only made them harder to eat. As she took a bite, someone suddenly called out to her. It was Kurumi, who could not believe Rue had handled such a difficult case so smoothly and praised her as a god. She explained that the client had been rejected by other law firms, so they had been grateful to end up with Rue. Rue simply acknowledged that it was good. Kurumi remarked that Rue looked as cool as always and admitted that Rue's cool, stoic attitude made her fall in love with her all over again. She added that their boss had been singing Rue's praises and insisted that Rue was still the coolest person she knew. Rue questioned why Kurumi always had to treat everything like a rivalry. Kurumi then revealed that there was something she had been dying to ask. When Rue asked what it was, Kurumi stared at her intently and questioned the recent bento lunches. Rue remarked that Kurumi's expression was frightening. Kurumi pointed out that Rue had always eaten either some mystery paste or mystery pills for lunch, as though the world had ended, and wondered where these super girly lunches had suddenly come from because they did not match the Rue she knew. Rue commented that Kurumi was being loud before revealing that she had gotten married and asking if she had not mentioned it. She explained that her husband had made the lunch for her. Hearing that, Kurumi slapped her forehead in disbelief and completely rejected the idea. She insisted she could not believe it and refused to accept it, declaring that Rue was too perfect to be suited for marriage. Rue calmly wondered if Kurumi was insulting her. Kurumi questioned where Rue had picked up the man and whether he had actually made Rue fall in love, even declaring that she wanted to beat him up. Rue asked her to calm down and reminded her that she had just gotten married, with the bento serving as proof. She pointed out that Kurumi knew she could never make something like it herself. Although Kurumi admitted that was true, she still refused to accept that Rue was married. She then noticed that Rue was not wearing a wedding ring. Rue looked down at her hand in surprise. Kurumi continued denying the truth, insisting that Rue had merely discovered a hidden talent for cooking and had started making her own lunches, which naturally turned out perfectly because Rue was perfect. She urged Rue to admit that was the truth, but Rue told her to stop making assumptions. Kurumi refused, insisting that without a ring, Rue was not married. She even added that, even if Rue were married, she was certain it would only end in divorce. Rue looked at her hand and decided to do something. When she returned home, Rue announced that they were going to buy a ring. Kyusuk reacted in confusion and asked what kind of ring she meant. Rue simply stated that it would be a wedding ring. Kyusuk was surprised at the mention of a wedding ring. Rue explained that no one would see them as married without one. Kyusuk admitted that he was happy she felt that way, but he did not have the money. Rue replied that this was why they were going to a general store. Kyusuk was shocked by the suggestion and thought that a wedding ring should be platinum, diamond, or perhaps engraved with their names. Rui reminded him that he had just said he did not have the money. Kyusuk insisted that he would earn it through a part-time job, mentioning that he had recently gone to an interview. He resolved to work hard, save enough, and asked Rui if she could wait. Rui pointed out that theirs was only a pretend marriage, so there was no reason to waste time or money on a ring. She added that, by the time he had saved enough, they would already be divorced. She also reminded him that he had planned to use that money for a house and to secure a full-time job. The weight of reality struck Kyusuk. Rui told him that was exactly why they were going to a general store. Kyusuk understood, apologized, and Rui told him to get dressed so they could leave. Soon afterward, they arrived at the general store. Rui picked up a ring, noted that it cost 500 yen, and thought it looked good. She immediately decided to buy it. Kyusuk remarked that she had decided too quickly and wondered if they could find something cuter or something that felt more special for the two of them. Rui asked what they were supposed to be looking for. Kyusuk picked up a heart-shaped ring, but Rui thought it looked lame. He then chose another ring with a large flower design that he found cute, though Rui commented that it did not look like a wedding ring. She concluded that Kyusuk really had no taste. Kyusuk insisted there was nothing wrong with it, adding that Rui was beautiful enough to make anything look good on her. Rui replied that it would never look good on Kyusuk instead, leaving him feeling hurt. She decided that a simple ring was enough, selected another one, and remarked that she thought it would suit Kyusuk. Kyusuk realized that Rui was considering whether the ring would look good on him. He then insisted that, as Rui's husband, he should pay for it. Rui asked if he was sure. After paying, Rui told him that she was going to look at some cosmetics, and Kyusuk acknowledged it. As Kyusuk looked around the store, he reflected that he had imagined they would be on a date, but to Rui this was simply ordinary shopping. He overheard someone admiring an item on display, turned toward the voice, and saw a happy couple shopping together. The sight brought back an old memory of someone calling him Q and telling him that, once he and his soulmate tied the knot, he should give a ring lovelier than anyone else's. He remembered that he had always wanted to give a beautiful ring to the woman who would become his wife. Since this was only a pretend marriage, however, he accepted that if Rui was satisfied with this, then he would be as well. Shaking his head, he told himself not to dwell on such thoughts and decided to find Rui. As he walked through the store, he remembered that she had said she would be looking at cosmetic. Meanwhile, Rui stood in an aisle looking over cleansing cream, body milk, and supplements. She considered buying the supplements but returned them to the shelf, deciding against it because she had Kyusuk now. She then noticed Kyusuk fidgeting with his clothes, a habit she recognized as a sign that something was troubling him. Although she believed buying the cheaper ring had been the most reasonable choice, she realized that something was clearly bothering him. When Kyusuk approached and asked whether she had finished shopping, Rui confirmed that she had. He then asked if she wanted to head home. Rui looked at him and told him to stop holding back. Kyusuk was caught by surprise and wondered what she meant. Rui explained that she knew he always fidgeted with his clothes whenever something was on his mind and asked if something was wrong. She admitted that it annoyed her how he always restrained himself and put other people first. Kyusuk was left confused. Rui told him to listen carefully. She said that she understood he was excited about being her husband now, but she was also his wife. She told him to be honest with her whenever something was bothering him. Kyusuk agreed and asked her to come with him. The scene shifted to a city overlook at night, with a brightly lit Ferris wheel visible in the distance. Kyusuk admired the beautiful view, prompting Rui to wonder why he had brought her there. He admitted that he had always wanted to exchange rings in a romantic setting. It had long been his dream to make a magical proposal beneath a starlit sky before exchanging rings together. Rui asked if that was what he wanted to do. Kyusuk acknowledged that he was a useless and unreliable man who could not even give Rui a proper ring. Although he had accepted that reality, he still wanted, at the very least, to give her a romantic ring exchange. Rui remarked that they were only exchanging rings and questioned why it mattered so much. Kyusuk explained that placing a ring on someone's finger conveyed how deeply that person was loved, and that exchanging such treasured rings in a beautiful place carried almost the same meaning as confessing those feelings. He added that Rui would also have something to tell her parents if they ever asked how the proposal had happened, believing that a heartfelt proposal would be far more convincing. Rui accepted his reasoning and agreed to go through with the ring exchange, then asked what she was supposed to do. Kyusuk decided they would begin with his proposal. He imagined himself proposing to Rui beneath the beautiful night sky before placing the ring on her finger. Rui agreed. Growing nervous, Kyusuk stumbled over his words as he asked Rui to marry him. Rui casually accepted without hesitation. Her response caught Kyusuk by surprise, though Rui saw nothing strange about it since they were already officially married. Kyusuk admitted that only the order was different and that he did not disagree with her. He then asked for permission to place the ring on her finger, and Rui agreed. Kyusuk carefully slipped the ring onto her finger, standing there flushed and emotional while Rui quietly watched him. He admitted that the moment was making him extremely flustered and wondered if Rue felt the same way. Rue replied that she did not and was simply cold. Kyusuk apologized and said he would finish quickly as he fully slid the ring into place. Satisfied, he reflected that the moment had now become a memory. Still flustered, he asked if Rue would do the same for him, but before she responded, he found himself captivated by how beautiful she looked while gazing at the ring. When Rue asked what he had said, Kyusuk brushed it off and simply asked her to put his ring on him. Rue understood and immediately forced the ring onto his finger. Kyusuk cried out in pain. Rue asked if that was sufficient, and Kyusuk remarked that she had shown no sign of any emotion throughout the exchange. Even so, when he looked at the ring on his hand, he was overcome with happiness. Rue admitted that she did not see any value in the entire idea of romanticism and wondered why Kyusuk thought so much like a romantic. Kyusuk found it difficult to explain but revealed that it was because of his grandmother. Rue asked if he meant his grandmother. Kyusuk explained that they had talked about it many times before and that he had always taken care of his grandmother. She would often tell him about the memories she had made with his grandfather whenever they met, such as the luxurious restaurant where he had proposed or the flowers he had given her. His grandmother had truly believed that his grandfather was her Prince Charming. Having heard those stories throughout his life, Kyusuk had come to long for the same kind of romance. Rue asked if he was doing all right now, referring to his grandmother. Kyusuk assured her that he was fine, explaining that he had watched his grandmother grow old and become senile over time, so he had already prepared himself for it. Rue observed that he still looked depressed. Kyusuk apologized for what had happened before and admitted that he had been feeling completely down at the time. He explained that he had then been told it was time to go out and earn a living, after which he had been kicked out. He added that he had found a part-time job as a housekeeper, which seemed promising, though he was still hoping to secure full-time employment soon. Rue told him that she knew he could do it, and Kyusuk thanked her. Rue apologized for not handling the ring exchange properly and admitted that it had not been what Kyusuk had dreamed of. Kyusuk denied that, insisting that Rue had made his dream come true and that he was genuinely happy. Although he knew she might think it was silly because their marriage was only pretend, he confessed that he had always wanted to propose that way and thanked her for making it possible. Rue then asked whether there were any other romantic things people usually did. Kyusuk was confused until Rue suggested that they hold hands. He was taken by surprise and questioned whether she was serious, telling her that she did not have to keep going along with everything he wanted. Rue explained that having romantic experiences together would also make their marriage more convincing. Besides, doing something for someone the way Kyusuk always did made her happy, and making him happy also made her happy. Kyusuk asked if she was certain, and Rue confirmed that she was. She reached out, took his hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. Kyusuk realized he had never held someone's hand before and wondered what Rue was thinking, hoping she was not disgusted. Rue felt the warmth of his hand and thought that it was so warm that he was like a hand warmer. The two walked side by side along the path with their hands still clasped together. The following day, Rue sat at her desk and opened her lunchbox. She noticed the circular decorations on the food and wondered what they were before realizing they were rings. She concluded that Kyusuk must have been very happy. Kurumi called out to Rue and began talking about the case they had discussed earlier, but then noticed the ring on Rue's finger. She reacted in shock and burst into tears. Rue wondered why she was crying. Through her sobbing, Kurumi lamented that Rue had really married some random man and vowed to find him. Rue told her to stop and said she was taking the matter far too seriously. Kurumi questioned whether the two of them were already acting lovey-dovey and flirting with each other, insisting that this was nothing like Rue. Rue admitted that she did not know what Kurumi was talking about. Kurumi declared that Rue did not even understand what it meant, so there had to be some ulterior motive behind the marriage. Rue denied that there was any. Kurumi remarked that Rue did not give off any post-wedding bliss despite being married, though she admitted she was not surprised because it was Rue. As Rue found herself wondering about post-wedding bliss, her phone suddenly rang. Looking at the screen, she saw that it was her parents and wondered why they were calling during her break. Kurumi asked if it was that man and tried to answer the call herself, but Rue explained that it was her mother. Rue said she was stepping out for a moment, and Kurumi replied that she would save Rue's seat. As Rue left, Kurumi looked at the bento and commented that using a wedding ring motif on it was cringe. Rue answered the call and asked what was going on, only to be stunned by the response. Later, Rue returned home. Before Kyusuk could even greet her, she immediately informed him that her parents were coming. Kyusuk reacted in surprise, pointing out that they were not prepared yet. Rue declared that their lovey-dovey training would begin immediately. Kyusuk was left confused and wondered what kind of training she meant. Chapter 3 began with Kyusuk finishing his part-time job. He informed the elderly woman that he was heading home. She thanked him for staying late and praised the meal he had prepared, expressing her hope that he would cook it for her again. Kyusuk thanked her in return. As he walked home, he thought about what a kind woman she was. Checking the time on his phone, he realized he had lost track of it and hurried on. He figured Rue had probably already returned from work and wanted to get home quickly to prepare dinner. When he arrived, he realized she was already home and cursed under his breath. Entering the house, he announced his return. Rue welcomed him home and asked whether he wanted dinner, a bath, or her. Kyusuk was stunned. Rue wondered what that phrase meant, leaving Kyusuk even more shocked that she had spoken it without understanding its meaning. He asked what had suddenly gotten into her. Rue reminded him that she had said they would begin their lovey-dovey training that day. Kyusuk admitted that he had not thought she was serious. Rue explained that her parents were suddenly coming to visit and that, the way they currently behaved, no one would see them as a lovey-dovey married couple. They needed to practice acting that way so her parents would not become suspicious. Kyusuk confirmed that she meant pretending to be lovey-dovey. He doubted he could do it, pointing out that the things she was describing were what real lovers did. Rue reminded him that they were husband and wife now. Before he could react further, Rue pulled him toward the bedroom, leaving him completely stunned. Inside the bedroom, Kyusuk sat stiffly on the bed, wondering why he had been brought there. Rue explained that she understood why he was anxious because she did not fully understand all of the lovey-dovey behavior either. Kyusuk insisted that was not the real problem. Rue then showed him a list she had prepared. She assured him that there was no need to worry because she had done her own research and believed that, if they completed the tasks in order, they would undoubtedly fool her parents. Kyusuk was shocked, protesting that being lovey-dovey was not simply a checklist of tasks. Rue ignored the objection and asked for his consent and approval before they started, seeking his confirmation. Kyusuk wondered what she meant and jokingly questioned whether he was her boss. Inwardly, he had the feeling that this entire plan was completely misguided. As he looked over the list, he immediately became flustered when he noticed that kissing each other was included. Rue questioned why he was making a face like a monkey. Trembling, Kyusuk admitted that kissing set the bar far too high. Rue wondered if that was really the case. Kyusuk questioned how anyone could pretend to do something like that, though he still wanted to help Rue. He then asked where she had gathered her research. Rue revealed that it had all come from a shoujo manga and showed him the book. Kyusuk immediately noticed the many sticky notes she had attached. After looking through it, he admitted that he truly did not think he could handle this and asked whether there was something more suitable for beginners. Rue decided they would simply begin at the top of the list. She announced that the first item was a lap pillow and instructed Kyusuk to come over. Kyusuk cried out in confusion at what she meant. Rue explained that she was only going to let him rest his head on her lap, noting that characters in shoujo manga did that even before they started dating. Kyusuk nervously admitted that, while that might be true in shoujo manga, the distance between them still felt far too close. He hesitated to rest his head on her lap. Understanding his reluctance, Rue instead told him to lie down. Kyusuk did so, still confused. Rue then lay against his shoulder instead, deciding to make it an arm pillow. Kyusuk could see the look of triumph on her face, but he knew this was not working. Rue calmly explained that if he could not bring himself to approach her, then she would simply approach him instead. Kyusuk frantically insisted that he simply could not do it because this was much closer than a lap pillow. Rue remarked that they were practically the same thing, but Kyusuk strongly disagreed. He admitted that he truly could not handle it and asked Rue to get off him, insisting that he was not cut out for this. Rue asked whether anything would work for him, but Kyusuk replied that just the two of them being on the bed together was already overwhelming. Rue considered what he had said before reaching beneath the bed and taking something out. She explained that it was not on her list, but it was something even Kyusuk should be able to manage. Holding up a pillow marked, "Yes," she showed it to him. Kyusuk cried out in alarm. Rue explained that simply placing it on the bed could make them appear lovey-dovey. She reassured him that they were not actually planning to do anything improper, but there was always the possibility that her parents might peek into the room. Kyusuk questioned whether they really needed to go that far. Rue answered that they did and reasoned that simply putting the pillow on the bed should not be a problem. Kyusuk argued that if it said, "yes," then it carried a certain meaning. Rue casually explained that it meant she was available anytime, which made it lovey-dovey. Hearing that, Kyusuk screamed again. He admitted that he could not imagine being comfortable with a "yes" pillow and explained that, even if their marriage was pretend, he did not want Rue agreeing to something so sacred to him. Rue sighed and decided they would use the "no" pillow instead, though she noted that it did not look very lovey-dovey. Kyusuk sighed as well, and Rue asked which option he actually wanted. Kyusuk admitted that it was not as though he was completely unaffected by the matter. Rue complained that he was troublesome but agreed to continue. Kyusuk felt as though he was going to die. Rue remarked that, if they did it once, putting the pillow out afterward would seem like nothing. Kyusuk wondered why the bar kept getting raised, pointing out that he could not even manage a kiss, much less anything beyond that. Rue responded that this was exactly why they should kiss. She insisted that doing it once would not make any difference. Kyusuk immediately cried out that he could not. Rue became irritated and asked whether that was all he could ever say and whether everything existed only inside his head. Kyusuk denied it, but Rue questioned why he could not simply try first and judge afterward. Kyusuk asked whether she herself was not opposed to it. Rue answered that she did not really mind and told him not to change the subject. She urged him to kiss her first and decide afterward. Kyusuk continued insisting that he could not. Rue asked why, and Kyusuk admitted that it was because the two of them did not share the same feelings. Rue replied that the whole point of this was to show how they felt about each other. As Kyusuk tried to answer, Rue interrupted him, pointing out that he kept saying he could not and asking why he would not at least try, since he might be surprised. Kyusuk's eyes began to fill with tears. Rue told him not to start crying. Kyusuk insisted that he was not crying. Rue fell silent before apologizing, admitting that she had gotten a little carried away. Kyusuk quietly blamed himself instead, saying that he had always relied on Rue while Rue could not rely on him in the same way. From the moment they had entered into their pretend marriage, he had known they would eventually face situations like this. He had also known that he would not be able to do it and believed he should have refused from the very beginning. He felt that all he ever did was cause Rue trouble and questioned what he was even doing. Rue then asked him that, if he truly could not do anything lovey-dovey, why had he held her hand? Kyusuk replied that he believed he had understood Rue's feelings at that moment. He had realized that she had been making an effort for his sake, and the realization had genuinely shocked him. He admitted that he had always tried to make an effort for her but had never imagined that someone else would also be thinking about making an effort for him until Rue had told him so herself. He continued by saying that he never expected someone as pragmatic and realistic as Rue to do something like that for his sake. Rue asked if that was really how he saw her, adding that she could not honestly say she understood those feelings. Kyusuk realized that Rue had been able to express her feelings while he had never managed to express his own. He thought that perhaps she would understand him if he could somehow convey how he felt, though he did not know how to do it. Then, all at once, an idea came to him. He called out to Rue and asked if she wanted to cook together. Rue was left confused by the suggestion. The scene shifted to the two of them standing side by side in the kitchen. Kyusuk suggested that they could naturally become lovey-dovey by cooking together. He declared that this would be their lovey-dovey training, beta version. Rue questioned whether cooking was not simply work. Kyusuk replied that cooking together was probably the same as nurturing affection for one another. Rue admitted that she could not really cook. Kyusuk assured her that it was fine because he would teach her. He explained that it was good training since they could experience both cooking and being affectionate at the same time. Rue found that difficult to believe and asked what they were going to make. Kyusuk decided on a simple curry. Rue remarked that she liked curry and added that it could be made in 3 minutes. Kyusuk clarified that they would be making it from scratch rather than using a microwave. Rue was surprised. Kyusuk told Rue that they would peel the potatoes first and asked whether she had a peeler. Rue asked what a peeler was. Since she did not have one, Kyusuk decided that using a knife to peel potatoes for the first time would be too dangerous. Instead, he would peel them while Rue cut them afterward. Rue agreed. After peeling a potato, he handed it to her. Rue commented on how quickly he had finished. Kyusuk instructed her to cut the potato into quarters. Rue immediately brought the knife down on the potato with one hand. The sight made Kyusuk tremble. He quickly warned her not to use only one hand because it was dangerous. Rue admitted that she had never held a knife before. Kyusuk apologized and decided to explain everything properly. Moving closer to her, he demonstrated how to grip the handle firmly and how to hold the potato steady with the other hand while cutting. Seeing him naturally act so closely with her, Rue observed that he was capable of it after all. Kyusuk looked confused before stammering out repeated apologies. Rue realized that he had not even noticed he had been able to approach her despite claiming earlier that he could not. Kyusuk explained that he had only been trying to make sure she would not hurt herself and apologized again. Rue gave him a thumbs up, told him not to apologize and urged him to continue. Rue then asked Kyusuk to teach her how to cut the potatoes. Kyusuk explained that she simply needed to bring the knife straight down. Rue replied that she still did not understand and suggested they do it together so that she would not get hurt. Kyusuk reluctantly agreed to do it just once, realizing that Rue was clearly encouraging him to get closer to her. He moved beside her. Rue remarked that they looked quite good together. Kyusuk admitted that he felt as though he might have a heart attack. Before even a minute had passed, he stepped away and told Rue to continue on her own while he peeled the remaining potatoes himself. Rue asked whether he really could not handle even that much, and Kyusuk admitted that they had simply been too close. Rue observed that he had acted naturally only moments earlier and wondered if this was another matter involving feelings. Kyusuk quietly continued peeling the potatoes while Rue silently watched him. After a while, she remarked that he looked very cool. Kyusuk was startled and wondered whether that was also part of the training, like learning how to flirt with someone. Rue explained that she had merely said what she honestly thought. Embarrassed, Kyusuk quietly repeated to himself that Rue thought he looked cool. The compliment motivated him so much that he quickly got back to work. Not long afterward, they finished peeling and cutting all the necessary ingredients. Rue remarked that everything should be ready, and Kyusuk agreed. She observed that he looked as though he were on cloud nine. Kyusuk admitted that he was simply very happy. Rue told him to pull himself together before he hurt himself. Kyusuk assured her that he was fine and said they would fry the meat first. He asked Rue to pour in the oil. After she did, she asked if that was enough. Kyusuk confirmed it and instructed her to spread it evenly. He added the meat, explaining that they would fry it first. Once the meat had cooked through, they added the vegetables. Rue wondered why they did not simply put everything into the pot and stew it together. Kyusuk explained that frying the ingredients first helped release their umami more easily. Rue admitted that the process was actually kind of fun. Kyusuk was delighted to hear her say that. He reminded her not to overcook the ingredients before they transferred the vegetables into the pot. After everything had been added, Kyusuk explained that all they had to do now was let it simmer. Rue commented that it had been surprisingly easy. Kyusuk then apologized to Rue. She asked what he meant, and he explained that he had not been able to do the lovey-dovey things she had hoped for. He admitted that, to him, cooking together already felt like a form of being lovey-dovey. He believed that being lovey-dovey meant expressing affection. If someone wanted to be close, they could share a lap pillow or an arm pillow. If they wanted to tell someone they loved them, they could kiss them. Rue replied that this was what lovey-dovey meant to her. Kyusuk then explained that he always wanted to make Rue happy whenever he cooked, so he always prepared meals with her in mind. He clarified that cooking was, in a way, his own love language. In other words, instead of forcing himself to kiss someone, he believed he could express affection through something like cooking if that also counted as being lovey-dovey. Rue quietly repeated the words, love language, to herself before remarking that perhaps it was not such a bad idea for their version of being lovey-dovey to stay like this. Kyusuk looked confused. Rue explained that if she tried to kiss him or do something similar, he would only end up crying. Kyusuk immediately insisted that he was not crying. Rue admitted that she did not really gain anything from doing things that way anyway. They had only cooked a meal together, but she had found it enjoyable and had also thought Kyusuk looked very cool. She concluded that perhaps this was what being lovey-dovey looked like for them. Kyusuk asked if she truly thought so. As he instinctively stepped back, Rue asked where he thought he was going. Kyusuk admitted that they had simply been standing a little too close together. Rue remarked that dealing with him crying was troublesome, so perhaps it really was best for them to act the way they always had. Kyusuk once again insisted that he had not been crying. Later, the two sat down at the table, and Kyusuk expressed his gratitude for the meal. As he tasted the curry they had made together, he thought it was delicious. He remarked that it was only ordinary curry, yet making it together somehow made it taste much better. Rue agreed that it tasted like curry. Kyusuk insisted that they had added excitement to it, and Rue casually replied that it was good. He then asked whether making the curry together did not make it feel special, wondering if Rue felt anything different even though it was still just ordinary curry. Rue admitted that she did not understand what he meant. Kyusuk confessed that her straightforward answer stung a little. Rue explained that she did not see anything wrong with simply being themselves. Kyusuk agreed that it was perfectly fine for them to stay as they were, just as they always had been. Rue agreed. She then suggested that, if her parents questioned their relationship, they could simply tell them that this was how they normally were and that this was how they expressed their love. Kyusuk happily agreed, saying that this was simply who they were. Rue told him not to suddenly become oddly self-conscious again, and Kyusuk agreed. Rue then wondered whether blushing because he had become self-conscious was itself very lovey-dovey. Kyusuk immediately begged her to stop doing things that made him self-conscious. Soon afterward, a calendar was shown with the 25th marked, indicating the day Rue's parents would arrive. Chapter 4 opened with Kyusuk washing the dishes while Rue ate. As he worked, he sighed and reflected that tomorrow was the day Rue's parents were supposed to visit. Rue told him not to worry because they had already agreed to act the way they always had. Kyusuk acknowledged that she was right but admitted that he did not know whether he could act naturally in front of them. Rue remarked that the curry did not taste the same as it had the previous day, saying that the flavors had settled and that it tasted even better. She asked whether Kyusuk was not going to eat. He replied that he was fine because he was not hungry and that there were only enough leftovers for one person. Rue offered him a bite. When Kyusuk hesitantly accepted, Rue fed him directly and laughed. She pointed out that he had just unknowingly completed part of their lovey-dovey training by feeding each other and that it had happened so naturally he had not even realized it. Kyusuk blushed deeply, reasoning that everything had happened so naturally that he had simply opened his mouth without thinking. Rue concluded that he was capable of being lovey-dovey as long as he did not notice it. Rue proudly declared that Kyusuk had fallen into her lovey-dovey trap. Kyusuk asked what had happened to their agreement to remain the way they always were and complained that Rue kept doing all these lovey-dovey things. Rue replied that mixing little moments like that into their ordinary routine could naturally create that feeling. She remarked that it was actually a good plan. Kyusuk responded that she was trying to kill him. Sighing, he asked if they could keep things perfectly clear whenever it came to matters like this. Just then, Rue's phone rang. Kyusuk flinched when she saw that it was her mother calling. He wondered why Rue's mother would be calling at that hour and worried that it might be one of those situations where they suddenly decided to come over that very day. His thoughts immediately spiraled into concern over what he should do, regretting that he had not cleaned himself up better, bought nicer clothes, or even fixed his messy hair. Rue answered the call. After it ended, Kyusuk asked what had happened. Rue explained that her father had work, so they would not be able to come the following day after all. Kyusuk fell silent before asking if that was really true, then let out a relieved sigh as he realized he could finally relax. Rue agreed that it was good news for them and remarked that they had dodged a bullet. She set down her phone and told Kyusuk that he could eat the rest of the curry. Kyusuk agreed. Rue then stepped out onto the balcony to smoke, leaving Kyusuk quietly wondering what was going on. The next morning, Kyusuk greeted Rue and wished her a good morning. He told her that he had made her favorite breakfast, tomato risotto. He smiled warmly at her, but Rue remained silent, though she still ate the meal. When she stood up afterward, Kyusuk asked if she was already leaving. He wished her a good day, but Rue simply slammed the door behind her. At that moment, Kyusuk became convinced that something was wrong. He knew Rue was clearly in a bad mood. He wondered why she seemed so depressed when the parents she disliked so much were no longer coming. Sighing, he realized that he was once again overthinking everything by himself and told himself that this was not good. Clenching his fist, he resolved that it was his turn to help Rue and that he needed to ask her properly what was bothering her. Sitting by the window, he noticed that it was raining and then wondered whether Rue had remembered to bring an umbrella with her. Elsewhere, Kurumi stretched and remarked that she was exhausted, relieved that they could finally go home. She told Rue that she had been assigned to guide a new employee through the onboarding process midway through his career and complained that she only wanted to take care of Rue. Rue remained silent. As they stepped outside, Kurumi commented on the heavy downpour. She then noticed Rue's expression and asked if something had been bothering her that day. Wondering if Rue had argued with her husband, Kurumi reassured her that, even if they divorced, she would still have her. She even promised that, when that happened, she would make Rue's lunches. Rue gave no response and walked straight into the pouring rain. Shocked, Kurumi called after her, asking if she was really going to walk into the downpour without an umbrella and offering to lend her own. At that moment, someone called out to Rue. It was Kyusuk. Relieved that he had made it in time, he immediately became concerned when he saw that Rue was completely drenched. He handed her a towel and urged her to dry herself. He reminded her not to leave home without an umbrella and worried about what would happen if she caught a cold. He also told her to take a warm bath once they returned home. Kurumi asked who he was. Stammering, Kyusuk tried to explain that he was not a stranger. Kurumi jokingly asked whether he was Rue's mother, and Kyusuk awkwardly replied that it was not quite like that. Kurumi remarked that, if he was not Rue's mother, she almost could have believed it. As Kyusuk struggled to introduce himself, Rue simply stated that he was her husband. Surprised that Rue had finally spoken, Kurumi watched as Rue thanked her for her concern and said they would be heading home. Kurumi casually told Rue to call her once they had broken up. Kyusuk immediately protested that she should not say something like that so casually. Rue told Kurumi that it was fine and added that they were probably not going to break up. Kurumi waved goodbye and said she would see Rue the next day. As she watched them leave, she privately lamented that someone who looked like such a loser had taken Rue away from her. Meanwhile, Kyusuk offered Rue the umbrella. Rue replied that she could not be bothered using one by herself and decided that they would share it instead. Kyusuk confirmed that she meant sharing a single umbrella. Rue pointed out that it was large enough for 2 people and asked what the problem was. The two walked home together beneath the umbrella. After hesitating for a moment, Kyusuk gently remarked that Rue seemed a little down. He apologized and told her that, if he had done something wrong, he would make it right. Rue denied that it had anything to do with him. She admitted that she did not fully understand it herself, but that something was bothering her. She asked whether Kyusuk knew why. Kyusuk replied that he was the one asking, so she should be the one to tell him. Even so, he wondered whether it had something to do with her parents canceling their visit. Rue admitted that she should have been happy, but the moment she learned they were not coming, all she could think about was how unsurprised she felt. She explained that, especially after her mother had constantly gone on about her getting married, even after everything that had happened, they still neglected her just as they always had. She confessed that she did not know how to feel about it. Rue continued by explaining that, although her parents appeared to get along, the truth was that they were on terrible terms and had long since given up on each other. Even so, they refused to divorce because doing so was considered shameful and embarrassing. No matter how much they hated one another, they remained together. They had always believed that, once Rue married, the husband should become the breadwinner while the wife became the homemaker, convinced that this was the ideal way for a marriage to work. Rue explained that her mother, in particular, strongly believed that women should never live on their own. Despite having a strained relationship with her husband, she always prioritized him and followed him wherever he went. It eventually reached the point where she constantly pressured Rue to get married, even though she had left Rue behind while going overseas herself. Rue admitted that being left alone had actually been the best possible outcome for her, yet she still could not stop dwelling on everything. She did not know whether the feeling was anger and confessed that she simply was not used to feeling this way. Without warning, Kyusuk pulled Rue into a tight embrace. Rue looked up at him in confusion. Realizing what he had done, Kyusuk immediately panicked, pulled away, and repeatedly apologized, asking her to wait. Rue wondered if this was another one of his strange impulses. Kyusuk explained that, while listening to her, he had been trying to think of the right thing to say or do. Seeing that she was soaked from the rain and looked cold, he had become so worried that he had acted without thinking. Rue quietly leaned against him and remarked on how warm he felt. Kyusuk trembled. Rue apologized, admitting that she still had not sorted out her feelings. She confessed that she still did not understand the tightness she felt in her chest, but simply being like this with him was strangely soothing. After softly calling Kyusuk's name, she asked him to sleep with her that night. The unexpected request left Kyusuk frozen in confusion and shock. The scene shifted to the apartment building where they lived. Kyusuk trembled as he wondered how things had come to this and whether that day would be his day of judgment. Standing outside the bedroom door, he hesitated to open it. He imagined what would happen once he stepped inside, and felt that entering the bedroom at night as Rue's husband somehow did not seem right. Before he could decide, Rue opened the door herself and questioned what was taking him so long. Kyusuk apologized, admitting that he was simply nervous. Rue explained that this was not part of their lovey-dovey training and that she was asking him for a favor. She told him to come inside. As Kyusuk stepped forward, he lost his balance and fell onto the edge of the bed. Rue wondered why he was clinging to the very edge. Kyusuk repeatedly muttered to himself that he was the wall, that he had to become the wall, and that he should be one with the wall. Rue sighed and sat on the bed. As Kyusuk cautiously peeked at her, he worried that he had made her angry. Rue gave him a sharp look and made it clear that he had misunderstood. Kyusuk became flustered by how close they were. Rue explained that simply lying down together was not the same as sleeping together and clarified that what she had wanted was to cuddle. Kyusuk was left confused by the idea of cuddling. Rue realized he still did not understand, so she showed him a shoujo manga and explained that the physical closeness depicted there was what she had meant by sleeping together. Kyusuk insisted that this was far beyond what he was capable of handling. Rue lay back on the bed and told him to come cuddle with her. Kyusuk reminded her that he had already said he could not. He repeatedly questioned whether sharing the same bed really did not count as sleeping together. Rue insisted that it did not, but Kyusuk remained convinced that it did and admitted that he did not think he could go through with it. Ignoring his protests, Rue moved directly against him and wrapped her arms around him, declaring herself ready. Kyusuk immediately protested that he was not ready. He tried to pull away and pleaded with Rue to let him go. Rue quietly remarked that it felt relaxing and made her feel calm. Hearing that, Kyusuk stopped resisting. He quietly wondered if Rue simply wanted to be comforted. Rue admitted that she did not think her feelings came from anger. She confessed that she still did not really understand them, recalling how her mother had always prioritized her father before leaving to live overseas and how countless times her parents had cancelled plans because of work. Sometimes, she found herself wondering what her existence truly meant to them. Kyusuk softly called Rue's name and told her that he believed what she was feeling was loneliness. Hesitating, he reached toward her. He explained that she always said being alone was easier, but he did not think she had simply grown accustomed to it. Being alone was one thing, but the truth was that she might also be lonely. He added that Rue was not someone who stayed quiet when she was angry about something. Rue asked what he meant. Kyusuk explained that she became quite forceful whenever she was angry. Rue suddenly took hold of his hand, surprising him. Startled, Kyusuk remarked that she really was quick to use force. Instead, Rue gently caressed his hand. As Kyusuk quietly called her name, Rue admitted that she was lonely. She confessed that this was what loneliness felt like. Kyusuk observed that she sounded like a robot that had only just learned what emotions were. He then told her that, since they had started living together, he had come to understand something about her. Although she liked being alone, she was also someone who always treasured other people before herself, whether it was him, her parents, or anyone else. He assured her that it was all right to feel the way she did. Rue thanked him. In that moment, Kyusuk realized that Rue was someone capable of showing vulnerability as well. Rue quietly settled against him, and the sensation felt strangely unfamiliar to him. Letting out a quiet sigh, he soon noticed that she had fallen asleep. Resting his own head back, he wondered how any of this could still be considered pretending. The following morning, Kyusuk woke up on the floor. He remembered that Rue had always been a restless sleeper and admitted that he had completely forgotten about it. Judging from how he had ended up there, he assumed he had been kicked off the bed in the middle of the night. Looking over at Rue sleeping peacefully, he reflected that the Rue he had seen the previous night had been a rare sight. He quietly resolved that, if he could, he wanted to support her as much as possible. He then got up and prepared breakfast. When Rue woke up, Kyusuk greeted her and told her that breakfast was ready. Rue only responded with a quiet sound while continuing to stare at her phone. Kyusuk asked what she was looking at. Rue explained that she had read that sleeping warmly helped people sleep better, so she was thinking about buying an electric blanket. Kyusuk hesitantly asked whether she had only hugged him because he was warm, nervously wondering if there had been no special feelings behind it. Rue asked what he meant by special feelings. Embarrassed, Kyusuk immediately dropped the subject and wished someone would put him out of his misery. He then told Rue that he would be at his part-time job for most of the day and would be home late. He explained that he had already prepared dinner and left it in the refrigerator. Rue replied that he had not needed to do that because she could have simply bought something to eat. Kyusuk answered that this was exactly what worried him. A little later, Kyusuk announced that he was leaving. Rue remarked that it felt different being on the other side of the exchange. Kyusuk admitted that hearing that made him blush. Rue asked why. Kyusuk hesitantly asked whether she was really sure she wanted him living there. Rue pointed out that it was rather late to be asking that question. She explained that there was still a chance her parents might come over unexpectedly, so having him there would be a great help. Kyusuk said that he understood and firmly promised that he would always be there for her no matter what. Blushing deeply, he quickly hurried out of the apartment, calling out that he was leaving before the door closed behind him. Rue remained standing quietly in the now empty room and reflected that it had been a long time since she had been there by herself. She took out a cigarette, lit it, and stepped onto the balcony. She had thought she had already grown used to being alone. Meanwhile, Kyusuk made his way to his part-time job. As he walked, he reflected on how embarrassing his earlier conversation with Rue had been. He noted that she had shown no reaction and hoped he had not made her uncomfortable. Entering the building, he pressed the button for the 11th floor, thinking that Kamawata had called him in again that day. He reflected that Kamawata had been requesting his help quite often lately and that he was always impressed by how luxurious Kamawata's home was whenever he visited. Reaching the apartment door, Kyusuk rang the intercom. Kamawata greeted him with a good morning and apologized for not having fixed his hair yet. He also apologized for calling Kyusuk over so early once again and remarked that Kyusuk had been a real lifesaver. Kyusuk quickly assured him that it was no problem. Kamawata commented on how cold it was outside and invited him in. Kyusuk thanked him for having him. The living room was spacious and bright. As always, Kyusuk thought he could never get used to how large the place was. Kamawata apologized for the boxes scattered around, explaining that he had not finished unpacking after moving in. Kyusuk replied that the apartment already looked quite tidy to him. Not wanting to get ahead of himself, Kamawata asked whether Kyusuk would begin preparing breakfast since she loved the meals Kyusuk made. Kamawata then mentioned that his new business cards had just arrived and invited Kyusuk to take a look. Seeing the card, Kyusuk was shocked to discover that Kamawata was a lawyer. Kamawata confirmed that, despite appearances, he was indeed a fully qualified lawyer. Kyusuk praised him, remarking that it was no wonder he had always seemed so well off. Kamawata joked that this meant he would be there to help Kyusuk whenever he got caught up in a legal case. Kamawata then suggested that Kyusuk call him by his first name. Confused, Kyusuk looked at him until Kamawata explained that, since he already called Kyusuk by his first name, it was only fair for Kyusuk to do the same. Kyusuk addressed him as Itsuki, immediately noticing how pleased Kamawata looked. Itsuki said that he would clean his room while Kyusuk cooked, and added that he did not want to peek into the kitchen because he wanted to be surprised by the finished meal. Kyusuk agreed. Looking once more at the business card, he reflected that Itsuki really was a lawyer. He also thought about how generously Itsuki always praised him, realizing that, in that respect, Itsuki was just like Rue. Chapter 5 began with Kyusuk looking at the calendar and noticing that exactly a month had passed since they got married. He realized it was their monthivversary. He thought the timing could not have been more perfect since it was Rue's day off and wondered if he should cook something lavish, get some flowers to decorate, and maybe bake a cake. He imagined they would both have a wonderful time, though he admitted he might have been a little too excited about it. He considered that Rue would probably think the decorations and everything else would just be a hassle to clean up, but decided they might as well celebrate a little. He thought he could make something quick and small with origami and bake a cake that was not too sweet like a cheesecake. Satisfied with the idea, he finished preparing everything and presented the meal he had made to Rue. He explained that he wanted to celebrate the first month of their marriage by going all out. Rue, confused, questioned what first month he meant. Kyusuk clarified that it had been 1 month since their wedding. Rue was surprised that so much time had already passed. Kyusuk confirmed that it was the monthivversary of their marriage and added that, although the marriage was only pretend, he thought the sentiment still mattered. Rue questioned the point of the celebration. Kyusuk awkwardly explained that a month had passed, so he thought they might acknowledge it. Rue replied that there was no reason to celebrate simply because a month had gone by. Kyusuk said it was a way of recognizing how far they had come. Rue pointed out that they still had 2.5 months remaining, so they still had a long way to go, making her wonder why that particular day should be considered special. She added that it had only been 1 month and questioned why it deserved a celebration. Kyusuk insisted that reaching 1 month was meaningful. Rue dismissed it as nothing more than the passing of a month. Kyusuk argued that she did not understand because, to him, spending a month together carried significance. Rue then questioned whether that meant the time they had spent together before their marriage meant nothing. Distressed, Kyusuk insisted he had never said that. Rue again questioned why merely reaching 1 month warranted a celebration. Kyusuk faltered before giving up, telling her to forget everything he had said and suggesting they simply eat. Rue agreed. He sighed in frustration, reflecting that he had hoped they could enjoy their monthivversary together. At the same time, he knew Rue had no interest in things like that, so perhaps he really had become too excited over it. As they ate, Rue seriously questioned the point of the celebration once again. Kyusuk insisted that he had already asked her to forget about it and explained that the celebration had only been something meaningful to him personally. Rue wondered why 1 month was considered worthy of celebration and questioned whether it was because the quantity and quality of their lovey-dovey moments had increased. Kyusuk answered that it was not always about the stats. Rue remarked that Kyusuk knew more about such things than she did and once again asked what made 1 month so special. After fidgeting for a moment, Kyusuk explained that if Rue believed everything was only about quantity or quality, then she would never understand how he felt. Rue questioned what he meant. Instead of answering further, Kyusuk stood up and left for work. As he reached the door, Rue called out to him, but she hesitated, unable to find anything more to say. Outside, Kyusuk walked away, thinking to himself that he had just walked out. Kyusuk reflected that he had walked out without cleaning up and that he might have made Rue worry for no reason. He reminded himself that theirs was only a pretend marriage and that there had never been any reason to celebrate. He admitted that Rue had been right. He arrived at Kamawata's door and rang the bell. Kamawata greeted him, and Kyusuk remarked on how quickly he had answered. Kamawata noticed that Kyusuk looked paler than usual and asked if he was feeling unwell. Surprised, Kyusuk wondered how Kamawata had been able to tell. Kamawata pointed out that Kyusuk's eyes were slightly red and asked whether something bad had happened. Kyusuk awkwardly insisted that it was nothing. Convinced his earlier impression had been correct, Kamawata invited him inside, saying he would be happy to listen. Kyusuk accepted and followed him in, thinking that Kamawata was such a kind person. After listening for a while, Kamawata said he understood and remarked that Kyusuk had a disagreement with his wife. He described it as Kyusuk and his wife being in the middle of a fight. Confused, Kyusuk questioned what he meant and repeated the word fight to himself. Kamawata explained that their differing views had caused them to clash, and Kyusuk admitted that was how it had felt. He wondered whether their disagreement could even be considered a fight. Calling himself stupid, he contrasted himself with Rue, whom he considered smart, believing there was no way he could ever go toe-to-toe with her. Kamawata disagreed. He pointed out that Kyusuk had expressed how much their monthivversary meant to him and had been able to speak honestly about it. He added that he was on Kyusuk's side, explaining that if he were with the person he loved, he would want to celebrate every month as well as every year. He admitted that he was a little jealous. Surprised, Kyusuk wondered what Kamawata could possibly be jealous of. Kamawata explained that a relationship where both people could freely express their opinions and talk things through sounded wonderful. He acknowledged that Kyusuk might think of himself as stupid and his wife as smart, but believed the fact that they could share their perspectives and disagree showed that they were equals. Kamawata then asked whether Rue was at work. Kyusuk explained that it was her day off, so she was at home. Shocked, Kamawata questioned why Kyusuk was there doing chores instead and urged him to return to her. Kyusuk hesitated, reminding him that he was supposed to be working. Kamawata assured him that the uneasiness he was feeling was surely something Rue was experiencing as well. He added that it was their monthivversary and that there was no better place for Kyusuk to be than by Rue's side. Kyusuk agreed and decided to go, though he asked to at least be allowed to finish the dishes first. Kamawata praised his dedication to his work. Shortly afterward, Kamawata thanked Kyusuk for the day and said he would see him next time. As Kyusuk walked away, he reflected on Kamawata's words that he and Rue were equals. A memory surfaced of Rue remarking that Kyusuk always listened carefully in class. He had explained that the teachers were teaching for their sake. Rue had responded that teachers merely repeated what was written in the textbook and wondered whether it would not be faster to read it herself. Kyusuk had admitted that it probably would. Another memory followed, in which Rue pointed out that Kyusuk had forgotten to bring the homework he had already finished, remarking that it defeated the whole purpose of doing it. Kyusuk had apologized, and Rue had questioned who exactly he was apologizing to. A different memory came next, where Rue expressed frustration after they lost because Kyusuk had mistimed his actions and died. Kyusuk had apologized again, admitting that he was bad at games, while Rue complained that he kept dying. Finally, he recalled a classmate commenting that he and Rue seemed unusually close and mentioning that people might start spreading rumors. Rue had questioned what rumors there could be and admitted that she did not understand why anyone else would care how close they were, adding that whatever happened between them was nobody else's business. Kyusuk had hesitantly agreed. Another classmate commented that Kyusuk must have his hands full with a beauty like Rue, and remarked that the two of them seemed to be getting along very well. Kyusuk awkwardly replied that he supposed it was something like that. Someone else told Kyusuk not to worry about those people and suggested that he spend time with him instead. Kyusuk agreed. Later, Kyusuk expressed concern to Rue that if he kept being around her, people would start thinking things. Rue asked what was wrong and assured him that he had nothing to worry about. Kyusuk hoped that spending time with her was not causing her any trouble and said that he understood. Returning to the present, Kyusuk realized that things had always been one-sided between him and Rue. There had always been things he wanted to say, but he had convinced himself that staying quiet was the right thing to do, so he had kept everything to himself. Comparing the past with the present, he realized that he was able to voice his opinions much more often now and wondered if that counted as personal growth. Unlike before, he felt that they now stood on more equal ground. As he walked, he spotted Rue and reacted in surprise, calling out her name. Wondering why she was there, he briefly thought she had come to make up with him. He apologized for running away earlier. Rue responded in disbelief, pointing out that they were still in the middle of a fight. Confused, Kyusuk listened as Rue explained that she had come to settle things as quickly as possible. She admitted that she still did not understand why they were supposed to celebrate and criticized him for saying they were celebrating something only to disappear afterward. Kyusuk admitted that he had no excuse for what he had done. He apologized, explaining that he knew how smart Rue was and had not believed he could convince her. Lacking confidence, he had run away instead. He confessed that it had hurt him a little when she reduced everything to increasing quantity and quality, then apologized once more. Rue questioned why he was the one apologizing. She explained that if they were both fighting, then both of them would be left with an uneasy feeling, so she believed she also needed to apologize for that. Surprised, Kyusuk listened as Rue admitted that she had been happy to see him finally talking back to her. She observed that he was someone who constantly held back his thoughts around her, and seeing him speak his mind earlier had genuinely made her happy. However, she still did not understand why he had run away. Kyusuk apologized for that as well. Rue remarked that she was glad they had fought. She then asked whether Kyusuk knew how lonely she had felt after he ran away. Confused that Rue had felt lonely, Kyusuk listened as she explained that she had recently completed a course on loneliness, so she knew exactly what it felt like. Kyusuk reminded her that he had told her about it, though he insisted that was not how it worked. Rue continued by explaining that she had felt uneasy, which was why she had come to find him. She had been worried that he might not return home if things remained unresolved. Rue explained that she liked being alone and found it easier that way, but ever since she had started living with Kyusuk, everything had been turned upside down. Kyusuk confirmed that what she was describing had nothing to do with increasing quantity and quality. Rue denied that it did and matter-of-factly admitted that she was lonely. Kyusuk remarked that he did not think she was supposed to say something like that with such a straight face. Rue explained that ever since they had begun living together, she had learned so much about herself, yet she still knew very little about Kyusuk, and she apologized. Kyusuk admitted that it was his fault for not speaking up. He realized he had been overthinking the idea that Rue was always right. He understood that both he and Rue should be thinking, worrying, and deciding together how to move forward. Since they were equals, he concluded that if there was something he wanted to say, he should simply say it. Rue asked once again what a monthversary actually was. Kyusuk explained that she could think of it like a birthday. Just as people celebrated each year that passed after they were born, they also celebrated a month or a year from the day they were married. He added that days like those held special meaning and that commemorating the day someone was born or the day they got married was important. Rue smacked him and remarked that he seemed to live a fun life. Kyusuk questioned why she had suddenly insulted him. Rue explained that she had meant it as a compliment, but Kyusuk pointed out that it had sounded entirely sarcastic. He admitted that the way she sometimes spoke without thinking often bothered him and that there were actually many things he wanted to say about it, though he had never been able to bring them up himself. Rue acknowledged his feelings, then reached for his hand and suggested they talk about those things while they walked home together. Kyusuk squeezed her hand and agreed. Rue asked what else was on his mind. Kyusuk pointed out that she could be a slob at times, throwing her shoes onto the floor whenever she came home and opening doors with her foot. Rue replied that he would simply have to get used to it. Kyusuk responded that she could end up getting hurt by doing those things. The scene shifted to their workplace, where Kurumi called out to Rue and invited her to eat lunch together. She remarked that Kyusuk had made another one of his cringe lunches and wondered whether Rue was not grossed out by it. Rue replied that his lunches tasted good. Kurumi complained that Rue always focused on the taste. Rue then noticed that Kurumi had brought another feast. Kurumi remarked that it was troublesome liking so many different kinds of food, adding that she considered herself a good cook, so Rue only had to say the word. Rue asked what word she meant. Kurumi explained that she had been so surprised to learn that Rue's husband was such a mom. She remarked that if he had been an ultra-hot gigachad, she would have whooped his ass, but he had looked so weak that it only made her want to whoop his ass anyway. Rue wondered whether every situation somehow led to someone getting whooped. Kurumi then brought up the new employee who had recently started and whom she had been asked to look after. She mentioned that he had kept staring at Rue while they were working, making her want to smack him. Rue told her to stop resorting to violence. Kurumi described the man as a pointless hottie and a high-caliber guy, noting that people around the office had been saying good things about him, though she remained unconvinced. Rue showed little interest, prompting Kurumi to remark that this was exactly the Rue she knew and loved. Kurumi warned that Rue's stunning beauty could attract all sorts of creeps but assured her that she would be fine as long as she stayed mindful. Rue asked for the new employee's name. Before Kurumi could answer, the man himself appeared, introducing himself as Kamawata Itsuki. He greeted Rue and remarked that it had been a long time. Chapter 6 continued with Kurumi reacting in surprise upon learning that Kamawata knew Rue. Rue apologized and asked who he was, prompting Kurumi to turn toward her in confusion and remark that Rue did not know Kamawata. Rue then reconsidered and said she thought she knew him from college. Kamawata confirmed that he and Rue had dated during college. Kurumi reacted in shock and asked if they really knew each other before realizing that he was Rue's ex-boyfriend. Rue greeted him and remarked that it really had been a long time. Kurumi told Rue to wait, pointing out that Kamawata was the boyfriend she had broken up with. She added that having an ex working at the same firm seemed suspicious. Kamawata remarked that Rue was not the kind of person to do something like that. Angered, Kurumi demanded to know how he could claim to understand Rue. Kamawata admitted that he had never truly understood Rue back then and that he simply could not keep up with her. He explained that they had broken up because he had not been able to measure up to her. He added that he had spent the past several years improving himself into someone worthy of dating Rue and had now brought the results of those efforts with him. He then asked Rue to consider dating him again. Rue replied that she was already married. Both Kamawata and Kurumi were stunned. Rue remarked that Kurumi had already known about her marriage. Kamawata quietly repeated to himself that Rue was already married, while Kurumi noted that Rue had both an ex-boyfriend and a husband. Rue wondered what was wrong with the two of them. After checking her phone and seeing that she needed to return to work, she excused herself and walked away. Kurumi told Kamawata that, regardless of the fact that he was Rue's ex-boyfriend, he should give up now that Rue was married. Kamawata responded that if Rue was married, then he would simply have to get her to divorce. Kurumi was left speechless before reacting with even greater shock. She remarked that trying to get back together with someone who was already married was creepy, though she admitted she could understand where Kamawata was coming from. She also questioned why Rue was not even asking why her ex had appeared at her workplace, concluding that there was something wrong with both of them. Around the office, several co-workers commented that Kamawata seemed cool, capable, and impressive. Kurumi internally rejected that opinion, thinking of him as nothing more than a creep plotting someone else's divorce. Later, Kamawata approached Rue and addressed her by name. Kurumi immediately stepped in, declaring that if he had any business with Rue, he would have to go through her first. Hearing this, Rue questioned who had said such a thing. Kurumi pointed out that Kamawata was trying to get back together with Rue and described him as a stalker who had followed her to the same firm. Rue firmly stated that she was already married. Kamawata admitted that he did want to date Rue again, but acknowledged that there was nothing he could do since she was already married. Kurumi then remarked that Rue was clearly a perfect being and that she had heard Kamawata was highly competent, although she personally did not agree. She questioned why the two of them had dated if they had not really needed each other and wondered why Rue had never mentioned having an ex-boyfriend. Rue tried to remember what it had been about. Kamawata explained that he had confessed to Rue during college, and she had simply agreed without much thought. Kurumi reacted in shock that something so simple had been enough for Kamawata to start dating Rue. She then turned to Rue, bent forward, and pleaded to go out with her as well. Rue repeated that she was already married. Kamawata continued, explaining that they had started dating, but in the end Rue had told him that she did not really feel the need to be in a relationship, which led to their breakup. Kurumi remarked that it was actually rather harsh, though she admitted it was exactly the sort of thing she expected from Rue. Kamawata explained that the experience had convinced him he needed to become a better person, someone who truly matched Rue, and whom she would feel the need to date. After graduating, he had gone overseas to study and improve himself. He added that he had even met Rue's parents and was always impressed by how they had managed to expand their business overseas. As Kamawata spoke, Kurumi noticed that he talked almost entirely about himself while Rue offered only brief responses. She found it impossible to imagine the two of them ever having dated and wondered why they had gotten together in the first place. A coworker soon called Kamawata over. He excused himself, said goodbye, and left. After he was gone, Kurumi directly asked Rue why she had dated him. Rue explained that when Kamawata confessed to her, she had thought there was value in experiencing romance instead of continuing her usual way of life, so she had agreed. Kurumi remarked that it was an answer typical of Rue, though in the end she had still concluded that there was no real need for the relationship. Kurumi then asked why Rue had decided to marry Kyusu. Rue answered that she had felt there was a need, while privately recalling that she had wanted to fool her parents. Kurumi pointed out that Rue had not felt the need to date Kamawata but did feel the need to marry Kyusu. Rue trailed off as she searched for the right words. Thinking about it more carefully, she began to wonder why she had chosen him in the first place. Kurumi called out to Rue, but Rue did not respond, making it clear that she was lost in thought. Kurumi sighed and reflected that Kamawata and Kyusuke were complete opposites. She wondered whether there had been any real reason for Rue choosing Kyusu. She then realized that if she could answer that question, she would understand Rue better than anyone else. Determined to figure it out, Kurumi told herself to think carefully. There had to be some special reason Rue had chosen someone like Kyusuke, and there had to be some good qualities about him. After thinking about it for a while, Kurumi went out to eat. Even then, she insisted to herself that there was absolutely nothing special about Kyusuke. He did not seem reliable at all, and she concluded that Kamawata was completely delusional about Rue. Although she admitted she did not know either man very well, she felt they were both creeps and wondered if Rue simply liked losers like Kyusuke. For a brief moment, she considered whether acting like a failure herself might make Rue notice her, but quickly dismissed the thought and reminded herself that she should be the one supporting Rue instead. She resolved to set those questions aside and focus on her meal. Just then, she spotted someone and was surprised to realize it was Kyusuke. She wondered if he had come to buy something and observed that he really did look like a mom, especially with a leek sticking out of his plastic shopping bag. She debated whether to simply watch him or approach him directly, thinking she might learn something interesting. Before she could decide, however, she was surprised to see Rue together with Kyusuke. Kurumi realized this was her chance to finally see how Rue acted around Kyusuke. She noticed that Kyusuke looked agitated and wondered what Rue was saying to him. Watching them, she was shocked when it seemed as though they were arguing. She questioned whether they actually did not get along and reflected that it was rare for Rue to get into a fight with anyone, let alone one where she would go toe-to-toe with the other person. She then realized they were at a store and guessed they were buying food before heading home. As she continued watching, she noticed that Rue's expression seemed softer than usual, with her eyebrows resting lower than they normally did. She wondered whether Rue only behaved that way around Kyusuke, then immediately dismissed the idea as impossible. After finishing their shopping, the two of them appeared unusually close. Kurumi realized there were so many sides of Rue she had never seen before. As she watched Rue, she felt that Rue wore an almost dreamy smile. Kurumi stared in awe, her eyes widening and her cheeks flushing as she thought about how lovely Rue's smile was. The moment she noticed Kyusuke beside her, however, her emotions shifted. She realized that beautiful smile had been directed at Kyusuke, not at her. Frustrated, she wondered what that man possibly had that made Rue show such an expressive face only in front of him. Meanwhile, Rue remarked that getting takeout once in a while should be fine, and Kyusuke agreed. They then noticed Kurumi eating nearby. Kyusuke commented that it had been a while since they had seen her and observed that she seemed to be enjoying her meal. Rue mentioned that Kurumi always brought 5 triple-decker bentos for lunch, leading Kyusuke to assume that she simply loved eating large meals. Without warning, Kurumi rushed over, grabbed Kyusuke by the arm, and dragged him away. Confused, Kyusuke asked where they were going, but Kurumi only instructed Rue to wait where she was. Rue remained standing there in confusion. After hurrying to another spot, Kurumi and Kyusuke both paused to catch their breath. Kurumi immediately demanded to know what was going on. Kyusuke looked at her in confusion. She explained that it was the first time she had ever seen Rue make such a gentle expression and that she could hardly believe Rue was capable of looking that soft. She pointed out the 3 lines on Rue's cheek and declared that it was unmistakably the face of someone who had fallen deeply in love. Kyusuke asked what kind of expression she meant. In response, Kurumi twisted his arm, internally branding him denser than a black hole. Kyusuke cried out in pain. Kurumi admitted that she had more or less known from the beginning, though seeing it for herself was frustrating. As much as she hated to admit it, The two of them genuinely seemed to get along well. Confused, Kyusuk asked what she meant. Kurumi told him to listen carefully. She acknowledged that Rue had chosen him, but doubted that someone with so little self-confidence could truly support her. She reminded him that Rue was the kind of person who could do anything on her own. Grabbing him by the shoulders, she shook him firmly, hoping he would realize what it meant to have been chosen by Rue and understand the responsibility that came with it. When he failed to respond immediately, she pressed him until he finally answered in agreement. Kurumi then asked what they had been arguing about and warned him not to tell her that he had hurt Rue. She added that whether he could keep Rue depended on his answer. Kyusuk replied that he thought he understood part of the issue already. He explained that he was always the one cooking at home, but Rue had suggested that they buy takeout sometimes instead. Kurumi remarked that Rue really was kind. Kyusuk admitted that he had genuinely wanted to cook for her, but he had already bought the ingredients and was carrying them when she made the suggestion. Kurumi found him to be a pain. She noted that he had still given in at the end. Kyusuk explained that Rue had only been trying to be considerate toward him. Kurumi then brought up Rue's smile, saying that she had never seen Rue look like that before. Kyusuk replied that they had simply been looking over what they had bought and chatting. He added that although Rue usually appeared stoic, she could smile just like anyone else. Kurumi smacked Kyusuk and exclaimed that Rue had smiled only because of him. Trembling, Kyusuk remarked that Kurumi was getting physical again. Kurumi insisted that Rue only acted that way in front of him and that the smile she had shown was completely genuine. She wondered whether they really were husband and wife, since they looked more like a couple who had only just started dating. Sighing, she remarked that quite a commotion had spread around the neighborhood ever since Rue's ex had appeared. She then told Kyusuk that she wanted him to clearly declare that he was Rue's husband. Confused, Kyusuk hesitated until Kurumi pressed him again, at which point he finally said the words. Without warning, Kurumi shouted that she was not handing Rue over to someone like him, leaving Kyusuk even more confused about whether she supported their relationship or opposed it. After dragging him along for a bit longer, Kurumi decided she had said everything she wanted to say and suggested they return before Rue started worrying. Kyusuk was left wondering what Kurumi had been talking about in the first place. When they returned, they found Rue still waiting. Kurumi apologized for keeping her waiting and explained that they had only been talking about how amazing Rue was. Rue remarked that there had been no reason for them to leave, then noticed Kyusuk's cheek and asked what had happened to it. Kurumi apologized and claimed that Kyusuk had been trying to show off despite her being the one who knew Rue best. Kyusuk immediately denied doing any such thing. Kurumi admitted that she had not been too sure about someone like him at first, but their slightly hopeless Kyusuk might actually be a good match for the flawless Rue. She reluctantly conceded that, from an outsider's perspective, the two of them looked good together, even if she hated admitting it. She added that if Rue ever decided to break up with him, she would be there for her and insisted that Rue had nothing to worry about. Rue replied that she had never been worried in the first place. Kurumi sighed that Kyusuk really was that kind of person for Rue before muttering a curse under her breath. She then announced that she was heading home and wished Rue all the happiness. Breaking into tears, she sniffled as she ran off, repeatedly insisting that she hated this. Watching her leave, Kyusuk wondered whether he had done something wrong. Rue assured him that Kurumi would be back to normal by the next day. She then took Kyusuk's hand and suggested that they go home together, and he agreed. As they walked, Kyusuk recalled Kurumi's remark about the commotion caused by Rue's ex and found himself wondering what she had meant by ex. Before he could think any further, someone nearby called out to Rue. It was Kamawata. Kyusuk and Kamawata looked at each other in mutual confusion. Rue asked whether Kamawata had also come to buy something, casually addressing him as Itsuki and remarking on the coincidence. Kyusuk was startled to hear Rue call Kamawata by his given name. Rue lightly patted Kyusuk before realizing that the two of them had never formally met. She introduced Kamawata as Itsuki, her ex-boyfriend, and then introduced Kyusuk as her husband. Both Kyusuk and Kamawata were visibly stunned. Kyusuk collapsed to the ground with a heavy thud. Kamawata reacted with even greater shock as he called out Kyusuk's name. Rue looked at them in surprise, realizing that the two already knew each other. Chapter 7 continued with Kamawata asking to get things straight. He confirmed that Rue had said Kyusuk was her husband. Rue replied that she had no idea the two already knew each other. Kamawata said it did not stop there. He explained that Kyusuk worked part-time for him and that he sometimes called on him for help with housekeeping. He remarked that even so, introducing her husband and her ex like this was something else entirely, and wondered if it was not going a bit too far. Rue replied that it was basic etiquette to introduce them to each other in that situation. Kamawata agreed but commented that it had turned Kyusuk into sand. Kyusuk remained on the ground. Rue apologized for shocking him like that before pulling Kyusuk to his feet and saying they should go home before the food got cold. She told Kamawata they would be leaving, and he replied that he would see her at work before waving goodbye. As they walked away, Kyusuk glanced back and asked Rei if Kamawata really was someone she had dated before. Rei answered that they were just co-workers now and repeated that she had not known the two already knew each other. Kyusuk found it hard to believe that someone as wonderful as Kamawata had dated Rei, then wondered why Rei had chosen him instead. He felt that he did not understand what was going on in Rue's head and admitted to himself that Kamawata was undoubtedly a far better match for her than someone like him. When they got home, they started eating. Rei remarked that there was nothing wrong with getting fast food sometimes and added that this kind of meal required no chopsticks and was easy to eat. She suggested they should do it every once in a while. Sitting across from her, Kyusuk was clearly worried. Rei observed that it was written all over his face, though he tried to deny it. Kyusuk thought to himself that Kamawata sounded exactly like Kurumi, and he felt dejected as he remembered that Kamawata had been Rue's ex-boyfriend. Rei explained that she had never mentioned it before because they had broken up after only 2 months, so she had not thought it was worth bringing up. Kyusuk asked if they had really broken up after only 2 months. Rei confirmed that they had, explaining that she had not seen any merit in having a boyfriend. Kyusuk quietly asked if Kamawata had not been good enough. He went on to say that Kamawata was better than him in every way. He described Kamawata as someone who did his job well, was considerate, reliable, cool, and kind. Kyusuk acknowledged that their marriage was only a pretense to fool Rue's parents, but he questioned whether it would not be better if she simply dated Kamawata instead. He pointed out that Kamawata was amazing and could provide Rue with exactly the kind of quality she was looking for, and that doing this with someone she had dated before made far more sense than doing it with him, who was only a friend. He finally asked why Rue had chosen him. As he squeezed his hands together, he admitted that he had truly not wanted to ask that question. Rue fell silent, and Kurumi's words echoed in her mind as she questioned whether Rei had really felt the need with Kyusuk. Rue apologized and admitted that she did not even know the answer herself. Kyusuk was taken aback that she did not even try to soften the response. Trembling, he wondered if he had just been dumped. Rue then stated clearly that Kyusuk was the only person with whom she could have this pretend marriage. Reaching for the food, Rue admitted that she simply could not think of any clear reason. She explained that whenever she was with Kyusuk, people always seemed to assume they were a couple. She recalled how their high school friends had often pointed it out, saying they looked like they were dating or were especially close. According to everyone else, they genuinely looked like a couple even when they were not. On the other hand, no one had ever said anything similar when she had been dating Kamawata. Rue concluded that, objectively speaking, Kyusuk was better at creating that quality. Kyusuk pointed out that perhaps no one had thought Rue and Kamawata were dating because she had never told anyone, and people could not picture her having a boyfriend at all. Rue reasoned that while people said they could not imagine her having a boyfriend, they still thought she and Kyusuk were dating whenever they were together despite the fact that they were not. She then asked whether he knew why. Kyusuk asked the question back, but Rue admitted that she did not know. Kyusuk thought that Rue might be unsure of her own feelings, both toward him and toward Kamawata. He remained convinced that she would be better off with Kamawata and still could not understand why she had chosen to be with him. Rue then showed him her phone and mentioned that she had forgotten to tell him a new puppy cake game had been released. Kyusuk reacted in shock and wondered if it had really been 6 years since the previous title, Future of the Mysterious Steamed Fruit. Rue confirmed that the new game was Puppy Cake 6, Legend of the Hot Cake Mix, and told him it was already on sale. Kyusuk excitedly suggested they go buy it because he definitely wanted to play it. Rue pointed out that they could simply download it instead. Kyusuk argued that the boxed version was better because it felt like something they truly owned. Rue countered that the downloadable version would let them play without having to insert the cartridge every time. Kyusuk insisted that inserting the cartridge was part of the experience, and that collecting more boxed versions would make him proud whenever he looked at his game collection. Rue replied that this was not enough of a reason and argued that, realistically speaking, being able to play without repeatedly inserting and removing cartridges would be much more convenient. She added that they could start playing the downloadable version immediately. Kyusuk countered that, realistically, the downloadable version would quickly fill up their storage space. Rue exclaimed that they could simply buy an SD card. Kyusuk responded that it would be a hassle trying to remember which game was stored on which card, making the boxed version better because they could easily see what games they owned. The two fell silent for a moment before Rue admitted that, thinking long-term, he was right. Kyusuk beamed after finally managing to convince her. They agreed to buy the game on Rue's next day off, and Kyusuk responded with excitement. That day eventually arrived, and they went to the game store. Kyusuk gazed at the display in awe. Holding up the game box, he thought about how long he had been waiting for it and confirmed that it really was the new puppy cake. He hugged the box, delighted that he would get to see Kanako cake again. Rue noted that he still loved Kanako cake, and Kyusuk readily admitted that he did. He wondered what Kanako looked like now and reflected on how he had always been curious about what had happened to him after the final scene of the previous game. Kanako had continued protecting his friends while the fruitless fought the fruitful, and the battle had carried on even as the fruit inside him began to decay. Afterward, no one had known his whereabouts. Rue suggested that he might have turned into a durian cake or something similar. Kyusuke remarked that she could have at least chosen a more popular cake. A shiver ran through him as he worried about what he would do if Kanako was not in the game or had lost his memories. Rue pointed out that Kanako was on the cover, which meant he was fine. Rue stared intently at Kyusuke. Startled, he jumped back and wondered what was wrong. Rue laughed softly, leaving Kyusuke confused. She commented that she thought Kyusuke really was something. When he asked why, she pointed out that he did not even use Kanako. Kyusuke explained that he used matcha because he was easier to handle. Rue observed that Kyusuke still claimed to love Kanako despite him being difficult to use. Although she admitted she did not really understand it, she found it interesting. She remarked that it was simply the kind of person he was and a way of thinking that she herself did not have. Chuckling, Rue admitted that this was why she did not know the reason, but being with him was simply so much fun. Kyusuke blushed deeply and asked if she truly meant that. Rue assured him that she was serious and that what she had said was not part of any lovey-dovey training. Kyusuke reacted in surprise. At that moment, Kurumi appeared in his thoughts, telling him that he needed to understand what it meant to be chosen by Rue, and that this was the first time she had ever looked at someone that way. Kyusuke realized that whenever he was having fun, Rue was having fun as well, and that they both felt the same. He thought that perhaps this was why everyone saw them as a couple, because they genuinely enjoyed being together. He finally began to believe that perhaps Rue really was in love. Kyusuke blushed, hurriedly corrected his thoughts, and repeatedly shook his head. He admitted that he still did not know why Rue had chosen him. He told himself that whatever the reason was, it did not matter. It did not matter whether Kamawata was a better person than he was, nor how inferior he might be in comparison. The only thing he knew was that it had to be him. Swallowing nervously, he reached out, gently took Rue's hand, and softly called her name. Kyusuke admitted that compared to him, Kamawata was smarter, cooler, and more reliable. Rue replied that she was not perfect. Kyusuke hesitated and stumbled over his words before managing to say that he simply wanted her to know that he thought about her more than anyone else and that she was always on his mind. He immediately became confused by his own words, wondering why it sounded as though he were about to confess. Overcome with anxiety, he faltered before clarifying that what he had really meant was that he hoped she would never come to hate him. Rue asked why she ever would. Kyusuke apologized, explaining that he just became very nervous and needed to gain more confidence first. He then suggested they head home and play puppy cake. As Kyusuke stepped forward, Rue reached out and took his hand again. He called her name and wondered what was wrong. Rue apologized and said it was nothing, adding that she simply could not think of anything that would make her hate him. She explained that she had merely been at a loss for words. Kyusuke stared at her in shock before asking why. Tears welled up in his eyes. Rue noticed and asked if he was crying again and whether she had said something wrong. Kyusuke assured her that she had not. He admitted that he was simply so happy because he had never known she thought of him that way. Rue replied that of course she did and called him silly before telling him to stop crying. Kyusuke then realized how close Rue's face was to his. Until recently, he had disliked physical contact like this, yet he did not know why he no longer minded it. Suddenly, he jumped back in alarm, feeling that this really might kill him. Rue asked why. Kyusuke explained that her face had been too close. Rue remarked that it had taken him a while to notice. Kyusuke apologized for being so spineless. Rue told him it was fine because that was simply who he was. Kyusuke thanked her, smiled, and declared that he would do everything he could for her. He suggested having an omelet since they were going all out today. Rue wondered if that was what going all out meant and remarked that, if so, perhaps she would make it instead. Kyusuke reminded her that it was her day off. Rue replied that she had had so much fun cooking the last time though. Kyusuke reflected that it was not about what-ifs or maybes. He had always thought about Rue's feelings, but whether those feelings were love or hate was for Rue to decide, not him. All he wanted was to cherish her. That was why it did not matter whether Rue loved him or hated him. Either way, he would accept however she felt. That was all he wished for. At the same time, Kamawata was speaking with Rue's mother over the phone. He admitted that he did not think it would work, even if it were him. Rue's mother replied that she had been so worried when she learned it was not Kamawata, and that she did not know whether Rue had ended up marrying a decent man. Kamawata said he understood and remarked that perhaps he would pay Rue's house a visit next time. After the call ended, he thought that Kyusuke could not support Rue, nor could Rue handle Kyusuke. At this rate, the person he loved would only end up miserable. With that in mind, Kamawata decided that he needed to make them divorce. Meanwhile, back at their apartment, Rue wondered whether there was such a thing as a monthivernary for getting married, then questioned whether there was one for getting divorced as well. She asked Kyusuke whether he wanted to celebrate it when they divorced. Kyusuke reacted in shock and immediately rejected the idea, insisting that they were not doing that and that there was nothing to celebrate. Chapter 8 began at the law firm, where Kamawata approached Rue and asked whether she would mind if he came over the next time she was free. Rue confirmed that he meant her apartment, and Kamawata replied that he did. Rue asked why, but before Kamawata could explain, Kurumi interrupted. She glared at him and angrily accused him of thinking that being Rue's ex gave him the right to visit her home. Kamawata replied that she would have to forgive him because he had something he needed to discuss with Rue. Rue answered that she did not mind, leaving Kurumi stunned. Kurumi warned Rue that she could not simply let a con man into her home just because he was good-looking. Kamawata explained that he had actually been invited. When Kurumi demanded to know by whom, he revealed that Rue's parents had asked him to come. Rue and Kurumi were both taken aback. Kamawata explained that he had met Rue's parents while studying abroad and that they had helped him greatly. He said he was grateful that they had taken a liking to him and that they still kept in touch from time to time. He added that Rue apparently had not contacted them much since getting married, so they had become worried and discussed the matter with him the other day before asking him to check on how things were going. Hearing that, Rue broke into a nervous sweat. The scene shifted to Rue returning home, where Kyusuke welcomed her. Rue informed him that Kamawata would be coming over on her next day off. Kyusuke reacted in surprise. Rue declared that it was time to show the results of their lovey-dovey training. Kyusuke wondered why this was happening so suddenly. Rue explained that, in essence, it would be Itsuki coming over instead of her parents. She admitted that the situation was serious. If Itsuki discovered that their marriage was only a pretense to fool her parents, the consequences would not be pleasant after he informed them. She explained that her parents liked Itsuki, and if they learned the truth, they would certainly try to make her marry him instead. Kyusuke asked if that meant they would have to act lovey-dovey in front of Itsuki, and Rue confirmed that it was exactly what they had to do. Kyusuke fell into despair, feeling that it was all over. When Rue asked why, he admitted that having her ex watch them flirt was bad enough, but the fact that the same ex was also his client made the situation unbearably awkward. He felt so uncomfortable that he wanted to die. In his mind, Itsuki was an amazing person who could not be compared to someone like him, making the thought of acting lovey-dovey in front of him even more difficult. No matter how much confidence he had gained, it all disappeared whenever Itsuki was around. He had no idea what would happen to him, but he reminded himself that he had to do it for Rue. Even as he wondered how he was supposed to manage it, Rue remarked that she could hear him thinking. Kyusuke declared that he would act lovey-dovey. Rue replied that she was glad they were on the same page. Although Kyusuke knew it would be difficult, he resolved to do it for Rue. Rue thanked him and declared that they would convince Itsuki and fool her parents. The day finally arrived. Kyusuke announced that everything was ready, and Rue noted that he had prepared food to welcome their guest. She remarked that Kyusuke was amazing because, if it had been her, she would never have prepared so much food. Kyusuke insisted that it was not excessive. When the doorbell rang, he announced that Itsuki had arrived, and Rue offered to answer the door. She responded through the intercom with a greeting. Just as Itsuki was about to greet her in return, someone suddenly interrupted him. Kurumi shouted through the intercom, demanding to be let in as well. She declared that Kamawata being the only visitor worried her sick and accused him of being a stalker. The two immediately began arguing outside. Kamawata pointed out that what Kurumi had done amounted to assault, while Kurumi insisted that stalkers did not deserve any right. Kamawata shot back that Kurumi herself looked like a stalker. Hearing the commotion, Kyusuke became distressed, realizing that Kurumi was there as well and that she did not exactly like him, making the situation seem impossible. Rue agreed that Kurumi would be even harder to convince, but she also realized that this was their chance to convince both of them. She spoke through the intercom and told Kurumi that she could come in. Kurumi thanked Rue. Kyusuke asked whether Rue was sure about this, and Rue assured him that everything would be fine because she had a plan. Kyusuke was left with a very bad feeling about the situation. Kurumi remarked that she wished she were the only one visiting Rue. Kamawata admitted that he had also wanted to come alone. Kurumi accused him of definitely trying to pull a fast one if he had come by himself, but Kamawata denied it. Kurumi added that it was creepy how Kamawata knew Rue's parents. Declaring that she would open the door herself, she instructed Kamawata to follow behind her because she intended to greet Rue before he did. Kamawata sighed and remarked that, in any case, he was only there to find out what Rue and Kyusuke's relationship was truly like. Kurumi stepped inside, thanked Rue for having her, and called out to her. Rue immediately pulled Kyusuke close and remarked that she was glad everyone was there. She welcomed them to their home and hoped they would enjoy themselves. Kyusuke wondered if this was Rue's idea of acting lovey-dovey. Kamawata thanked them for inviting him and quietly wondered what was going on with the two of them. Kurumi interpreted Rue's behavior as her way of showing affection. Kamawata then noticed the delicious aroma in the room and wondered if Kyusuke had done the cooking. Kyusuke explained that he had gone all out after learning they would be having guests. Kamawata acknowledged that and remarked that he was happy to have the chance to eat Kyusuke's cooking. Kurumi found it unsettling that Kamawata even knew how Kyusuke cooked. Rue proudly explained that her dear Kyusuke had prepared all of the dear dishes before telling both guests to make sure they finished everything on their plate. She then tightly squeezed Kyusuke and urged him to come inside. Kamawata wondered whether Rue had always been like this, while Kurumi admired her and wished Rue would call her dear Kurumi as well. Kamawata praised Kyusuke for being amazing as always. Kyusuke thanked him and invited everyone to take a seat. Kurumi declared that she was going to try the food and hurried over to the table as soon as she sat down. Kyusuke then told Rue to have a seat as well. Rue agreed, but instead of sitting in her own chair, she suddenly sat directly on Kyusuke's lap. Kyusuke was stunned and wondered what in the world was happening. He told Rue that she had been acting strangely and asked whether she could sit down normally. Rue insisted that they were supposed to look lovey-dovey like this. Kyusuke denied that they were. Rue questioned him again about whether they really were not. Kyusuke apologized to their guests and explained that Rue looked tired from work, so she seemed a little out of it. Kyusuke then brought up the fact that Kamawata and Kurumi appeared to know each other. Kamawata explained that the three of them worked at the same law firm, although he and Kurumi could not really get along because she was always like that. Kurumi looked confused and questioned what he meant by like that. Kamawata remarked that he was surprised because he had never imagined Kyusuke would become Rue's husband. He observed that Kyusuke was a gentle soul, so it might be difficult for him to handle someone as headstrong as Rue. He added that he hoped their personalities complemented and supported one another. Kyusuke silently reflected on how kind Kamawata was. Despite the awkwardness of the situation and the fact that their marriage was only a pretense, he resolved to take Kamawata's words to heart for the sake of the act as well. Kamawata then expressed his interest in hearing how the two of them had come to know each other. Kurumi eagerly declared that she wanted to hear the story as well. She asked how Rue and Kyusuke had gone from meeting each other to dating and eventually getting married. Rue explained that she and Kyusuke had been friends since high school. Kurumi complained that it was unfair. Rue continued by explaining that they had stayed in touch even after graduating from high school and college, and that they had eventually shared their feelings with each other. She added that she had been the one to confess. Hearing that, Kurumi blushed. Kyusuke quietly whispered to Rue that all of the physical contact felt unnatural. Rue told him to look closely at her face. Kyusuke asked what she meant. Rue explained that she was doing the classic smug face with a grain of rice trope, and that he was supposed to notice something on her face before removing the grain of rice from her cheek. Kyusuke asked whether she could refrain from intentionally putting rice on her face. As he watched them, Kamawata began to feel that something had seemed forced for a while now. He remarked that Rue was not the type to worry about how others saw her or to force herself to do anything. Kurumi immediately praised Rue as exactly that kind of great person. Kamawata told Kurumi to stay quiet before explaining that he was not doubting them, but that everything simply felt too deliberate. Rue quietly whispered to Kyusuke that they were supposed to look like a couple, yet somehow the opposite was happening. Kyusuke sighed in frustration, painfully aware of how awkward it was to flirt in front of his wife's ex, who also happened to be his client. He wished he could disappear. If Kamawata continued growing suspicious, he would eventually tell Rue's parents, and Kyusuke felt that they were already at their limit. Rue held on to Kyusuke. Noticing her concern, Kyusuke resolved that he had to do something. He realized that the effort could not come from Rue alone, which meant it was his turn to step up. He told himself that if it was for Rue, then he could do it. Calling her name softly, he reached over and gently brushed the grain of rice from her cheek. He assured her that she did not have to force herself to do anything. Trembling, he declared that he could handle it and would show everyone what it truly meant to be lovey-dovey. He confidently told Rue to leave everything to him, although Rue quietly remarked that he did not look very convincing while saying it. Kyusuke then declared that it was his turn. Turning to their guests, he mentioned that he had almost forgotten about the desserts he had prepared for later and asked whether everyone would like some pudding. Kurumi remarked that his house husband energy was overwhelming. Kamawata happily accepted, admitting that he enjoyed desserts. Kyusuke announced that he would go get them. Rue offered to help, but Kyusuke gently patted her shoulder and told her to stay where she was. He reminded Rue that it was finally her day off and that he wanted her to relax, asking her to leave everything to him. Kamawata blushed as he watched the exchange. Rue insisted that she also had to entertain their guests and that there was no way she would let Kyusuke do all the work himself. Kyusuke inwardly lamented that Rue was supposed to follow his lead and simply stay put. Kamawata found himself unable to understand why Rue was being so stubborn about it, while Kurumi thought that this was exactly the Rue she knew. Seeing an opportunity to turn the situation around, Kyusuke took Rue's hand and asked whether she would allow him to indulge himself. Kyusuke asked Rue if she could carry the plates for him, and Rue agreed. Reaching toward the shelves, Rue asked where the dessert plates were. Kyusuke warned that it was dangerous for her to stretch like that and told her he would get them instead. Rue asked if he was sure. Kyusuk thought to himself that this was the natural kind of lovey-dovey behavior he had wanted. Watching them, Kamawata remarked that Kyusuk's thoughtfulness was very impressive. His attention then fell on a photograph, and he asked whether it was from their wedding ceremony. Kyusuk confirmed that it was and silently wondered when Rue had put it there. Kurumi exclaimed that Rue looked lovely in her dress. Kamawata pointed out that neither of them appeared to be smiling in the picture. Kyusuk explained that he had been so nervous that his smile had become stiff, while Rue was not good at smiling, making it difficult to take a good photograph. He added that they simply were not accustomed to that kind of occasion. Since it was a precious memory to them, they had decided to keep that picture. Rather than forcing smiles, they felt that the honest moment reflected who they truly were. Rue blushed at his words. Kyusuk realized that he had never known he was capable of acting like this. Kamawata commented that he could clearly see how much Kyusuk loved Rue. Flustered, Kyusuk found himself unable to respond. Rue immediately grabbed his hand and pulled him away, startling him. Once they reached the bedroom, Rue reminded Kyusuk that he had been supposed to agree, or their guests would become suspicious. Kyusuk admitted that hearing things like that made him too flustered to say anything because they were true. Rue grew frustrated and asked how they were supposed to get rid of their guests' doubts. She urged Kyusuk not to give up and insisted that he had to keep trying. Fighting back tears, Kyusuk admitted that he did not think he could do it because it was so embarrassing that he felt as though he might die. Rue sighed and concluded that Kyusuk's plan had failed, suggesting that they should use her plan instead. Kyusuk objected, insisting that Rue's plan was even worse than his own. Confused by the response, Rue began hitting him with a pillow. She complained that she could not believe the way Kyusuk had been talking to her lately. Kyusuk reminded her that she had been the one who wanted them to be equals. Rue questioned why he was getting so flustered, pointing out that while he claimed her plan did not work, his own had not worked either. Kyusuk explained that he was struggling to deal with all of his emotions, although he believed his displays of affection had at least been working. At that moment, Kurumi suddenly called out to them and told them to wait a minute. She questioned what they were doing together in the bedroom and was shocked that it was Rue's room and that they were doing such things there. Both Kyusuk and Rue froze in place. Kurumi then noticed the pillow with the word, "Yes," printed on it and immediately collapsed. Kyusuk hurriedly called out to her in shock. As Kurumi lay there, she mumbled that sleeping together was reality. Kamawata calmly remarked that it was fine because it was only natural. Kyusuk was confused by that comment. Kamawata then asked whether Kyusuk was alright, and Kyusuk assured him that he was. He suggested they have some dessert, and Kamawata agreed. After laying the unconscious Kurumi on the sofa, Kyusuk remarked that the dessert would pair well with tea and wondered where it was kept. Rue told him that the tea was in the second drawer on the right and added that she wanted coffee for herself instead. Kyusuk replied that he already knew and pointed out that Kamawata did not drink coffee. Rue bumped him and quietly whispered for him not to be stupid. She reminded him that he was supposed to respond by calling her honey. Kyusuk whispered back that acting like that was too cringe-worthy and wondered what kind of shoujo manga Rue had been reading. Rue pointed out that they had not been very lovey-dovey in the way they spoke to each other. Kyusuk replied that they did not have to try that hard to look like a couple. Kyusuk offered to make Rue her coffee and told her to sit down and relax. Rue replied that she had already told him she wanted to entertain their guests as well, so she would prepare the drinks herself. Kyusuk admitted that he was happy to hear her say that, but Rue cut him off, remembering that Kurumi also drank coffee and deciding to prepare one for her too. As Kamawata watched them, he felt that the two of them somehow did not seem unnatural. At that moment, he realized something. Kyusuk apologized for the wait as he set the drinks on the table. He also apologized that he and Rue had been bickering more than usual. Kamawata told him not to worry and thanked him. Kyusuk then asked why Rue was not sitting down as well. Rue replied that she had been the one sitting the whole time and told him to sit instead. Kyusuk answered that all he had been doing was household chores and reminded her that it was her day off too. Rue insisted that Kyusuk sit down and drink his tea. Kyusuk remarked that she was being unreasonable. Rue realized that they had quickly turned the situation into an argument and noted to herself that they would never clear anyone's suspicions like this. Kyusuk also realized that he had gotten carried away and immediately regretted it. Kyusuk apologized for what had happened earlier. He explained that he had said things that made it seem as though he was doubting something. Rue responded with a sigh. Kamawata then explained that he had initially thought they were forcing themselves to act like a couple, but after watching them interact, he realized that it was not forced at all. Instead, they were simply trying to support each other in their own awkward way. He remarked that he had never seen Rue express herself so openly before, and likewise had never seen Kyusuk lose his composure like that. He observed that being together made both of them far more expressive and emotionally open, convincing him that each of them had become an important part of the other's life. He added that he was certain Rue's parents would be delighted to learn that she had married someone as wonderful as Kyusuk. Kyusuk replied that he somehow understood what Kamawata meant. Both he and Rue felt an overwhelming sense of relief as they realized they had managed to fool him. Kyusuk admitted that he did not know how they had pulled it off, but they had succeeded. Fighting back tears, he thanked Kamawata and promised that he would make Rue happy. At the same time, he silently apologized to Kamawata for deceiving him. Rue questioned why Kyusuk was crying. Kurumi suddenly declared that she would make sure to be part of that happiness as well. Startled, Kyusuk exclaimed in surprise and wondered when she had woken up. Kamawata calmly replied that it would not work because Rue was in love with Kyusuk. Kurumi immediately declared that she would not mind being the rebound if Rue ever broke up with Kyusuk. Alarmed, Kyusuk asked her not to talk as though they were definitely going to separate, even though he privately admitted that divorce had always been part of their arrangement. He reflected that they had managed to convince Kamawata for the time being, but no matter how much Kamawata celebrated or how jealous Kurumi became, their marriage was still nothing more than a fake. The thought made him tightly clutch his clothes. Some time later, Kamawata announced that it was time for him to leave. He called for Kurumi, but she insisted that she wanted to stay with Rue. As she walked forward, she ran straight into a wall. Kamawata calmly pointed out that it was a wall. Kurumi then began repeatedly banging her head and hand against it before rolling around on the floor, lamenting that she could not accept the reality that someone other than her was sleeping with Rue. Kamawata told her to come along and stop causing a scene in Rue's home. Kyusuk turned to Rue and remarked that it seemed they had somehow cleared everyone's suspicions. Rue, however, did not respond. Instead, she stared blankly into space as she wondered whether she really was in love with Kyusuk. Kyusuk called out to her again and asked whether she was lost in thought. Suddenly, Kamawata called out to them. Only Kyusuk responded. Kamawata then held out a divorce form toward him. The document already had Kamawata's name written on it. Kyusuk stared at the form with wide eyes as sweat formed on his face while Kamawata questioned what the meaning of it was. Chapter 11 opens with Kyusuk telling Rue that he plans to visit the apartment the following day. Rue remarks that the day has arrived sooner than expected before asking whether he is truly certain about moving out. Kyusuk quietly confirms that he is. Reflecting on the past 2 months, Kyusuk notes that it has already been that long since they entered into their pretend marriage. During that time, he has taken responsibility for the household chores while Rue has supported them financially. He explains that he cannot continue relying on her forever. Since they originally agreed that their arrangement would last only 100 days, he believes he needs to become independent before that deadline arrives. Looking over at the calendar, he remarks that it is finally time to begin preparing for life on his own. Rue quietly acknowledges his reasoning, but her thoughts drift back to the promise they made when their fake marriage first began. Lately, she has found herself repeatedly wondering why they cannot simply continue living together as they are. Even so, the memory of how deeply she might hurt Kyusuk if things went wrong makes her hesitate. The fear of causing him pain once again prevents her from voicing those thoughts. Instead, she asks about the apartment itself, remembering that Kyusuk had described it as unusually inexpensive. Kyusuk explains that it is a 2-story apartment building more than 50 years old and that the available room is located on the 2nd floor. Rue is immediately surprised by the building's age. Kyusuk continues by explaining that the apartment is never completely occupied, as one room always seems to remain vacant. Since the other units are occupied, he assumes the remarkably low rent is simply due to the building's age. Using his phone, Kyusuk shows Rue a photograph of the property. The rundown appearance of the building leaves her visibly shocked, prompting her to ask whether it is truly the apartment he intends to rent. Kyusuk calmly confirms that it is. Still staring at the image, Rue questions whether he is really certain about choosing such a place. Later, the two arrive to meet the real estate agent, who greets them with an unusually gloomy expression and thanks them for coming. Kyusuk politely returns the greeting. Rue, however, looks puzzled and quietly asks whether this somber man is really the real estate agent Kyusuk had mentioned. Kyusuk confirms that he is. Wondering if something is wrong with him, Rue watches as the agent simply offers to show them around the property. Upon arriving at the apartment building, Kyusuk remarks that it looks far more impressive in person than it had in the photograph. Rue, on the other hand, is visibly alarmed by its condition and struggles to understand how he could possibly think so. Kyusuk comments that the building has a certain charm, describing it as a place that has withstood the passage of time. The agent adds that although the building is more than 50 years old, its earthquake resistance should reassure any prospective tenant. As they begin climbing toward the 2nd floor, every step causes the staircase to creak loudly beneath them. The unsettling sounds only heighten Rue's unease, making her feel as though the entire structure could collapse at any moment. She quietly asks Kyusuk whether he is truly comfortable with the situation, pointing out that both the building and the real estate agent give off an extremely suspicious impression. Kyusuk admits that the agent does seem somewhat unusual but insists that this man was the one who managed to find a livable apartment for someone in his financial situation. Before the tour can continue, the nearby window suddenly rattles violently. A resident abruptly appears outside and calls out to Kyusuk, warning him not to move into the building. Claiming to speak only for Kyusuk's own good, the man recounts an old rumor that many years earlier, a parent and child had died there in a murder-suicide. According to local legend, the building had since become cursed, and anyone who moved into it would eventually disappear. Without reacting to the story, the real estate agent calmly shuts the window on the resident and awkwardly apologizes. He explains that one of the tenants simply has an unhealthy fascination with the occult and assures them that the room they are about to see has nothing whatsoever to do with those rumors. Rue remains unconvinced. She insists that the entire place is clearly bad news and urges Kyusuk to reconsider his decision before it is too late. After pausing to think for a moment, Kyusuk suggests that they at least inspect the room before making any judgments. His response catches Rue off guard, reminding her of something she had nearly forgotten. She realizes that Kyusuk has never been the type to fear ghosts or supernatural stories. The real estate agent unlocks the apartment door and announces that the room before them would become Kyusuk's if he decided to rent it. Kyusuk quietly steps inside and immediately lets out a surprised sound as he takes in the unexpectedly spacious interior. Kyusuk looked around the apartment with genuine interest, remarking that he liked its traditional Japanese-style interior. Rue, however, could only stare at the aging room in disbelief, commenting that it was difficult to imagine a more rundown apartment. The real estate agent began explaining the property's features. The unit consisted of a single room with one closet. While it included access to a shared kitchen and communal toilets, it did not have a private bathroom. Instead, residents typically used a nearby public bathhouse. Rue was immediately taken aback by the lack of basic facilities, particularly the shared restroom and absence of a bath. Kyusuk, however, calmly remarked that he actually enjoyed visiting public bathhouses. Still unconvinced, Rue asked whether he was truly certain about choosing such a dilapidated place. The agent attempted to highlight one of the apartment's advantages, explaining that it received plenty of natural sunlight. He then struggled noticeably to force open the window. Watching him wrestle with it, Rue pointed out that even the window barely functioned. Once it finally slid open, a thick cloud of dust poured into the room, prompting Rue to complain about just how filthy everything was. Moving on, the agent introduced the apartment's closet. After receiving permission, Kyusuk opened it and commented that it was surprisingly spacious. Looking around optimistically, he observed that most of the stains appeared to be nothing more than accumulated dirt that could easily be removed with a thorough cleaning. Rue immediately disagreed, insisting that several of the dark stains looked disturbingly similar to blood. To her, they suggested that some kind of crime must have occurred there. As she continued inspecting the room, Rue noticed paper seals attached to the back of one of the doors and wondered whether it had even been meant to be opened. Suddenly, her attention shifted behind Kyusuk, and she cried out in alarm after seeing what appeared to be a ghostly hand resting on his shoulder. Confused, Kyusuk looked behind himself but found nothing there. Before Rue could recover, a quiet voice whispered from behind her, warning that something was standing at her own back. Rather than panic, Rue instinctively clenched her fist and declared that whatever spirit was present should not test her patience. Alarmed by her reaction, Kyusuk hurriedly pleaded with her not to do anything reckless. Rue refused to back down, insisting that he should not stop her because the apartment was clearly cursed and deserved judgment. Kyusuk responded with unexpected sympathy. He reasoned that if a curse truly existed, it likely came from people who had suffered unimaginably during their lives. Rather than fearing such spirits, he believed they should be pitted. Even if ghosts really haunted the building, he argued that they would simply be lonely souls deserving compassion rather than violence. Rue protested that ghosts' feelings were not the issue. Her concern was that Kyusuk himself could be placed in genuine danger by living there. When Kyusuk asked whether she truly believed ghosts could attack him, Rue answered without hesitation that she did. Watching him remain completely unfazed, Rue remembered that Kyusuk had always been the type of person who could calmly smile through ghost stories. It was not merely that he tolerated the supernatural. He seemed willing to accept it as part of everyday life. Kyusuk even remarked that if ghosts really did inhabit the apartment, then he would never have to feel lonely because he would never truly be alone. Nearby, one of the unseen spirits quietly observed that such a mindset was almost like attaining enlightenment. Unable to comprehend his perspective, Rue wondered whether this strange optimism was simply another example of Kyusuk's hopelessly romantic nature. Seeing how genuinely pleased he appeared with the apartment only made her anxiety grow stronger. At the same time, she questioned whether she was becoming overly protective. She feared that if she continued pushing too hard, she might only end up hurting Kyusuk again. Even so, she could not suppress her concern. She warned him once more that remaining in such a place was dangerous and that something terrible could happen to him. Kyusuk gently reminded her that he had worked hard to find an apartment he could finally afford after such a long search. Rue answered by telling him that he could simply continue living at her home until the time came for their planned divorce. Kyusuk shook his head, explaining that he could not allow himself to keep depending on Rue forever. Rue insisted that this was not the time for him to worry about pride or independence. Hearing her casually mention divorce, the real estate agent reacted with visible surprise. Rue immediately silenced him with a sharp glare, making it clear that he should stay out of the matter. Kyusuk quietly called Rue's name, trying to calm the situation. The moment she heard his gentle voice, Rue covered her face in frustration. She realized that she had allowed her emotions to take over once again, turning the discussion into an argument. Feeling guilty, Rue reflected that the decision ultimately belonged to Kyusuk, not her. He had devoted so much time and effort to finding a place he could finally call his own, yet instead of supporting him, she felt as though she had only stood in his way. After a long silence, Kyusuk apologized to Rue for causing her concern. Rue quietly replied that if he truly believed the apartment was the right choice, then he should go through with it. Kyusuk assured her that everything would be fine and gently remarked that she worried too much. Maintaining his usual optimism, he joked that he would manage even if he ended up sharing the apartment with a ghost. The real estate agent quickly agreed, insisting that there were no ghosts in the building to begin with. Turning the conversation back to business, the agent asked Kyusuk whether he had reached a decision about the apartment. Without hesitation, Kyusuk firmly declared that he wanted to rent it. Satisfied with his answer, the agent suggested returning to the office to complete the necessary paperwork. Before they left, however, the agent asked who would be serving as Kyusuk's guarantor. The question immediately caused Kyusuk to hesitate. Unable to answer, he fell silent. Sensing his uncertainty, the agent suggested postponing the process if he intended to consult his parents first. He explained that Kyusuk could contact him again once everything had been arranged, and they could continue the application afterward. Rue quietly called Kyusuk's name, waiting to hear his decision. After gathering himself, Kyusuk replied that he would speak with his mother before proceeding. The agent acknowledged his response and concluded the viewing for the day. Once they had left the apartment, Kyusuk softly called out to Rue and asked whether they could stop by a cafe before heading home. Seated together inside the cafe, Kyusuk admitted that he needed to call his mother and ask her to become his guarantor. Even as he spoke, his hesitation was unmistakable. He reflected on the fact that he had been thrown out of his family home and confessed that the prospect of contacting her filled him with fear. Gradually, Kyusuk began explaining the circumstances that had led to their estrangement. After his father's death shortly after his birth, his mother had raised him alone while shouldering countless hardship. As he grew older, his grandmother eventually required constant care, and Kyusuk devoted himself to looking after her. He believed his mother had struggled under the weight of everything that had happened, often returning home exhausted and irritable. Although he understood the pain she had endured from losing the man she loved, he admitted that he had always been afraid of her. When his beloved grandmother eventually passed away, Kyusuk was unable to recover from the loss. Consumed by grief, he lost his motivation and direction in life. His mother, frustrated by his inability to move forward, finally told him to stop being a burden before forcing him to leave the house. Ever since then, he had been too frightened to contact her again. Listening quietly, Rue gently called his name. Reaching across the table, she softly took his hand and reassured him. She suggested that perhaps his mother had only wanted him to become independent rather than abandon him completely. Now that he had found a place to live on his own, Rue believed his mother might actually be pleased to see the progress he had made. Encouraging him to stay calm, she told him to speak honestly and assured him that everything would be all right. Kyusuk thanked Rue for her support and promised to do his best. Rue replied that she would continue holding his hand for as long as he needed her to. The unexpected remark left Kyusuk flustered. Rue then admitted that holding his hand somehow made her feel calm and asked whether he felt the same way. Embarrassed, Kyusuk could only ask her to stop saying such mortifying things so naturally. Taking a deep breath, Kyusuk finally resolved to make the call. Rue quietly encouraged him as he raised the phone to his ear. When his mother answered, Kyusuk nervously greeted her before explaining that he had found an apartment where he hoped to live. He told her that he had been staying at his best friend's home, that he had recently viewed a property, and that he intended to proceed with renting it. Gathering his courage, he asked if she would serve as his guarantor. He explained that he was currently working part-time, planned to secure full-time employment as soon as possible, and intended to pay all of his own rent. His mother's response was cold and immediate. She questioned why she should have to become his guarantor and told him to stop inconveniencing other people. She went on to say that he had been completely useless ever since his grandmother's death and concluded by declaring that he was not only useless but also nothing more than a burden. As the harsh words echoed through the phone, Kyusuk's grip tightened around it, silently enduring every painful sentence. Kyusuk's mother responded coldly, asking why he could not simply hire a guarantor service instead of relying on her. She told him to handle the matter himself and added that he should stop calling her altogether. Accepting her words without protest, Kyusuk quietly admitted that she was right and agreed not to trouble her again. His mother continued, remarking that if he had been capable of thinking properly, he would have come up with such a solution on his own before bluntly calling him stupid. Unable to remain silent any longer, Rue interrupted. Within her heart, she rejected every word Kyusuk's mother had spoken. She knew Kyusuk was not useless. He was nothing like the person being described. For a brief moment, she hesitated, remembering how she had previously feared interfering too much and hurting him instead. This time, however, she realized she could not simply watch him endure such treatment without doing anything. Still holding Kyusuk's hand, with the phone remaining between them, Rue introduced herself as Kyusuk's wife, Kodaka Rue. The unexpected declaration immediately shocked Kyusuk's mother, who demanded to know when her son had gotten married. Rue calmly explained that she and Kyusuk had been best friends ever since high school and claimed that she had confessed her feelings shortly after he had been forced to leave home. She spoke firmly, describing Kyusuk as an incredibly kind and deeply important person. While he often considered many different perspectives, once he decided that something truly mattered, he would always place it above his own need. She insisted that he would go to extraordinary lengths to help the people he cared about and questioned how the person closest to him could fail to recognize those qualities. Rue emphasized that even now, Kyusuk was making every effort while still thinking about his mother's well-being. Unable to contain her frustration, Rue told Kyusuk's mother to stop being the one causing him pain. She declared that if anyone in the situation was behaving uselessly, it was not Kyusuk. She further explained that guarantor companies could not be used for every type of rental property and that, even when they were available, their fees would only create an additional financial burden for him. If his mother refused to support him, Rue declared that she would personally become his guarantor instead. She went even further, stating that if his mother intended only to continue hurting him, then it would be better for her to remove herself from Kyusuk's life altogether. Alarmed by her passionate outburst, Kyusuk pleaded with Rue to stop. He insisted that he did not want to burden her any more than he already had and gently reached for the phone, asking her to return it. Speaking directly to his mother once again, Kyusuk admitted that after his grandmother's death, he had withdrawn from the world and become a shut-in. He sincerely apologized for the person he had become during that time. However, he explained that after leaving home, he had encountered many new experiences and met countless new people. Among them was someone who had become unimaginably precious to him. Because of that person, he wanted to become someone capable of offering support rather than simply receiving it. Kyusuk continued by explaining that he was working toward becoming independent because one day he hoped to build a life alongside the person most important to him. At the same time, he also wished to become someone capable of supporting his mother as well. To achieve that goal, he believed he needed to continue working hard, gaining experience, and growing into a respectable adult. Above all else, he wanted the opportunity to repay everything his mother had done for him. Silence filled the line. After what felt like an eternity, Kyusuk's mother finally responded. Rather than rejecting him outright, she simply asked when he intended to complete the necessary procedures. Startled by the sudden shift in her attitude, Kyusuk admitted that the exact date had not yet been decided and offered to arrange everything whenever it was most convenient for her. His mother agreed, saying she would check her schedule before contacting him later. She then asked whether there was anything else he needed. Kyusuk quietly answered that there was not. As she prepared to end the call, he instinctively called out to her once more. When she asked what else he wanted, however, he hesitated before quietly saying it was nothing. His mother acknowledged him one final time, telling him that she would see him soon before ending the call. The moment the conversation ended, Kyusuk released a long breath he had unknowingly been holding. Lowering his head onto the cafe table, he reflected in relief that they had somehow managed to persuade her. Rue gently reminded him not to cry in public. Still overwhelmed, Kyusuk looked at her in surprise and asked why she had gone so far as to offer herself as his guarantor. He admitted that the last thing he wanted was to create even more trouble for her. Rue apologized but explained that hearing him treated so cruelly had made her blood boil. Reaching over, she softly ruffled his hair and assured him that every word she had spoken had been completely sincere. She told him that she never wanted to see him hurt like that again. Privately, Rue acknowledged that she had acted entirely on impulse. Perhaps what she had done had not been the right approach. Even so, if her actions could protect Kyusuk and allow him to keep smiling, then she believed they had been worthwhile. She silently resolved that, if it meant preventing him from being hurt again, she would continue protecting him. Watching her quietly, Kyusuk struggled to understand what was happening. He realized that Rue was simply expressing her feelings in the straightforward way that only she could. Once again, he found himself amazed that she could say such overwhelmingly embarrassing things with a perfectly serious expression. For a while, the two simply sat across from one another in silence, neither able to find the right words. At last, Rue suddenly called Kyusuk's name. Startled, he straightened up and asked what was wrong. Taking a slow, steady breath, Rue quietly explained that she finally understood her own feelings. When Kyusuk asked what she meant, Rue looked directly at him and, with complete sincerity, confessed that she was in love with him. Chapter 12 continues with Rue's confession lingering in the silence between them. Looking directly at Kyusuk, she repeats that she is in love with him. Kyusuk can only stare back, his eyes wide and his face burning red as the weight of her words sinks in. The confession overwhelms him so completely that he instinctively jolts upright in his seat in shock. Rue calmly remarks that his reaction was rather loud. Embarrassed, Kyusuk quickly apologizes, explaining that her confession had simply caught him completely off guard because of how sudden it was. Privately, Kyusuk admits to himself that, although part of him had suspected Rue might feel that way, another part had refused to believe it was actually true. Now, she was standing before him, openly telling him that she loved him, leaving him unable to deny reality any longer. Rue explains that she has spent a long time wondering what love truly means. She reflects on how she often says that she loves things like tomatoes, games, or her friends, yet realizes that those feelings are entirely different from what she feels toward Kyusuk. She explains that she wants to protect him, remain by his side, and continue sharing her life with him. Those feelings, she concludes, are unquestionably a special kind of love. She declares that she has no doubts about them whatsoever and does not care if anyone else sees things differently because she is completely certain of her own heart. Still blushing intensely, Kyusuk can only respond with a bewildered acknowledgement. Rue then explains that there is something she wants to ask him. Without hesitation, she tells Kyusuk that she wants them to get married for real. She carefully clarifies that she is not referring to their pretend marriage or another performance to deceive their families. She is asking him to become her genuine husband. The proposal leaves Kyusuk speechless. Struggling to process everything at once, he points out that they have not even begun dating, yet she has already jumped straight to marriage. Rue matter-of-factly argues that their fake marriage has already been much like dating in practice. Kyusuk immediately disagrees, insisting that the two situations are completely different. Rue continues reasoning that, since they are already legally married on paper, all they need to do is stop pretending and make the relationship genuine instead. Kyusuk protests that she is making something deeply emotional sound like a simple logical procedure and admits that he cannot keep up with the pace of her reasoning. Rue then asks him a simple question. She wants to know whether he loves her as well. Leaning closer, she repeats the question directly, waiting for an honest answer. After a long silence, Kyusuk quietly confesses that he does. Rue calmly accepts his answer before concluding that it proves exactly what she had been saying. Flustered, Kyusuk complains that gathering the courage to confess had taken everything he had and asks her not to treat such an important moment so casually. Rue assures him that she understands how overwhelming the situation must be. Even so, she explains that nothing has changed about her own feelings. What she truly wants is to marry him, not as part of an act, but to genuinely build a life together. She tells him that coming home and seeing him always makes her happy and that she wants to continue sharing the meals he prepares for her every day. Finally, she tells Kyusuk that he should take all the time he needs before answering. No matter how long it takes, she promises that she will continue waiting for him. Left alone with his thoughts, Kyusuk reflects on everything that has happened. Rue has confessed her love to him. He has admitted that he loves her in return. He has finally begun believing that he might one day become someone capable of supporting her. Even so, a persistent voice inside him continues insisting that he is still not ready to stand beside Rue as her husband. His thoughts race through everything currently happening in his life. The application for his new apartment is already underway. His search for stable employment has been progressing well. The person he loves has confessed her feelings and even proposed marriage. Despite all of that, he remains unable to decide what to do, feeling as though he is still missing something important. The following day, Kyusuk arrives at Itsuki's home for their planned meeting. Itsuki greets him warmly and thanks him for coming. Kyusuk modestly replies that he should be the one expressing gratitude instead, admitting that he is surprised Itsuki is still willing to rely on him after everything that has happened between them. Rather than asking him to help with household chores as usual, Itsuki suggests that they spend the day going out together instead. Confused, Kyusuk asks what he means. Itsuki clarifies that he is proposing an outing with just the two of them. Kyusuk looked around the restaurant in amazement, taking in the elegant interior and quietly remarking that it was far fancier than anywhere he had ever eaten before. Itsuki admitted that even he did not visit places like this very often. Kyusuk explained that he rarely ate at restaurants at all, preferring to cook his own meals instead. Since Kyusuk had prepared food for him on many occasions, Itsuki explained that he simply wanted to treat him for once. Kyusuk pointed out that he had only been cooking because it was part of the work he had been paid to do, but Itsuki dismissed the concern and assured him there was no need to worry about it. When Itsuki asked what he wanted to order, Kyusuk admitted that the menu offered far too many choices for him to decide. Seeing his uncertainty, Itsuki offered to recommend the restaurant's best dishes. After confirming that Kyusuke had no particular preferences, Itsuki called the waiter over and placed the order himself. Once the food arrived, Kyusuke stared at the beautifully prepared dishes in astonishment, remarking that even a single piece of meat looked incredibly expensive. Itsuki chuckled at his reaction and encouraged him not to look so intimidated. Handing him a drink, he reassured Kyusuke that there would even be dessert afterward. Overwhelmed by the amount of food on the table, Kyusuke questioned whether the two of them could possibly finish everything. Itsuki simply replied that he would be happiest if Kyusuke enjoyed himself and ate as much as he liked without holding back. As the meal continued, Itsuki quietly observed that Kyusuke had hardly smiled all day. Surprised, Kyusuke questioned whether that was really true. Itsuki pointed out that Kyusuke normally greeted him with a warm smile every time he visited, making the difference especially noticeable. Realizing that Itsuki had been paying such close attention, Kyusuke expressed his surprise. Itsuki then guessed that something involving Rue must be weighing heavily on Kyusuke's mind. Kyusuke admitted that Rue was indeed at the center of the problem, although the real issue lay within his own feelings toward her. Offering to listen, Itsuki jokingly described the conversation as a bit of love talk. Kyusuke finally revealed what had happened. He explained that Rue had confessed her feelings to him and told him that she no longer wanted their marriage to remain a pretense. Instead, she wanted the two of them to become a genuine married couple. Itsuki quietly remarked that Rue truly had Kyusuke wrapped around her finger, adding with a faint smile that he himself would never put Kyusuke through such emotional turmoil. There was something unsettling about the smile on Itsuki's face, prompting Kyusuke to comment that it looked strangely frightening. Changing the subject, Itsuki asked what answer Kyusuke had given Rue. Kyusuke admitted that he had been unable to give her any answer at all. He openly confessed that he loved Rue deeply and genuinely wanted to marry her. He had no doubts about those feelings. Even so, despite living with her, meeting countless new people, gradually building confidence in himself, and discovering that their feelings were mutual, he still could not understand why he remained unable to move forward. Listening quietly, Itsuki encouraged Kyusuke to learn something from his own example. Confused, Kyusuke asked what he meant. Itsuki advised him to pursue what he truly desired and to love the person he genuinely loved without hesitation. Rather than suppressing his feelings, he should simply remain honest with his own heart. Though still uncertain, Kyusuke gradually realized what had been holding him back all along. His hesitation did not stem from his love for Rue but from his own lack of confidence. Itsuki nodded in agreement before revealing that he had once struggled with similar insecurities himself. For many years, he had believed he needed to surpass Rue in order to stand beside her. That belief drove him to attend university, continue into graduate school, and even study abroad. Through years of relentless effort and continuous learning, he eventually gained the confidence he had always lacked. Kyusuke remarked that Itsuki was an incredibly hard-working person. Itsuki accepted the compliment with a warm smile. Reflecting on everything he had just heard, Kyusuke admitted that Itsuki was probably right. He wondered whether his own lack of confidence simply came from the fact that he had never devoted himself to anything with the same level of determination. Itsuki answered honestly. Although he wished he could reassure Kyusuke otherwise, he believed that superficial effort alone accomplished very little. He encouraged Kyusuke not to be overly lenient with himself unless he genuinely believed he had already given his absolute best. At the same time, he stressed that Kyusuke should never give up. No matter how much time had passed, it was never too late to begin putting in the effort necessary to grow. He suggested that both of them continue striving forward until they earned the confidence they were searching for. Kyusuke quietly nodded, acknowledging that Itsuki's words made sense. Feeling slightly guilty, he apologized for allowing what had been intended as a light-hearted conversation about love to become unexpectedly serious. Wanting to lift the mood, Itsuki proposed that they go shopping after finishing their meal. He mentioned that he even had a gift prepared for Kyusuke. In addition, he revealed that he had already reserved a table for dinner and intended to make the entire day a special occasion. Overwhelmed by Itsuki's generosity, Kyusuke admitted that he was beginning to feel guilty for receiving so much kindness. Itsuki simply told him not to worry, explaining that he was only doing what he personally wanted to do. He encouraged Kyusuke to think of everything as a small gesture of appreciation for all the household work he had done. Unable to hide his embarrassment, Kyusuke joked that it almost felt as though he was the one being served instead. Later, the two walked together through the city street. Letting out a quiet sigh, Itsuki admitted that he might have had a little too much to drink. Concerned, Kyusuke asked whether he was alright. Itsuki assured him that he was perfectly fine before teasing him by saying that he had never expected Kyusuke to be able to handle alcohol so well. He even remarked that Kyusuke looked rather cool because of it. Privately, Kyusuke wondered whether simply being able to drink a great deal of alcohol really counted as something admirable. Still sounding slightly intoxicated, Itsuki joked that perhaps Kyusuke should stay the night to look after him, adding that he would even pay extra for the trouble. Startled by the suggestion, Kyusuk immediately replied that accepting money for something like that would only make him uncomfortable. He explained that Rue had the following day off from work and that he intended to return home to prepare meals for her. Itsuki laughed and admitted that he had only been teasing him. He observed that Kyusuk had a habit of taking everything completely seriously, adding that it was one of the qualities he genuinely liked about him. Kyusuk could only point out that Itsuki was obviously quite drunk. Itsuki again reassured him that he would be fine and encouraged him not to worry about returning home to Rue. Although Kyusuk still hesitated, Itsuki suddenly called his name and revealed something he had never told Rue. He explained that Rue's parents would be returning the very next day. The unexpected revelation left Kyusuk speechless. Itsuki continued by explaining that when Rue's parents had asked about their daughter, he had reassured them that she was doing well. He had even told them that Rue had married a truly wonderful man. Nevertheless, her parents wished to see everything with their own eyes, which was why they had decided to visit. Hearing this, Kyusuk quietly admitted that the uncertainty he had been struggling with all along truly came from his own lack of confidence. Itsuki then revealed one final detail. Rue's parents had specifically asked him not to inform Rue about their visit. Since he had already shared the secret with Kyusuk, however, he believed Kyusuk was now the one who needed to prepare for what was coming. He encouraged him to return home to Rue. Kyusuk called out to Itsuki before they parted, insisting that he would at least accompany him back to his house first. Grateful for the gesture, Itsuki quietly thanked him as the two continued walking together through the evening streets. Kyusuk returned home late that evening and quietly called Rue's name as he unlocked the front door. Receiving no response, he assumed she had already gone to bed. As he stood alone in the apartment, Itsuki's earlier advice echoed through his mind, encouraging him to continue striving until he gained genuine self-confidence. Kyusuk reflected that the reason he lacked confidence was because he had never truly believed he had worked hard enough or given his best effort. Clenching his fist, he silently resolved to change that. His thoughts soon shifted to the news Itsuki had shared. Rue's parents were scheduled to arrive the following day. Unsure whether he should tell Rue, Kyusuk remembered that they had specifically asked Itsuki to keep their visit a secret. Unable to decide what the right course of action was, he chose to sleep on the matter instead. The next morning, Kyusuk busied himself preparing breakfast while the question continued to weigh heavily on his mind. He repeatedly wondered whether he should warn Rue or honor her parents' request for secrecy. As usual, Rue entered the room and greeted him with a simple good morning. Lost in thought, Kyusuk reacted with an involuntary shout of surprise. Rue looked at him curiously and questioned why he had screamed, pointing out that she greeted him the same way every morning. Embarrassed, Kyusuk apologized and admitted that he had simply been distracted by something on his mind. Looking over the breakfast table, Rue observed that the meal seemed far more elaborate than what he normally prepared. Gathering his courage, Kyusuk began to tell her that there was something important he needed to share. Before he could finish, the doorbell rang. Rue immediately offered to answer it while Kyusuk silently prayed that the visitors had not arrived already. When Rue opened the door, she froze in surprise at the sight before her. Her mother stood outside. Confused by Rue's reaction, Kyusuk called out to her just as Rue asked why her parents had returned without saying anything beforehand. Her mother apologized for the unexpected visit, explaining that she and Rue's father had decided to stop by to check on their daughter and finally meet her husband in person. She politely asked whether they could come inside. Rue welcomed them in, and her mother quietly thanked her. Turning toward Kyusuk, Rue informed him that her parents had arrived. She jokingly referred to the occasion as another lovey-dovey test, meant to see whether the married couple truly behaved like husband and wife. The unusual phrase left Kyusuk momentarily confused. Quickly collecting himself, he reassured Rue that everything would be fine as long as they stayed calm and acted naturally. Rue agreed, remarking that remaining composed was exactly what they needed to do in a situation like this. The two hurriedly prepared the apartment before opening the door again. Kyusuk volunteered to arrange the dishes while Rue straightened the room. He asked what they should serve to drink, and Rue decided that tea would be sufficient. She then nervously wondered whether the wedding photograph they had displayed and the appearance of their bedroom looked affectionate enough to convince her parents. Kyusuk admitted that he was not entirely sure but believed everything should be convincing enough. The doorbell rang once more. Before answering, the two reminded each other to behave exactly as they normally did every day. Rue invited her parents inside while Kyusuk silently urged himself to stay calm and pull himself together. Standing in the doorway, Rue's mother greeted her warmly, accompanied by Rue's father, commenting that it had been a long time since they had last seen their daughter. As Kyusuk looked at the couple, he could not help noticing how remarkably similar Rue looked to both of her parents, making their family resemblance immediately unmistakable. Chapter 9 begins with Kamawada examining the divorce application and concluding that neither Rue nor Kyusuk had been hiding it from the other, as both of them had already signed the document. From this, he deduced that their marriage had been entered into with the intention of divorcing later, making it nothing more than a facade. Initially unable to believe such an arrangement, he questioned whether the sham marriage had been orchestrated solely to deceive Rue's parents. Kurumi turned to Rue, seeking confirmation of his assumption. Drawing from his understanding of Rue's personality, Kamawata reasoned that she had likely rushed into marriage with the plan of divorcing once her parents' concerns had been eased. He remarked that such a deception was unfortunate, as Rue's parents would be deeply hurt if they ever discovered not only the false marriage but also the prearranged divorce. Internally, however, he recognized that this revelation worked in his favor. Kyusuke immediately insisted that Kamawata could not reveal the truth to Rue's parent. Repeating his plea, he admitted that the marriage was indeed fake but explained that it had been arranged to help Rue. Having received so much support from her in the past, he wanted to repay her kindness by helping her in return. Kamawata questioned this reasoning, arguing that if the arrangement truly existed for Rue's benefit, then informing her parents would be even more appropriate. He warned that concealing the truth would inevitably lead to consequences and maintained that deception was never the right course of action. Faced with this argument, Kyusuke was left speechless. Sensing an opportunity, Kamawata proposed a deal. He promised to keep the truth from Rue's parents on the condition that Rue agreed to marry him instead. The unexpected proposal shocked Kurumi. Kamawata explained that the fake marriage could simply be forgotten, allowing Rue to begin anew as his wife. Since Rue's parents already held him in high regard, he believed persuading them would be much easier. He further argued that if Rue truly wished to settle the matter properly, then marrying him would be the more appropriate choice. A long silence followed his proposal. Acknowledging how abrupt his request had been, Kamawata apologized for surprising Rue and assured her that he was not expecting an immediate answer. He encouraged her to take as much time as she needed before making a decision. After thanking everyone for the meal, he excused himself and departed, leaving Rue and Kyusuke standing together in complete silence as they exchanged wordless glances. Kurumi eventually broke the silence, admitting that she finally understood the truth behind the marriage. She commented that Rue and Kyusuke had acted so naturally together that they had completely convinced her the marriage was genuine. Rue quietly remarked that she needed a cigarette, and Kurumi gave her permission to step outside. As Rue left with a weary sigh, Kurumi reassured her that she did not have to follow Kamawata's proposal. Amused by the revelation, she remarked that Rue's fake marriage unexpectedly matched her own imagined version of events perfectly and jokingly expressed her appreciation for it. Meanwhile, Kyusuke buried his face in his hands, lamenting how badly the situation had spiraled. Kurumi recalled Kamawata's earlier claim that Rue should simply marry him if she intended to keep deceiving her parents. She criticized his arrogance, remarking that it was hardly surprising that nobody seemed to like him. Reflecting on his earlier reaction to Rue's marriage, she remembered him muttering that he needed to make the couple divorce. Kyusuke confirmed that he had indeed said those words, and Kurumi affirmed it. At the same time, she found it ironic that the supposed husband and wife had already been prepared to separate from the beginning. Despite her criticism of Kamawata, Kurumi acknowledged that if the sole objective had been to reassure Rue's parents, then marrying Kamawata might actually have been the more practical option. Even so, she emphasized that the choice ultimately belonged to Rue. She then asked Rue directly whether Kamawata was someone she could truly marry. Rue responded only by exhaling a stream of cigarette smoke before quietly admitting that Itsuki was, in fact, the more suitable choice. Kyusuke immediately called out to her. After extinguishing her cigarette, Rue simply accepted the situation and walked away. Kurumi watched her in confusion, calling after her and asking where she was going. Rue quietly stated that she was going to Itsuki's apartment before leaving without another word. Kyusuke watched her in stunned disbelief, unable to understand what she meant. As she disappeared from sight without offering any explanation, he began to fear that she truly intended to marry Itsuki. Horrified by the possibility, he declared that he could not allow it to happen. Determined to stop her, Kyusuke told Kurumi that he was going after Rue. He explained that he did not want to lose her to Itsuki and intended to persuade him somehow. Before leaving, he asked Kurumi to head home without worrying and promised that he would take care of everything himself. Although confused by his sudden determination, Kurumi remarked that she would give him a passing grade for his resolve. Kyusuke thanked her before hurrying after Rue. Meanwhile, Itsuki stood alone in his living room, holding his phone as it displayed an incoming call from Kodakarumi. Before he could answer, the doorbell rang. Checking the intercom monitor, he saw Rue waiting outside and noted how quickly she had arrived. Just as he was about to let her in, Kyusuke suddenly appeared on the intercom in tears, and the two began arguing outside the apartment. Rue questioned why Kyusuke had followed her, while he admitted that she had frightened him by leaving without any explanation. He pleaded with her not to disappear like that, insisting that although she claimed she would be fine on her own, he certainly was not. Observing the exchange through the monitor, Itsuki found it ironic that the two shared such natural chemistry despite their marriage being nothing more than a pretense. Deciding there was little point in leaving them outside, he invited them both inside. Once in the living room, Itsuki apologized that he could only offer tea. After everyone had settled onto the sofas, he turned to Rue and asked for her answer regarding his proposal. As the room fell quiet, Kyusuk anxiously prepared himself for the possibility that Rue might choose Itsuki. He acknowledged to himself that if marrying Itsuki was truly what she wanted, then Itsuki was indeed the logical choice. Though painful, he resolved that he would respect her decision regardless of his own feelings. Rue looked directly at Itsuki before quietly telling him that she could not marry him. Both Itsuki and Kyusuk were caught off guard by her answer. Seeking clarification, Itsuki asked whether that meant he was free to reveal the truth to her parents. Rue immediately rejected that idea as well. He then asked whether she was willing to marry him under any circumstances, but she again refused. Itsuki pointed out that he had always been close to Rue's parents and argued that, had they known the truth from the beginning, they would almost certainly have encouraged her to marry him instead. From his perspective, choosing him from the outset would have been the most rational solution. Rue, however, questioned why their situation could not simply remain between the people involved. She explained that both she and Kyusuk had entered the fake marriage for their own reasons, emphasizing that the arrangement existed primarily for her sake. She challenged Itsuki by asking why he was so determined to interfere and wondered if his insistence stemmed solely from his desire to reveal the truth. Overcome with emotion, Itsuki finally broke down. Through tears, he revealed that ever since meeting Rue, helping her had become the central focus of his life. He had worked tirelessly to become someone worthy of standing beside her, dedicating himself to his studies, going abroad, and ultimately becoming a lawyer just as she had. Every effort he had made had been driven by the desire to catch up to her. Unable to hide his frustration any longer, he demanded to know why all of that devotion had not been enough. He questioned why Rue had married Kyusuk instead of him, only to reveal that the marriage had never been real. Declaring that the situation was no joke to him, he insisted that he was the better choice and argued that no one had worked harder for Rue than he had. Silence filled the room until Kyusuk gently called Itsuki's name. Rather than arguing, he sincerely acknowledged that Itsuki was an extraordinary person. Confused, Itsuki questioned what he meant. Kyusuk repeated that he genuinely admired Itsuki's ability to dedicate himself so completely to another person. He admitted that he also wanted to support Rue with everything he had, yet there were many things beyond his ability, and the uncertainty of whether his efforts were enough constantly troubled him. In contrast, Itsuki possessed so many qualities and abilities that Kyusuk believed deserved admiration. As he spoke, Kyusuk quietly handed Itsuki a handkerchief. Caught off guard, Itsuki bitterly asked whether Kyusuk realized he was unintentionally making the situation even more painful. Kyusuk honestly admitted that he had not intended to do so. Itsuki then reiterated that he truly believed himself to be superior to Kyusuk. Rather than denying it, Kyusuk simply acknowledged that Itsuki's claim was true. Stepping forward emotionally, Itsuki declared that he regarded himself as Kyusuk's rival in love and that his goal had always been to win Rue back from the man she had chosen. To him, Kyusuk was an enemy. Kyusuk, however, quietly responded that although they might indeed be rivals for Rue's affection, he had always considered Itsuki a friend before anything else. Itsuki released a long, exhausted sigh before accepting the handkerchief from Kyusuk. Wiping away his tears, he remained silent for a moment before finally conceding. He announced that he would not tell Rue's parents the truth after all. Kyusuk looked at him in surprise and asked if he truly meant it. Itsuki confirmed his decision, prompting Kyusuk to express his heartfelt gratitude. With the matter seemingly resolved, Kyusuk assured Rue that everything should be fine now and expressed his relief that Itsuki had decided to remain silent. Curious, Rue asked what had caused Itsuki to change his mind. Itsuki explained that his conversation with Kyusuk had only deepened his sense of guilt, making him realize just how oblivious Rue was. Confused, Rue asked what he meant, while Kyusuk also questioned what exactly she was unaware of. Choosing not to elaborate, Itsuki simply dismissed the matter and told them to forget it. Itsuki then reached out and lightly held Kyusuk's hand, telling him that he still wanted to support him. He explained that if keeping the fake marriage a secret would help Kyusuk, then he would not interfere any further. However, he added that once the pretend marriage eventually came to an end, Kyusuk was always welcome to return to him. The unexpected remark left Kyusuk bewildered. Continuing without hesitation, Itsuki told Kyusuk that he would not even need to work, suggesting that he could simply continue doing household chores while living with him. He insisted that he was more than capable of taking care of Kyusuk himself. Kyusuk stood frozen in astonishment, while Rue's expression visibly darkened with irritation. Embarrassed, Kyusuk protested that he could not possibly impose on Itsuki to such an extent. Itsuki immediately rejected that idea, reassuring him that he was never a burden and that merely having him around would make him happy. Kyusuk hesitantly asked whether Itsuki truly meant those words. Before the conversation could continue, Rue abruptly reached over and grabbed Kyusuk's hand. Without warning, she leaned forward and kissed him on the lips. The sudden display stunned everyone in the room. Itsuki instinctively covered his mouth in shock, while Kyusuk remained completely motionless, staring blankly ahead as his face turned a deep shade of red. After pulling away, Rue briefly apologized before firmly telling Itsuki that he would be leaving the two of them alone from now on. Still recovering from the surprise, Itsuki awkwardly replied that he would see what he could do. Rue then called for Kyusuk, urging him to come along so they could head home. As they departed, Itsuki waved goodbye and remarked that he would see Rue again at work. Rue answered only with an irritated click of her tongue before leaving with Kyusuk. The two walked quietly through the streets before returning home together. Upon arriving, Rue announced that they were back. She called Kyusuk's name, but he staggered absent-mindedly, still dazed by what had happened. Seeing that he remained completely unresponsive, Rue retrieved the familiar pillow labeled "Yes" and presented it to him. The unexpected sight immediately snapped Kyusuk back to reality. Now fully aware of his surroundings, Kyusuk questioned what kind of strange method that had been. Still flustered, he stammered that kissing like that was something they could not casually do, especially since their marriage was only an act. Rue calmly told him to settle down before explaining that she had borrowed the idea from a shoujo manga, reasoning that such a dramatic gesture would be convincing enough to fool anyone. Relieved by her explanation, Kyusuk accepted her reasoning without further objection. At that moment, Kyusuk's stomach growled loudly, breaking the tension. Deciding to focus on something more ordinary, he offered to prepare a meal for them. Rue thanked him as he headed toward the kitchen. Left alone with her thoughts, Rue reflected on everything that had happened. From a purely logical standpoint, marrying Itsuki would have been the far more effective way to deceive her parent. Even so, she had chosen Kyusuk instead. She reminded herself that Kyusuk had been thrown out of his home, making their arrangement mutually convenient, and convinced herself that this practical benefit had been the only reason for her decision. Yet Itsuki's earlier words lingered in her mind, particularly his confident declaration that he could take care of Kyusuk. The memory stirred an uncomfortable emotion within her. Clenching her fist, Rue found herself unable to understand or suppress the irritating feeling that had begun to grow inside her. Chapter 10 opens with Kyusuk standing at the kitchen counter, quietly preparing a meal while his thoughts linger on Rue's unexpected kiss. As he chopped vegetables and stirred the contents of a pot, he repeatedly reminded himself that the kiss had not been genuine. It had merely been another performance, no different from every other aspect of their fabricated marriage. He reflected on everything they had done to maintain the illusion, the engagement, the exchange of rings, holding hands, and accepting the congratulations of others. Every milestone that would normally symbolize a real relationship had been nothing more than part of their carefully constructed deception. Even so, he could not deny that each act still affected him. The dishonesty behind it all unsettled him, and part of him disliked pretending that none of it mattered. Yet he convinced himself that if enduring the lie meant helping Rue, then he had no right to complain. Despite that resolve, the memory of the kiss continued to trouble him. The following morning, Rue greeted Kyusuk as she entered the dining room. Kyusuk returned the greeting awkwardly, his nervousness evident in both his hesitant voice and anxious demeanor. After Rue sat down at the table, noticing his unusual behavior, she asked whether something had happened. Kyusuk slowly took his seat before admitting that there was something he needed to tell her. Fidgeting with his hands and avoiding eye contact, he gathered the courage to explain that they should not kiss again. He reasoned that even if such actions were meant to preserve the appearance of their marriage, kissing carried a special meaning that should belong only to people who genuinely loved each other. The thought of treating something so intimate as merely another lie left him deeply uncomfortable. Rue listened in stunned silence as he firmly expressed his feelings. Later that day at work, Rei found herself unable to stop thinking about Kyusuk's words. Sitting at her desk while typing away, she concluded that he had been upset because of her actions. Resting her head against one hand, she admitted to herself that he had been right. Since their marriage was only a pretense, kissing had probably crossed a line that should never have been crossed. She recalled how embarrassed Kyusuk had been when the mere idea of kissing had appeared on the list of married couple activities, remembering how dramatically he had reacted even then. Rue's unusually heavy sigh caught Kurumi's attention. Concerned, Kurumi jokingly wondered whether Rue and Kyusuk had argued so badly that they had already broken up, remarking that she could hardly believe such a thing. Rue quickly denied that they had separated, but privately blamed herself for hurting Kyusuk. Upon hearing that, Kurumi immediately slammed both hands onto the desk, firmly insisting that Rue had done nothing wrong. Rue pointed out that she had not even explained what had happened yet and asked Kurumi to hear the full story before defending her. She maintained that the fault lay entirely with her because she had knowingly done something Kyusuk disliked. Unsure how to make things right, she questioned whether a simple apology would even be enough for him to forgive her. After listening, Kurumi said she finally understood the situation. She explained that the fear of believing one had hurt someone important could be far more painful than being hurt oneself. While she agreed that apologizing was essential, she believed it was equally important to express one's genuine feelings. Without honest communication, misunderstandings would only continue to grow. Confused by the advice, Rue asked what feelings she was supposed to express. Kurumi explained that Rue usually approached everything with cold logic, practicality, and reason, making it difficult for her to communicate her emotions openly. As someone who fancied herself a devoted admirer of Rue, Kurumi admitted that this was simply how she imagined Rue's personality. Rue quietly accepted the observation and began reflecting on her own emotions. Even after returning to her work, Rue found herself unable to concentrate. The unresolved situation with Kyusuk occupied her thoughts so completely that she struggled to focus on her task. Eventually, she sent Kyusuk a brief message explaining that she would be working late and would not need dinner before reminding herself that she had to finish her work. Noticing Rue's continued distraction, Kurumi asked if she was alright. Rue reassured her that everything was fine and encouraged Kurumi to head home without waiting for her. Kurumi noticed Rue's distracted expression and offered to get her a cup of coffee. Rue quietly thanked her and remained at her desk. Nearby, Itsuki found himself surrounded by a group of female co-workers, as was often the case. During their conversation, someone asked whether there was anyone he liked. Itsuki admitted that there was, adding that he had only recently realized his feelings. His answer surprised everyone around him. One of the women jokingly pleaded that he should not reveal Rue as the person in question, pointing out that he had been spending a great deal of time with her lately. Smiling to himself, Itsuki denied the assumption and remarked that the person he liked was someone far more caring. Hearing that single word caused Rue's thoughts to drift immediately to Kyusuk. Quietly, she repeated the word to herself before calling out to Itsuki. Fixing him with an unusually sharp glare, Rue demanded to know exactly whom he had been talking about. The women surrounding Itsuki were startled by the intensity of her expression, with one of them immediately assuming that Rue and Itsuki must secretly be dating because of how angry she appeared. Rue immediately dismissed the idea, muttering that she would never want to date Itsuki. Unfazed, Itsuki casually asked what had brought on such a reaction before suggesting that Rue was simply experiencing another bout of jealousy. Rue questioned the accusation, unable to understand why he would interpret her emotions that way. Itsuki explained that she had kissed Kyusuk without even realizing that the action had been driven by jealousy. He observed that the incident had undoubtedly left a lasting impression on Kyusuk. As Rue listened, she recalled Itsuki's earlier remark that receiving a kiss with no genuine feelings behind it would only hurt the other person. Troubled by the thought, she demanded to know how he could possibly understand Kyusuk's feelings so well. Itsuki answered with quiet confidence, claiming that he understood Kyusuk far better than Rue ever had. He also remarked that he had never seen Rue become so visibly angry before. Watching the exchange from nearby, Kurumi enthusiastically snapped photograph after photograph, completely captivated by Rue's unusually fierce expression. She admired how beautiful Rue looked even while angry and jokingly asked whether Rue would marry her instead. Rue dryly reminded her that she was already married, prompting Kurumi to laugh and suggest that they could marry for real once the fake marriage eventually came to an end. Itsuki casually commented that Kyusuk might still be the better match for Rue. Rue immediately and firmly rejected the suggestion, declaring that such a thing would absolutely never happen. As night fell, Rue walked home alone beneath the quiet, star-filled sky. The events of the day weighed heavily on her mind, leaving her unusually absent-minded. Sighing to herself, she admitted that she had been completely distracted ever since the incident with Kyusuk. She began questioning why she had kissed him in the first place. Looking back, she realized that she had acted impulsively in a moment of panic. The more she thought about it, the more she wondered what had driven that panic. Itsuki's earlier declaration that he could take care of Kyusuk echoed repeatedly in her thoughts. Each time she imagined Kyusuk relying on Itsuki instead of remaining by her side, a powerful sense of irritation rose within her. Clenching her fist tightly, Rue struggled to understand the unfamiliar emotion. As she continued walking through the peaceful streets, she slowly arrived at a possibility she had never seriously considered before. Looking up at the night sky, she quietly questioned whether the frustration consuming her was, in fact, jealousy. By the time she reached home, Rue had reached a decision. She resolved that she needed to explain everything to Kyusuk properly. Inside the apartment, Kyusuk was relaxing in a hot bath while mentally planning the rest of the evening's household chores. Once Rue finished using the bathroom, he intended to clean the bathtub, the sink, and perhaps even the washing machine before the night was over. The front door opened and Rue quietly announced her return. Without hesitation, she made her way toward the bathroom and declared that there was something she needed to tell Kyusuk immediately. Startled by her sudden appearance outside the door, Kyusuk slipped in the bathtub, sending water splashing everywhere. Flustered, he asked whether the conversation truly had to happen right then and pleaded with Rue to at least close the bathroom door. Rue agreed and stepped back before apologizing repeatedly. She admitted that acting so impulsively was unlike her and sincerely apologized once again. Meanwhile, Kyusuk remained frozen in the bathtub, his face burning bright red as water dripped from his hair. After waiting for a response and hearing only silence, Rue worried that something had happened to him and asked whether he had fainted in the tub. Panicking, Kyusuk begged her not to open the door and requested a little more time, explaining that he had been so overwhelmed he had felt as though he were having a heart attack. Rue quietly accepted his request and waited. Some time later, the two sat together on the living room sofa. Kyusuk remained visibly nervous, still unable to fully recover from the earlier embarrassment. He admitted that he found it astonishing how Rue could occasionally say or do things that were so unexpectedly bold. Rue explained that she believed an apology alone was insufficient, so she also wanted to explain the reason behind her actions. Although he listened carefully, Kyusuk remarked that her explanation did little to make the situation any less astonishing. After gathering his thoughts, Kyusuk cautiously sought confirmation of what she meant. He clarified that, if he understood correctly, the kiss had not simply been another performance meant to strengthen the illusion of their marriage. Hesitating for a moment, he quietly wondered whether it had happened because Rue had been jealous, or because of something very similar. Rue quietly confirmed that jealousy had indeed been the reason for her actions. She admitted that she understood if her explanation seemed confusing, confessing that she was still struggling to make sense of her own feelings. Hearing her honest admission left Kyusuk flushed with embarrassment. Deep inside, he realized he had never experienced emotions like these before. Softly acknowledging her words, he reflected on how devastated he would have felt if Rue had actually chosen Itsuki. For the first time, he tried to imagine the situation from Rue's perspective and, in doing so, recognized just how important she had become to him. His thoughts drifted back to the kiss they had shared. As he unconsciously touched his lips, his face grew even redder. He found himself questioning whether that kiss had truly been just another part of their act or whether it had carried genuine meaning after all. Noticing his silence, Rue apologized once more and asked if he was all right. Kyusuk reassured her that everything was fine and admitted that the kiss no longer bothered him the way it initially had. Rue quietly accepted his answer with a simple acknowledgement. Remembering something important, Kyusuk changed the subject and mentioned that he was planning to visit a place he had recently found. Curious, Rue asked what kind of place it was. Kyusuk explained that he had been searching for somewhere affordable to live and had finally discovered an apartment cheap enough for someone in his financial situation. Rue immediately looked concerned, questioning whether a place that inexpensive could really be trustworthy. Kyusuk reassured her that everything would be fine, adding that the real estate agent had seemed like a genuinely reliable person. Although she listened, Rue admitted that the situation still worried her. In response, Kyusuk asked whether she would like to come with him to see the apartment. Rue agreed without hesitation. Kyusuk let out a quiet laugh and thanked her for agreeing to accompany him. With the conversation finished, Rue stood up and announced that she was going to take a bath. Kyusuk reminded her to let him know when she was done so that he could clean the bathroom afterward. Rue thanked him before leaving. Left alone in the living room, Kyusuk sat silently on the sofa as he reflected on everything that had happened. He questioned why he had reacted so strongly to the idea of their kiss being fake. The more he examined his feelings, the more he realized that Rue had become someone truly special to him. The realization startled him. For a brief moment, he even wondered whether Rue might feel the same way. Almost immediately, however, he forced himself to stop getting carried away. He reminded himself that their marriage had always been temporary, created with the understanding that it would eventually end in divorce. Even if their feelings happened to be mutual, they were still bound by that original promise. Furthermore, he reasoned that simply sharing romantic feelings did not necessarily mean Rue wanted a genuine marriage. He also reminded himself that he had been working hard to become independent and capable of standing on his own. Unsure of what to do next, Kyusuk contemplated whether he should confess his feelings to Rue. Unable to reach a conclusion, he buried his face in his hands and let out a long sigh while sitting hunched over on the sofa. Nearby, the quiet hum of the robot vacuum was the only sound filling the room as he continued wondering what the right choice might be. The following morning, Kyusuk prepared to leave the apartment. As he announced that he was heading out, Rue immediately noticed the dark circles beneath his eyes. Concerned, she asked what had happened. Kyusuk admitted that he had barely slept, explaining that he had spent the entire night unable to quiet the thoughts weighing on his mind. As Kyusuk prepared to leave, Rue gently told him that if something was weighing on his mind, he could always talk to her. Her concern only deepened his inner conflict. In his heart, Kyusuk knew this was the one subject he could not speak honestly about. He had already come to accept that he loved Rue completely. Part of him longed to abandon the pretense altogether and simply marry her for real instead of continuing their fabricated arrangement. Even so, he forced himself to set those thoughts aside, convincing himself that things were fine the way they were, for now. Rue then reminded him that he had planned to visit Itsuki that day. The mention of Itsuki made Kyusuk tense. Realizing that telling the truth about his feelings might only burden Rue or make her feel guilty again, he decided that he needed to tell another lie. He quickly denied that he was going to see Itsuki at all, claiming instead that he was meeting someone else. When Rue asked who this other person was, Kyusuk hastily explained that he would be helping an elderly person. Even as the words left his mouth, he was overcome with self-loathing. He thought bitterly that lying to Rue under the excuse of protecting her feelings made him no better than a hypocrite. He questioned what gave him the right to deceive her simply because he wanted to spare her from feeling jealous. Although surprised by his explanation, Rue accepted it without pressing further. She simply reminded him to take care of himself. Kyusuk quietly said goodbye before leaving the apartment. After watching him go, Rue reflected on their earlier conversation. Although Kyusuk had insisted that he no longer minded what had happened between them, his gloomy expression suggested otherwise. She could not shake the feeling that he was still carrying emotional pain. Her thoughts drifted to everything Kyusuk had been doing in recent weeks. He had been searching for work, looking for a place of his own, and steadily working toward becoming independent. As she considered all of this, she realized that the day would eventually come when he would no longer be living with her. The realization stirred an unexpected loneliness within her. For a fleeting moment, she imagined a different future, one in which Kyusuk simply remained by her side, where they abandoned the idea of divorce altogether and became a real married couple instead of pretending to be one. Almost as quickly as the thought appeared, she rejected it. If choosing that path only meant causing Kyusuk more pain in the future, then it was better to stay true to the original plan. No matter how lonely the prospect of separation made her feel, Rue convinced herself that keeping their eventual divorce in mind was still the right decision. Chapter 13 continued with the arrival of Rue's parents. Her mother greeted her, noting the long absence, which Rue acknowledged respectfully. Standing before the visitors, Kyusuk trembled visibly, completely overwhelmed by the imposing aura they projected. When Rue introduced him as her husband, his nerves only worsened, causing him to stammer out a formal greeting that left Rue shocked. Seeing him reduced to a total wreck, Rue mentally noted the irony, since he had been the one preaching calmness earlier. Kyusuk could only internalize his panic, overwhelmed by their sheer presence. Seizing the moment, Rue decided to use his vulnerability as an opportunity to showcase their affection. She apologized to her parents, playfully calling Kyusuk a bundle of nerves, and leaned in close to declare how hopeless he was without her. However, the performance fell entirely flat. Her parents merely watched from the doorway in silence, completely unmoved by the display. Realizing the failure, Rue quickly tried to downplay the affection to Kyusuk, who was already so distraught that he offered to make tea and simply disappear out of shame. Rue chided him gently, insisting on helping so she could keep trying to comfort him. Left to his own thoughts, Kyusuk spiraled into self-doubt, wondering if a man who couldn't even properly greet his in-laws was truly worthy of marrying Rue. Shifting her focus back to hospitality, Rue invited her parents inside and led them to the living room. Her parents accepted the invitation and thanked her as they entered. Rue proudly directed their attention to a table laden with food, boasting that Kyusuk had prepared all of it and raving about his incredible cooking skills. Excusing herself to help him in the kitchen, Rue was suddenly startled by a loud crash. She rushed over to find Kyusuk collapsed on the floor. Exhausted and defeated, he confessed that his legs had completely given out from the sheer anxiety of the situation. Kneeling beside him, Rue offered reassurance, promising that no matter how many mistakes he made, she would always be there to catch him with love and support. Kyusuk reacted with confusion at the mention of a lovey-dovey rebound, prompting Rue to quickly grab his hands and ask if he was hurt. Urging him to come closer so she could check on him, she leaned in tight and playfully remarked that the moment had gone exactly as planned. Kyusuk could only sigh, telling her she was taking years off his life. When Rue teased him by asking if she had truly taken his breath away, he admitted she had, but immediately questioned whether she really wanted her parents to overhear such flirting. Still, Kyusuk sighed with relief, admitting that seeing her act like her usual lovey-dovey fiend self actually put him at ease. Rue defensively protested the fiend label, but the familiar teasing worked. Clenching his fist, Kyusuk declared his determination to show her parents what he was made of. He decided to prepare even more food for the meal, though he first needed to clean up the broken cup. Rue nodded in approval of his renewed spirit, but her concern returned when she noticed his hands were still visibly trembling. Though Kyusuk insisted he was perfectly fine, a sharp sound cut through the air as he flinched, drawing a surprised cry from Rue. In his haste, Kyusuk tripped, causing Rue to call out his name a second time. A loud, echoing crash followed as he stumbled clumsily into a cabinet, prompting a third frantic shout from Rue. Kyusuk groaned in discomfort, muttering that something was hot, leaving Rue completely baffled by the mounting chaos. She pointed out that he had been entirely fine when Itsuki and Kurumi visited, yet now he was falling apart. Kyusuk could only offer a sheepish apology, explaining that he was still incredibly overwhelmed. Observing the commotion, Rue's father turned to his daughter and asked how long they had been living together. Rue, caught off guard, confirmed it had been a while. He then inquired if Rue was the primary breadwinner while Kyusuk handled the housework, a detail Kyusuk quietly confirmed. Her father simply acknowledged this with a brief, unreadable remark, leaving Kyusuk to wonder in silent anxiety if his in-laws found their arrangement unacceptable. Rue's mother then spoke up, calling for Kyusuk's attention and advising him to be much more careful. She pointed out the obvious. In a matter of minutes, he had spilled tea, burned himself, cut himself, and banged his head. She asked outright if this was how things usually went between them. Distressed, Rue quickly interjected to insist this was not normal, but her mother pressed on, explaining the root of their concern. She revealed that they had been deeply worried ever since Rue announced her marriage without letting them meet her husband, especially since she constantly brushed off their questions about him. Fearing that Rue was hiding something terrible, they had decided to show up unannounced. Looking directly at Kyusuk, Rue's mother asked point-blank if he was truly someone her daughter could rely on. Rue attempted to defend him, but Kyusuk gently stopped her, signaling that it was okay. Deep down, Kyusuk felt the stinging truth of her mother's words. He silently agreed that he always screwed up when it mattered most, failing even to manage a simple, proper greeting. Seeing himself through their eyes, he couldn't blame them at all for being deeply worried. Kyusuk admitted to himself that he lacked confidence, possessing neither the accomplishments nor the experience to feel secure in who he was. Yet, he resolved that his past shortcomings were no excuse not to try now, not just for his own sake but especially for hers. He desperately wanted to be someone who could protect Rue, reflecting on how she had always been the one to help and shield him. He was determined to repay that devotion many times over. Finding his voice, Kyusuk offered a sincere apology to her parents, expressing deep regret for meeting them so late, letting his nerves cause so much trouble, and having no excuse for his behavior. Though his voice initially trailed off, he steadied himself and spoke firmly, declaring his desire to support Rue and be with her, before stating unequivocally that she was the love of his life. While Rue softly breathed his name, her mother remained skeptical, remarking that anyone could throw around a phrase like, "love of my life," and asking her daughter if she was truly sure about this man. Irked by the comment, Rue fired back that if words were not enough, she would prove just how much she loved and trusted him through her actions. Before a bewildered Kyusuk could react, Rue leaned in and kissed him squarely on the cheek. Kyusuk flushed deeply in sheer shock, while her parents watched the display in silence. Rue boldly asked her parents if they finally understood, adding for Kyusuk's benefit that she would never do such a thing for anyone else. Still flustered, Kyusuk flurriedly argued that even a kiss on the cheek was a boundary that should be reserved solely for the person one truly loved. Rue readily agreed, affirming that was exactly what she had just done, though Kyusuk continued to stammer that putting lips to skin should at least be handled more gently. Witnessing the bickering, Rue's mother finally relented, conceding that she could see how much the two genuinely trusted each other. She acknowledged that while Kyusuk was undeniably a nervous wreck, she finally got the picture. Looking around, she pointed out that every single corner of the house was scrupulously clean, proving how meticulously the home was maintained. She then sampled the food and commended its quality, confirming it was delicious, which sent a surprised blush across Kyusuk's face. Rue's mother told Kyusuk it was clear he supported Rue every single day, and she sincerely apologized for her harsh words, a gesture that left Kyusuk surprised and insisting that he was the one who owed them thanks. With the air cleared, Rue asked her parents to leave them in peace now that they understood the situation, reiterating that she already had Kyusuk by her side. Her father acknowledged her wishes and apologized for his stubborn doubts. He explained that their harshness had stemmed from a place of deep guilt. Despite being consumed by his own work, both he and Rue's mother had worried about her constantly, and he deeply regretted not looking after her properly in the past. Concluding with a sense of relief, he remarked that Rue had clearly found a wonderful partner, and they were truly glad to see it. After a while, Rue's mother thanked them for the meal, and her father requested that Kyusuk watch over Rue for them. Kyusuk immediately gave his word that he would. As her parents headed out the door, Kyusuk bowed deeply in respect, while Rue could only wonder why they had chosen now of all times to be so worried about her. Turning his attention back to his wife, Kyusuk checked if Rue was alright. Rue assured him that she was perfectly fine, especially because he was by her side. Kyusuk then pleaded with her to stop hitting him with such sudden, surprise attacks, a term that left Rue entirely confused. Pausing for a moment, Rue questioned him, asking if he had indeed just referred to her as the love of his life earlier. Caught off guard, a shocked Kyusuk began stammering out an apology, but Rue cut him off, questioning why he was apologizing when hearing those words had actually made her incredibly happy. Seizing the momentum, Rue asked if this meant he was finally agreeing to marry her properly. Kyusuk froze in shock, struggling to articulate an answer, which drew a light remark from Rue about his inability to speak without making strange noises. Finally finding his voice, Kyusuk softly confessed that he truly did want to marry her, catching Rue completely by surprise. However, his voice trailed off as he apologized, admitting there was more he needed to say. He asked Rue to wait just a little longer. When a confused Rue questioned why, Kyusuk explained that while he knew they shared the same deep feelings, he was still lost and constantly failing to get things right even when they were together. He acknowledged that all of his hesitation stemmed from a profound lack of self-confidence, but argued that the underlying reason no longer mattered. He bitterly described himself as an immature, pathetic man who had been kicked out of his own house, only to conveniently enter a marriage and move in with the woman he loved right after confessing his feelings. Rue responded quietly, stating that this particular weakness of his was something she could never forgive. Kyusuk went on to explain his desire to become something more. He wanted to work harder, gain more experience, and push himself much further, all so he could genuinely build confidence in himself. He confessed that, because of this current inadequacy, he still could not proudly and confidently ask her to marry him. Rue listened to his explanation in silence, eventually softly acknowledging that she understood why he felt that way. With a soft sigh, she remarked that he truly couldn't change who he was at his core. Rue spoke to him gently, validating his feelings and showing her understanding. It was then that Kyusuk took a final, staggering leap, suggesting to her that they should get divorced. Chapter 14 begins with Kyusuk and Rue filing their divorce papers. Both of them wear bright smiles as they submit the documents, leaving the city hall employee visibly bewildered. Kyusuk reflects that no one could blame the staff member for her reaction, as there was probably no other couple in the world who looked so genuinely happy while getting divorced. With the paperwork complete, Kyusuk's life with Rue comes to an end, and he moves into a small apartment of his own. As he unpacks his belongings, he reflects on his financial situation. Since he does not have much money, he settles into an old apartment, reasoning that having a roof over his head is enough for now. He resolves to live there alone, work hard, and save as much as possible so that one day he can buy precious rings for both of them. He hopes to eventually ask Rue to marry him again with pride, determined to build a life in which he always gives his best. Despite this resolve, Kyusuk quickly realizes that his thoughts remain fixed on Rue. He remembers that she has never been particularly skilled at cooking and worries whether she is eating properly or has returned to her old habit of eating carelessly. He wonders if she simply pulls her clothes out of the dryer and wears them immediately instead of letting them dry naturally, thinking that sun-drying would both preserve the clothes and save money. He also fears that she might overwork herself, fall ill with a fever, and collapse again, knowing that she has always tried to handle everything on her own without asking for help. Frustrated, he realizes that he cannot stop thinking about her, even though he was the one who proposed the divorce. He lies down, uncertain of what he should do, eventually considering visiting Rue over the weekend. As he checks his upcoming work schedule, however, he suddenly pauses when he notices an address displayed on his phone. When Kyusuk arrives at Rue's home, she welcomes him inside and thanks him for coming. Looking around, he finds the surroundings strangely familiar. Rue explains that, because of his experience with housekeeping, she decided to ask for his help. Kyusuk appreciates being asked but cannot help noticing that the situation is not much different from how things used to be when they lived together. Secretly, he assumes that Rue must not have been taking proper care of herself, or she would not have needed his assistance. Rue explains that she only needs help cleaning the bathroom. Kyusuk readily agrees and also offers to cook or go grocery shopping if necessary. Rue insists that she has no problems with food and only requires assistance with the cleaning. Accepting her answer, Kyusuk begins working in the bathroom, where he quickly notices layers of grime and mineral buildup, clear signs that it has not been cleaned for quite some time. Even so, he continues to wonder whether Rue is truly eating properly. Since it is already late in the afternoon, he reasons that she has probably eaten by now, perhaps by ordering takeout. Although he considers takeout acceptable, he also thinks it must be more expensive than cooking at home. He decides that after finishing the cleaning, he should buy groceries and prepare something for her before leaving. Reflecting on the situation, he concludes that asking for the divorce had been a selfish decision on his part. While cleaning, a pleasant aroma suddenly drifts through the apartment. Curious, Kyusuk steps out of the bathroom and follows the scent to the kitchen. There, he is astonished to find Rue standing at the stove, calmly preparing a meal. The sight leaves him deeply surprised because the only cooking he had ever known from her had been disastrously poor. Rue explains that those failures belonged to the period before they had begun living together. Since then, she had gradually changed her perspective on cooking and had worked to improve her skills. Kyusuk softly calls Rue's name. Rue admits that asking him to help with the housework was not the real reason she invited him over. Calling his name to get his full attention, she tells him that she wants him to taste the meal she has prepared and honestly tell her whether it is good or, if anything is missing. Kyusuk is caught completely off guard by the request. He wonders if she is truly certain that he is the right person to judge it. Rue questions why he would think otherwise and explains that he is the only person whose opinion truly matters. She tells him that it was because of him that she came to understand how wonderful food could taste. Through him, she also discovered that cooking itself could be enjoyable. Wanting to return the kindness he had shown her, she hopes to demonstrate how much she has improved. Recently, she has been cooking for herself regularly, even keeping her kitchen stocked with ingredients, and she has found the experience genuinely fun. Kyusuk is surprised to hear this. Rue admits that she is surprised as well, since she never imagined she would become interested in cooking. Hearing that she has been taking proper care of herself brings Kyusuk both relief and happiness. He is glad to know that she is managing well on her own and is doing her best. Rue reveals that she is making omuris. The announcement leaves Kyusuk speechless. He repeats the name of the dish in disbelief, overwhelmed by the realization that Rue has prepared homemade omuris herself. His face flushes as he takes in the moment, unable to hide how happy he feels. For him, finally getting to eat something Rue has cooked with her own improved skills is deeply meaningful. Rue reflects that the last time she cooked for the two of them was when they had first begun living together. Looking back, she doubts those early attempts could even be called proper cooking. Kyusuk disagrees internally, believing that those meals had always been precious to him regardless of their quality. As Rue estimates that the meal only needs a little more frying before she adds the egg, Kyusuk decides to finish the remaining cleaning as quickly as possible. Rue thanks him for his help, and after completing the housework, he returns to the kitchen, where she has just finished cooking. The completed omuris sits before him, and Kyusuk stares at it in amazement. The simple fact that Rue has made the dish herself fills him with joy. Rue matter-of-factly prepares to add ketchup to the top, announcing that she is about to pour all of her love into the meal. Her declaration catches Kyusuk completely off guard. She jokingly warns him not to die, while Kyusuk thinks that the sheer force of her affection might be enough to overwhelm him. Rue explains that decorating omuris with ketchup is the proper way to express affection. Kyusuk wonders where she learned such an unusual idea, suspecting it came from a shoujo manga or a themed cafe. When Rue mentions Kurumi, he realizes she must have been the source of the advice. Remembering that Kurumi had already shared a few things with him, he cannot help wondering exactly what she has been teaching Rue. He thinks there is no need for such extravagant displays of affection, especially now that they already have her parents' approval. Rue, however, believes there is every reason to be openly affectionate. She explains that she wants to show him exactly how much she loves him, refusing to hide her feelings any longer. Without hesitation, she openly declares that she is deeply in love with him, and that the ketchup is simply another way of pouring those feelings into the meal. Her straightforward confession leaves Kyusuk so flustered that he feels as though he might collapse from embarrassment. Rue calmly reminds him that he is not allowed to die on her. After finishing the decoration, Kyusuk studies the ketchup design and realizes it resembles a face. Rue reveals that it is meant to be his face, explaining that drawing him on the omuris is her way of expressing her love. Amused, Kyusuk reflects on how she apparently sees him. Rue then hands him the ketchup bottle and tells him that it is now his turn. She insists that if he truly loves her, he should prove it by drawing something on the omuris prepared for her. Kyusuk wonders if decorating each other's omuris is some kind of special ritual. Accepting the challenge, he carefully draws Rue's face on her omuris with ketchup. Rue observes that he is surprisingly skilled at drawing. Kyusuk explains that he simply wanted to do his best because he was drawing her. Looking at the finished design, Rue remarks that this must be how she appears through his eyes. Satisfied, she accepts it as convincing proof of his feelings. Seeing the genuine happiness on her face, Kyusuk feels relieved that his effort has pleased her. With the decorations complete, Rue announces that it is time to eat. They bow their heads together in gratitude before beginning the meal. As soon as Kyusuk takes his first bite, he is struck by how delicious it is. The flavor exceeds all of his expectations, and he immediately recognizes how much Rue has improved. When Rue quietly looks for his reaction, Kyusuk enthusiastically assures her that the meal is wonderful. As he continues eating, however, his emotions overwhelm him, and tears begin to form in his eyes. Rue notices his reaction and wonders why he has started crying. Kyusuk himself cannot fully explain it. He is unsure whether his emotions come from seeing how much Rue has grown as a cook or simply from finally being able to eat a meal she prepared herself. Either way, he finds himself deeply moved. Rue comments that he has always been an emotional person before explaining how she prepared the dish. She shares that she researched numerous recipes and combined ideas from each of them, using ingredients such as chicken, pork, hot dogs, bacon, carrots, onions, mushrooms, and cabbage. Kyusuk is briefly surprised by the ambitious combination of ingredients, but after tasting it more carefully, he admits that the result works remarkably well. He describes the meal as hearty, praises how the different ingredients create rich umami flavors, and compliments the soft texture of the eggs. Rue happily agrees with his assessment. Kyusuk concludes that Rue has truly become someone who knows how to cook. Rue sincerely thanks him for everything he has done for her. She explains that none of this would have happened without him. Watching how much he enjoyed food had shown her just how wonderful eating could be, while seeing him cook had taught her that preparing meals could also be enjoyable. Those experiences inspired her to begin learning for herself. At the same time, she watched him constantly work to improve himself, which made her feel that she could not simply remain idle. She decided to learn household skills, such as cooking and cleaning, so that she could grow as well. After trying those responsibilities herself, she finally realized how demanding they truly were, giving her a new appreciation for all the effort Kyusuk had quietly devoted to taking care of her. From the bottom of her heart, she thanks him for everything he had done. Kyusuk gently objects, explaining that this had never been his intention. Softly speaking her name, he admits that he had only wanted to make sure he would never become a burden to her. Even now, he still worries whenever he imagines her preparing meals on her own. Yet seeing how much she has grown in such a short time fills him with relief. Watching Rue work so hard motivates him to continue improving himself as well. Rue reflects that Kyusuk probably believes household chores are the very least he can contribute, but to her, simply having him by her side has always been enough. Remembering his determination to become someone worthy of standing beside her, Kyusuk repeats that he still needs to become more confident because he believes he cannot yet match her. Rue responds by promising that she will continue working hard too and that she intends to help him whenever she can. She encourages him to visit whenever he wants and even considers visiting his apartment herself, though she privately finds the old building rather unsettling. Her words continue to echo in Kyusuk's mind. He wonders if she truly means everything she has said about accepting someone like him. Overcome with emotion, he quietly apologizes, expressing regret that she has to endure the consequences of the path he chose. Rue cannot understand why he feels the need to apologize. She reminds him that the divorce was the conclusion he reached only after giving their future careful thought and insists that there is nothing for him to worry about. After they finish eating, Rue asks Kyusuk to leave a written note describing his thoughts on the meal. She explains that having his feedback recorded will help her recreate the dish even better the next time she cooks it for him. Kyusuk cannot help but admire how seriously she is taking her newfound passion for cooking. After some time, Rue tells Kyusuk that she plans to invite him over again the next time she cooks. Since cleaning is still something she struggles with, she mentions that she may ask for his help with the housework as well. Kyusuk gladly accepts the idea, assuring himself that he is always happy to come over whenever she needs assistance. Remembering that she had wanted to surprise him, Rue explains that he made the effort to travel all the way to her home and spent his time helping with the cleaning, so she wants to repay him in some way. Kyusuk gently refuses, insisting that there is no need for any payment and instead thanks her for the meal and for inviting him over. Before leaving, Kyusuk promises that he will continue doing everything he can to live up to the feelings Rue has shown him. Rue, however, hopes that he will not push himself too hard. As he walks away from her home, Kyusuk immediately dismisses that thought. In his mind, he cannot accept remaining the way he is now. After witnessing how deeply Rue cares for him and how hard she has worked to improve herself, he becomes convinced that he must do even better. He reflects that Rue can now cook for herself and continues moving closer and closer to becoming the kind of person he considers perfect. If he truly wants to stand beside her again and someday become her husband once more, then he believes he must overcome the insecurities that continue to hold him back. With that determination, Kyusuk resolves to work even harder. Although he is already satisfied with his current daytime job, he decides that it is not enough. To improve himself more quickly, he begins considering taking on additional work during his free time, including night shift. Motivated by his goal, he fills his schedule as much as possible with work, creating an exhausting routine for himself. Looking ahead, Kyusuk realizes that beginning the very next day, an overwhelming amount of work awaits him. Nevertheless, he welcomes it, believing that every extra hour he spends working will bring him one step closer to becoming someone worthy of standing beside Rue once again. Chapter 15 begins with Kyusuk returning to bachelor life. He walked through the city streets beneath a bright sky, feeling how unbearably hot it was. Having picked up a late-night shift immediately after finishing his main job that day, he needed to grab a quick bite and squeeze in a nap beforehand. He reminded himself that he had to keep pushing forward for Rue's sake. Meanwhile, at the firm, Kurumi rested her head on her desk, exhausted. Although it was already October, the weather remained oppressively hot, and another colleague remarked that autumn was nowhere to be found at these temperatures despite it supposedly being the most comfortable season of the year. Kurumi looked over at Rue and wondered whether she and Kyusuk had ended up divorcing. Rue explained that they were getting married in order to find proper closure. Kurumi commented that it sounded like a hassle and thought it would have been better if they had simply stayed married. She even joked that perhaps she should just steal Rue away for herself. She then asked whether Rue had been able to see Kyusuk lately. Rue explained that they had met a little after she moved out, but Kyusuk had become extremely busy with work, so they had hardly seen each other recently. Kurumi reacted with disbelief, interpreting it as Kyusuke placing work above Rue. Rue denied saying that, but Kurumi insisted that he was prioritizing his job while neglecting her, urging Rue to forget about a man like that and choose her instead. Rue replied that Kyusuke had his own circumstances to deal with, and she wanted to respect them. Kurumi asked whether Rue still wanted to see him. She reminded Rue that she was allowed to be a little selfish and should at least invite him out for dinner, warning that constantly putting everyone else first would eventually lead to neglecting herself. Rue admitted that Kurumi had a point and realized that inviting him out for a simple meal should not be too difficult. Kurumi agreed and declared that they would send the message as soon as work was over, and Rue quietly agreed. After work, Rue held her phone and wondered why she felt so nervous about contacting Kyusuke after only a short time apart when they had once seen each other constantly. Kurumi stood beside her, encouraging her and assuring her that she was there to support her. Rue pressed the call button, and after the phone rang, Kyusuke answered. Rue greeted him, remarked that it had been a while, explained that she had just finished work, and asked if he wanted to have dinner together. Kyusuke apologized and explained that he had a shift that night. Rue accepted the answer, but Kurumi immediately urged her not to give up and to push harder if necessary. Taking the encouragement to heart, Rue asked Kyusuke whether the following evening would work instead. Kyusuke said he would check his schedule and believed the evening should be fine. Rue then noticed that something about his voice sounded unusual and asked whether he was feeling unwell. Kyusuke replied that he did not think so. Rue suddenly told him that she loved him. Normally, Kyusuke would have responded with exaggerated embarrassment, but this time he only calmly asked what had prompted it, with a slight stutter. Rue immediately concluded that he was sick and ordered him to skip his shift, call his workplace to take the day off, return home, and get some sleep because she was on her way to his apartment to nurse him back to health. When Kyusuke questioned her reasoning, she insisted that he was definitely ill and reminded him that he knew exactly what would happen if he refused. Kyusuke wondered if that was a threat, but ultimately agreed to call his workplace. Rue let out a sigh of relief. Kurumi praised Rue for actually going through with it, and Rue thanked her for the encouragement. Kurumi brushed it off before expressing concern about whether Kyusuke would be alright, considering Rue believed he was sick. Rue explained that Kyusuke had been cramming his schedule full and pushing himself far too hard lately, making it highly likely that he had simply collapsed from exhaustion. Convinced of that, she insisted she needed to go to his place immediately. Kurumi admired how cool Rue was and jokingly asked to be nursed back to health as well. Rue pointed out that Kurumi was perfectly healthy, and when Kurumi teased that she would simply catch a cold next time, Rue warned her not to deliberately make herself sick. Not long afterward, Rue arrived at Kyusuke's apartment building and thought the place looked even creepier at night. She wondered whether he had actually made it home before knocking on the door. Kyusuke answered, confirming he was there. Rue immediately noticed that his face was bright red, while Kyusuke looked confused. She confirmed that he definitely had a fever and placed a hand on his forehead, feeling how hot he was. She lamented that they were finally able to meet properly after so long, yet she could not celebrate under these circumstances. Rue promptly instructed him to get into the futon, and Kyusuke quietly obeyed. A thermometer soon beeped, revealing a temperature of 39.4 degrees. Rue scolded Kyusuke for intending to work in that condition and for seriously planning to attend his night shift. Kyusuke explained that he had felt fine after finishing his day job, so he believed he could manage it and insisted he had not noticed the fever at all. Rue pointed out that he was obviously not fine. Kyusuke admitted that the thought of finally seeing Rue again had filled him with such relief that all the exhaustion he had been carrying seemed to catch up with him at once. Rue realized he truly had been pushing himself far too hard. Rue told him that how he handled his work was ultimately his own business, and it was not her place to interfere. However, if he continued forcing himself past his limits and ruined his health, there would be no point, so he needed to take better care of himself. She instructed him to rest quietly for the time being and asked whether he also had work the following day. After Kyusuke confirmed that he did, Rue told him to call in and take the next day off as well so he could spend it sleeping. She announced that she was going to prepare some food, adding that everything she had studied about cooking would finally be useful on a day like this. Before leaving the room, she warned him not to dare get out of bed, and Kyusuke agreed. Rue asked whether he owned a rice cooker, only to learn that he did not. She then asked whether he had been eating rice properly lately, and Kyusuke admitted that he had not. Spotting some plants, Rue asked about them, and Kyusuke explained that they were pea sprouts that regrew after being cut, making them a good way to save money. Rue questioned whether that kind of food could really fill his stomach. Looking inside the refrigerator, she found little besides condiments and realized he had not been eating proper meals either. Kyusuke admitted that he had simply wanted to save money. Rue found it hard to believe that someone as skilled at cooking as Kyusuke could let his own diet become such a disaster. She decided to go out and buy groceries. Feeling guilty, Kyusuke offered to at least reimburse her with the receipt, but Rue refused and decided to pay for everything herself. She left to shop for groceries and returned after a while. Deciding to prepare a highly nutritious rice porridge, she looked up recipes. She also considered making seasoned rice soup, and because there was no rice cooker, she searched for instructions on cooking rice in a regular pot. Throughout that time, Kyusuk remained in bed, flushed and feverish. Later, Rue announced that the food was ready. Holding out a spoon, she prompted Kyusuk to open his mouth. Confused, Kyusuk wondered if this counted as a public display of affection, and Rue acknowledged that it was indeed a display of affection. He ate the food and found it delicious. Rue told him to stop reviewing it and simply eat quickly so he could return to sleep, but Kyusuk asked to eat more slowly. After finishing the meal, Kyusuk thanked Rue for making it. Rue remarked that it was rather late for formalities, but Kyusuk explained that he meant that, despite how unreliable he was, she had gone so far out of her way for him. Rue admitted that she had genuinely enjoyed cooking for Kyusuk. She reminded him that he had once told her cooking for someone else was a way of expressing love, and she realized that putting the skills she had practiced to use while giving it her all for his sake had made her truly happy. Rue remembered how Kyusuk had once cooked for her after she collapsed with a fever and recalled how delicious the rice porridge had been. The moment felt just like back then, making her realize how comforting it was simply to have someone by her side while she was suffering. She quietly wished to become the one who stayed beside Kyusuk whenever he was going through difficult times. As she thought about it, Rue realized she truly wanted to live together with him. She wondered whether he would still insist on enduring everything alone before deciding to go ahead. After washing the dishes, Rue asked how Kyusuk was feeling. He replied that he had eaten, taken his medicine, and was already feeling much better. Relieved to hear that, Rue looked around the room. Kyusuk was usually very tidy, yet the apartment was a complete mess, making it obvious how busy he had been. When Kyusuk asked what she was doing, Rue explained that she wanted to do a little light cleaning while she was there. Kyusuk apologized for the apartment being so messy and dirty. Rue asked whether she should put a stack of papers onto a nearby shelf, and Kyusuk agreed. However, she noticed the shelf was already full. After opening a cabinet to see if she could store the papers there instead, Rue discovered a small ring box hidden inside the shelf space. The moment Kyusuk saw what she had found, he reacted in surprise. He suddenly rushed toward her, causing Rue to recoil in alarm. Before reaching her, Kyusuk stumbled and fell forward, clutching his head as he collapsed onto the floor. Rue remarked that his sudden movement had given her a headache as well. She apologized for finding the ring box. Still lying on the floor, Kyusuk admitted that she had figured it out. He confessed that it was the ring he had bought to propose to her. He explained that this was never how he had intended to give it to her. He had wanted to do it properly by taking her somewhere beautiful, holding a bouquet of flowers, and confidently proposing. He had wanted everything to be romantic, believing he first needed to become someone worthy enough to make that ideal a reality. Rue told him that he did not have to become someone worthy and did not need to change at all. Simply having him by her side was already enough for her. Kyusuk repeatedly apologized, admitting that although he had claimed he was working to gain confidence, all he had really done was distance himself from Rue despite her telling him all along that he was already enough. He explained that he had tried to become a worthy husband for her sake, but in the end he had only been doing it for himself because of his own insecurities and had not truly been thinking about Rue. He had wanted to respond to her feelings, yet instead he had been running away from them. Rue hugged him and refused to deny his desire to work hard on his own. Holding him close, she told him there was no need to apologize because the effort he put into everything was proof of his dedication. It made her happy to know he had devoted so much thought to doing all of this just for her. In her heart, Rue realized that Kyusuk was choosing to prioritize her feelings over his own ideals and everything else. She thought he was truly kind. Rather than another apology, there was something else she wanted to hear from him. She admitted that she wanted to be with him more. Kyusuk answered that he wanted to be with her as well. Crying openly, he confessed that he wanted to stay with her forever. Confidence was not something he could build so easily, but Rue mattered far more to him than any of that. Rue softly called his name. Kyusuk sat up straight and faced her. Even though he was not cool at all, and even though they were in a tiny rundown apartment, he no longer wanted to be apart from her. He wanted to live together with her. Holding out the ring box, he asked Rue to marry him. Rue looked at him gently before accepting the ring. With tears in her eyes, she thanked him. Seeing Kyusuk burning with fever and looking so miserable that day had made her realize that she truly wanted to be with him. Kyusuk replied that hearing those words made him truly happy. Rue smiled warmly and admitted that she was just as happy. She wrapped her arms around him tightly and insisted that they should get married right away. Kyusuk reacted in surprise, but Rue declared that they should get married immediately, that very second. As Kyusuk struggled to breathe from the tight embrace, Rue announced that they would cancel his apartment lease the following day and that he would move into her place. Kyusuk asked her to wait a little longer because he still wanted to save more money. He explained that he wanted to buy a house and hold a proper wedding ceremony someday, so he believed he needed to keep saving. That was why he had only bought the ring, since he had not been able to bring himself to say anything else yet. Rue realized that even after all the effort he had gone through to propose, his current lifestyle would have to continue for a little while longer. Kyusuk apologized. Rue admitted that they really did have many things to prepare before getting married and that they should set aside time to discuss their future together. For now, she told him to rest quietly, and Kyusuk softly agreed. Rue then reminded him to stop pushing himself until he broke down, to quit his night job immediately, to eat proper meals, and to get plenty of sleep. Kyusuk acknowledged each instruction as Rue guided him back onto the futon. She thanked him for the ring, wished him a good night's rest, and said goodnight. Kyusuk quietly wished her goodnight in return. Later, Kyusuk told Rue that he had quit his night shift. Rue noticed that he still looked exhausted, and Kyusuk explained that he had overworked himself at his main job the previous day and returned home very late. Rue reminded him to pace himself at work and stop pushing himself so hard. Kyusuk apologized. Rue then suggested that they set goals leading up to their wedding, with saving money as their first priority. Since Kyusuk had wanted to save up before getting married, she asked how much he had in mind. Kyusuk admitted that he still wanted to buy a house and hold a proper wedding ceremony someday, but his desire to be with Rue now was even stronger than those dreams. With his current finances, everything he hoped to achieve was still a long way off, and he could not bear to keep her waiting any longer. Apologizing for the request, he asked if he could move into her home so they could save money together from there. Rue found his proposal surprisingly realistic coming from him. Kyusuk explained that being practical about money was only natural. Unlike before, he had managed to build up decent savings, and because he was working, he believed he could shoulder part of their financial burden. Rue replied that simply having him there with her was already enough. Kyusuk objected, saying that would only make him feel like a freeloader. Rue reminded him that he had a job, so he was not freeloading, but Kyusuk insisted that he wanted to contribute and pay his share. Rue then suggested that since Kyusuk would handle most of the housework, she would cover the larger portion of their expenses. She initially proposed an 80-20 split, but Kyusuk countered with 60-40th. Rue suggested meeting in the middle with a 70-30th split, and Kyusuk finally accepted the compromise. The two continued discussing and planning their future together. After a while, Rue felt they had covered everything they needed for the time being. Kyusuk remarked that they had managed to put together quite a lot. Rue observed that once they had started talking, the list of things they wanted to do had simply kept growing. Kyusuk realized that it no longer felt as though they were only preparing for marriage, as they now had countless dreams they wanted to pursue together. Thinking about the life they would build, he realized just how happy he was. He thanked Rue for agreeing to marry someone like him. Rue dismissed the thought and told him that she was the one who should be thanking him. She reminded him that he no longer had to carry every burden alone because, from then on, they would face everything together and do their best side by side. Kyusuk happily agreed. Chapter 16 begins with Itsuki's colleagues asking whether he was really quitting. Itsuki confirmed that he was. He apologized for the sudden announcement and explained that it was due to personal circumstances. His co-workers admitted they would miss him and did not want him to leave. Itsuki apologized once again and thanked everyone for everything they had done for him. He added that if they ever had the chance to meet again, he hoped they would continue to treat him well. Kurumi let out a sigh and remarked that Itsuki remained obnoxious right until the very end. She told him to leave already, pointing out that he had only joined the workplace to stalk Rue in the first place and wishing he had quit long ago. Itsuki asked whether she had said something, surprising Kurumi. When she asked if he had actually heard her, Itsuki replied that anyone could hear her when she spoke that loudly. He added that he had been thinking he should come over and say goodbye to them as well. Itsuki approached Rue and thanked her for everything she had done for him up until then. Rue responded with equally sarcastic thanks. Itsuki noticed that although the words they exchanged sounded polite, the atmosphere around them was completely different. Kurumi asked why he was leaving now, reminding him that he had transferred there specifically to pursue Rue. Itsuki admitted that it was true and acknowledged that he had been chasing after Rue for a very long time. She had been his first love, but Kyusuk was the one who had taught him what love truly was. Wanting to cherish that experience and begin his life anew, he had decided to wipe the slate clean, since Rue had been the only reason he joined that workplace. That was also why he wanted to offer them a proper farewell before moving on. Noticing Kurumi's bored expression, Itsuki commented that she should not look so uninterested after being the one who asked him about it. Kurumi observed that people really could change. Itsuki explained that interacting with others allowed people to discover parts of themselves they would never have noticed alone. Kurumi remarked that quitting a job purely because of personal feelings was unusual and asked whether he actually had any plans afterward. Itsuki confidently replied that someone with his talent had countless opportunities waiting for him. Kurumi's brief concern immediately turned into annoyance. She told him to disappear already, and Itsuki thanked her for everything before saying his farewell. After he left, Kurumi admitted that it was a huge relief that Itsuki had finally given up on Rue for good, confessing that she had genuinely been worried about how things might turn out. Rue replied that rather than worrying about Itsuki giving up on her, she was more concerned about whether he had truly given up on Kyusuke. Kurumi told her not to worry because, if that ever happened, she would simply marry Rue instead. Rue replied that she sincerely hoped such a situation would never come to pass. Kurumi reassured her that no matter how much Rue changed, she would always love Rue the most. Rue pointed out that this was not really the issue, but she sincerely expressed her gratitude for everything Kurumi had done for her and thanked her for all of her support. Kurumi let out an awkward laugh, prompting Rue to ask what was so funny. Kurumi admitted that she had simply been thinking about how Rue was finally going to marry Kyusuke. She then asked whether the two of them were living together again. Rue confirmed that they were planning to buy furniture on their next day off. Kurumi remarked that discussing furniture before moving in together sounded wonderful and asked if she could come along. Rue immediately refused. Kurumi admitted that she had only wanted to experience what it felt like to live with Rue, but Rue firmly rejected the idea, explaining that it would only make things awkward for Kyusuke for no reason. Instead, Rue told Kurumi that her support at work was already more than enough and reminded her to rest properly on her days off. Kurumi accepted that answer and agreed. The scene shifts to a furniture store, where Rue declared that they were there to buy furniture. She decided they should begin with the most important item, bedding. Kyusuke asked whether she had anything specific in mind, and Rue suggested that a double bed would be best. Kyusuke was taken aback by the suggestion. When Rue asked if he had a problem with it, he pointed out that it meant they would be sleeping beside each other every single night. Rue confirmed that it was exactly what she meant. Kyusuke admitted that it felt like a bit much, explaining that he might become too nervous to sleep. Rue complained that he was acting like Kyusuke again and asked what he would suggest instead. After thinking for a moment, Kyusuke pointed toward a nearby bunk bed. He explained that they would technically still be sleeping in the same bed. Since Rue tossed and turned frequently in her sleep, he reasoned that she should take the safer bottom bunk while he slept on the top. Rue immediately rejected the idea, questioning what kind of married couple would sleep in a bunk bed. In her view, married couples normally bought a double bed. Kyusuke replied that although it might not be common, there were probably more couples than expected who chose different arrangements. Rue insisted that even if other options existed, a bunk bed was still strange, and she hated the idea. Kyusuke then suggested buying a sofa bed for the living room instead so they would not have to force themselves to sleep in the same room and could each have separate sleeping spaces. Rue argued that husbands and wives were supposed to sleep together, but Kyusuke pointed out that this was not necessarily true. He also observed that Rue had recently started thinking in a much more romantic way. Rue apologized, admitting that she had simply assumed that was how things were supposed to be, or rather, that it was what she personally wanted. Kyusuke understood and asked whether they should simply go with the double bed after all. However, he reminded her that she often fell out of bed and had even kicked him out of bed several times as well. The two fell silent while considering the problem. Rue eventually decided they should forget about buying a bed altogether. When Kyusuke asked why, she proposed laying two futons directly on the floor instead, eliminating any risk of falling off. Whenever they wanted to sleep together, they could place both futons in the same room, and whenever they wanted separate sleeping spaces, they could simply move them into different rooms. She asked what he thought, and Kyusuke admitted that it sounded like a brilliant idea. Rue decided they would go with that plan and concluded that they no longer had any reason to stay. Kyusuke noted that they had come all the way to buy furniture only to decide against buying any. As they walked past the shelves, something caught Kyusuke's attention. He wondered whether it was the new model of the robot vacuum Rue had at home. Rue confirmed that it was indeed the latest model of Tamago. Kyusuke remembered that Rue had been the one to name it Tamago. Rue explained that the new model could also wet mop, unlike Tamago, which only handled dry sweeping. She thought it might be nice to welcome the new model into the family as well. When Kyusuke asked if she intended to replace the old one, Rue explained that she did not. Since they were getting married, she thought Tamago should get married too. Kyusuke was left speechless. Rue reasoned that Tamago must be lonely by itself and suggested naming the new unit Tomato. Kyusuke reacted in surprise, and Rue explained that the name came from the tomato porridge he had made for her when she was sick with a fever. Kyusuke realized that he had unknowingly inspired the name. Rue then brought the conversation back to marriage by asking whether they were going to have a wedding ceremony. Surprised, Kyusuke asked whether she actually wanted one, and Rue immediately affirmed that she did. Confused, Kyusuke wondered why she had changed her mind. Rue noticed his expression and asked why he looked so puzzled. Kyusuke explained that she had once wanted to get the wedding over with as nothing more than a formality, so he had assumed that wanting a proper ceremony had only been his own selfish wish. Rue admitted that those had truly been her feelings at the time, and there was nothing to be done about that. However, she had changed because she was with him. Marriage was no longer just a formality to her. She wanted to create a memory that marked the day they became husband and wife and carry that memory with them forever. Kyusuk looked at her in surprise and realized that Rue had changed so much from the person she used to be, in the best possible way. Kyusuk remarked that perhaps Rue had started to resemble him. From Rue's perspective, however, she found it just as surprising that he had begun saying such realistic things. In that case, Kyusuk admitted that he had one selfish request he wanted her to hear. When Rue asked what it was, he confessed that he wanted a traditional Japanese wedding. He explained that he wanted the ceremony to be held in traditional Japanese attire. He had once seen a photograph from his grandmother's wedding and had admired it ever since. His grandmother had always been kind and cute, yet when she wore the pure white bridal kimono known as a shiromoku, she had looked mysteriously beautiful. That image had stayed with him throughout the years. Because of that memory, he believed Rue would look absolutely beautiful wearing one as well. Rue observed that Kyusuk really was a romantic at heart. She admitted that she was looking forward to seeing him in a hakama too. Kyusuk confessed that hearing that only made him feel embarrassed. Rue then asked if it would be alright for the wedding to be just the two of them. Kyusuk agreed, reasoning that his mother probably would not be interested anyway. Rue replied that the situation was much the same on her side. Since they would not be inviting guests or preparing a reception meal, she noted that the ceremony should remain fairly affordable. Instead, she suggested spending a little extra on the venue. Kyusuk asked if she was sure, and Rue assured him that it was only natural because it was such a special occasion. The scene shifted to the grounds of a shrine surrounded by trees. Dressed in a formal kimono and hakama, Kyusuk admitted that he was incredibly nervous. He had been so anxious that he could barely speak properly, even worrying the person helping him get dressed. He recalled adjusting his clothing because it felt too tight while the dresser asked whether it was uncomfortable. Frustrated with himself for behaving that way on such an important day, he told himself to calm down since Rue would be arriving soon. As he imagined her wearing a shiromoku as a bride, he urged himself to face reality and pull himself together. Before long, Rue arrived. Kyusuk looked up in surprise as she stood before him wearing a pure white shiromoku and bridal hood, surrounded by blooming flowers. His expression softened as he stared at her in speechless admiration. After quietly exhaling, the two stood facing one another in silence. Rue noticed that the look on his face clearly showed how beautiful he thought she looked. Kyusuk admitted that she was even more beautiful than he had imagined, drawing a soft laugh from Rue. She complimented him as well, thinking he looked even cooler than usual and confessing that, for a moment, she had been at a loss for words. She remarked that the outfit suited him perfectly. Taking his hand, Rue led him forward. Together they walked through the shrine grounds before participating in the ceremonial exchange of cups. They then exchanged rings and stood together, quietly savoring the moment. Later, they held up a framed photograph from their wedding day. Rue observed that they both looked much happier than they had before, and Kyusuk agreed. He added that Rue looked so gentle in the picture and noted with surprise that he himself was actually smiling. They placed the photograph beside an older one from an earlier photo session, and Kyusuk remarked that, during that first shoot, his eyes had been closed the entire time. Rue told him to stop comparing the two pictures. Rue then turned toward him and asked for a kiss. Kyusuk was caught off guard by the sudden request. Rue explained that they had never had the opportunity to kiss during the ceremony because the traditional Japanese wedding had been filled with rituals from beginning to end. Kyusuk reluctantly admitted that she was right, though he remained visibly flustered. Rue suggested that they could finally share a kiss that they were both genuinely happy about as a way of commemorating the occasion. Kyusuk agreed, and the two slowly drew closer together. As he prepared himself, Rue found it amusing that he seemed to be announcing his intentions immediately before kissing her. Kyusuk asked Rue to close her eyes and she quietly did so. They shared a gentle kiss with their faces close together. When Rue opened her eyes again, she noticed that Kyusuk still had his eyes shut and wondered how much longer he intended to keep them closed. Kyusuk quietly admitted that Rue was simply too close. Understanding his embarrassment, Rue decided to pull away. Letting out a soft sigh, she wondered when he would ever grow accustomed to moments like this. Covering his face with both hands, Kyusuk admitted that he probably never would. Rue moved closer to him and assured him that it was all right because she would remain by his side for the rest of their lives. She believed he would surely get used to it by the time they became grandparents. Looking at her, Kyusuk agreed that she was probably right. Rue then decided that, to help him become accustomed to it, they would continue practicing being affectionate together. Kyusuk reacted in disbelief at the idea. Rue gently took his hand, their fingers naturally interlacing, and suggested that they cook together that day. Kyusuk looked at her in surprise. The view shifted to their quiet living room, where their framed wedding photograph rested on the cabinet beside the television. As the years passed, Rue and Kyusuk grew older together. Rue sat looking out toward the garden when Kyusuke approached and, for a change, held out his hand, inviting her to prepare a meal together. Rue turned toward him, smiled softly, and accepted his hand. Together, they returned to the kitchen and began cooking side by side, just as they always had.